The silver-haired man walks away, mockingly noting that Calix the Listo begged for his life. He continues walking as the red-haired woman watches, her hands trembling with a sudden tap sounding.
Shivering, the red-haired woman realizes there is something she almost forgot as she stares ahead.
Smiling cruelly, the silver-haired man reveals the child she carries is Calix the Listo's blood.
He declares a change of heart while his gloved hand shifts over a weapon's hilt.
He draws a dark, cursed blade as the red-haired woman gazes up at him in horror. Telling her to die, the silver-haired man looms over her while she trembles in despair. A reflection of the killer appears in her eye during her final, terrifying moments. 10 years ago, a carriage traveled toward the desolate, cold eastern land to meet her fate. Looking out at the sunrise, she reflects on her disbelief at being married off so far. She accepts that her marriage was an imperial order, closing her eyes against the harsh reality. Noble guests gossip, wondering if she will survive the famine and monsters without losing her mind. Arriving at a ruined castle, she notes the wasteland is nothing like her home. Looking downcast, she wonders if she can ever adjust to such a miserable environment. A maid informs the new bride that the Duke is away on a monster subjugation hunt. The maid dismissively explains that the Duke has no time to waste on social pleasantries. On her wedding night, the red-haired woman wonders why she is left alone. She looks deeply hurt, questioning if her husband truly hates her presence that much. A lonely figure sits on a massive bed, swallowed by the silence of the cold room. An older woman in red demands to know the location of the girl's dowry. She claims the money was already spent on the territory, leaving the red-haired woman stunned. The red-haired woman tries to object, her hands clutched tightly in front of her. The woman in red glares with sharp intensity, challenging her to voice any complaints. Terrified, the red-haired woman quickly denies having any grievances, shrinking away from the glare. Servants mock her as the abandoned duchess, laughing that the Duke refuses to even see her. Working at a well, she overhears a maid scoffing at her disheveled and dirty appearance. Shivering, she thinks about how quickly the poverty and cold have worn down her spirit. During her second winter, a shout announces that Duke Calix Thaldisto has finally returned. Wounded soldiers limp past as onlookers debate if the high cost of the victory was worth it. The red-haired woman looks around frantically, hoping to finally spot her husband in the crowd. Calix Thaldisto arrives on horseback, looking stern and battle-worn as he enters the castle gates. Night falls over the castle, bringing a sense of heavy anticipation to the silent halls. Sitting on the bed, she wonders if she drank too much out of sheer nervousness. Her eyes fly open as a sudden loud bang echoes through the dark chamber. Calix sits on the bed with his back turned, causing her to breathlessly think his name. She cowers slightly as he settles in, her face flushed with anxiety and expectation. A soft rustle sounds as Calix places a hand on her shoulder, making her flinch. The scene shifts to the aftermath, where her hair rests on a pillow amid quiet rustling. Calix stands over the bed in the moonlight while she lies silent and still. He mutters that things are now irreversible, while she listens in secret with a pained expression. Under the covers, she reflects that her marriage is nothing like the romance in novels. Looking ill, she acknowledges their relationship is purely obligatory as she sits at her desk. Another woman reacts with shock when the red-haired woman reveals that she is pregnant. Her heart thumps with joy as she thinks fondly of the child growing within her. Sitting alone, she resolves to protect her child, feeling that she is no longer truly lonely. She wonders if the news will change things between her and her distant husband. Looking hopeful, she wonders if Calix will finally share her feelings about their baby. She sits beside Calix, who hides his face in distress as she prepares to speak. Calix clutches his head and shouts that he has no desire for a child. The red-haired woman is frozen in shock, her eyes wide as her hopes are crushed. Calix hides his face in distress while the red-haired woman watches him with silent sorrow. She wonders what she was expecting from him, her heart heavy with a growing sense of disappointment. A sudden, loud shout sounds as knights charge toward a magnificent castle engulfed in raging flames. A soldier shouts a command to capture the traitor as the siege of the castle continues.
The silver-haired man orders his men to drag Calix Thaldisto out from the burning palace ruins.
He announces that he has successfully captured both the Duke and his pregnant red-haired wife. Sitting on his throne, the ruler cold-bloodedly declares that their treason is punishable by death. Bound and terrified, the red-haired woman insists that the East has never committed such a crime. She cries that they are being framed, while Calix desperately claims his wife is entirely innocent.
A sudden, heavy thud sounds as Calix kneels on the red carpet, begging for her life.
She thinks his name in disbelief as she watches him discard his pride to save her. A haunting sense of despair fills the dark prison hallway as the scene shifts to their captivity. Sitting in the cold cell, she wonders if her distant husband was actually trying to protect her. She asks why he sacrificed himself, but the bruised and battered Calix remains stoically silent. She reflects that he might not be cold-hearted, wondering if she had misunderstood him all along. Calix looks away, stating that his actions were performed solely for the sake of his child. Confused, she questions why he mentions an heir now after spending months rejecting the baby. She confronts him about mentioning heirs now when he spent their whole marriage rejecting the child. A guard shouts that it is time for the execution, signaling the end of their conversation. The guards aggressively order them to get up and walk properly toward their grim fate. Trembling, she thinks that they cannot die like this, her heart racing with fear and desperation. She tearfully looks at Calyx, calling out to her darling as the weight of reality settles. Looking down, she makes a silent, desperate vow that she will protect her unborn child. An abstract, distorted energy fills the space as her final moments approach with sharp intensity.
She begs for mercy, pleading with her killer to at least spare the life of her child.
Looking at her with cold indifference, the killer refuses her final plea for her baby's life. Smiling cruelly, the silver-haired man tells her to just die as he prepares to strike.
A sudden wet squelch sounds as blood splatters against a background of dark, haunting lines.
Clutching her stomach, she thinks about how her life was filled with nothing but deep regrets. Lying on the ground, she reflects on her failure to act before her reality became miserable.
A bright, sparkling light glints in her eyes as her consciousness begins to fade away completely.
Waking up, she wonders what is happening as she finds herself in a bright, luxurious room.
She touches a delicate white lace veil, questioning why it is resting on her head. Feeling the rustle of fabric, she realizes she is also wearing a pristine white wedding dress. A quick pitter-patter sounds as she rushes to the ornate mirror to see her reflection.
Gasping in shock, the red-haired woman stares at her younger self in the ornate mirror. Looking at her reflection, she realizes with horror that she has returned to 10 years ago.
A portrait of the young noble Duke Calyx de Lisdo is framed elegantly amidst white flower petals.
Looking around the bridal chamber, she remains bewildered as she stands before the ornate vanity.
She looks at her reflection, her heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and intense anxiety.
Her eyes widen in a close-up as she hears a sudden, sharp knock from the door.
A loud rattle sounds as someone announces they are entering the private bridal chamber. A sudden bang echoes as an older, gray-haired woman in a maid uniform enters the room.
Carrying a laundry tub, the maid enters with a stern and cold expression on her face.
The red-haired woman recognizes her as the head maid who would eventually become her tormentor. The head maid curtly informs her that she must complete a request from the Great Duchess. Remembering the past, she recalls how both this woman and Belladonna had made her life miserable.
Looking at the maid, she reflects on the many years of suffering she endured in the dukedom.
Her heart thumps as she recalls the trauma of her death, her hands clutching her chest.
She sees a vision of the killer's blood-splattered face, haunted by his final cruel command.
Amber resolves to stop living in fear and regret as she prepares for her new life.
The head maid dismisses Amber's presence, while Amber recognizes a crucial opportunity to change her destiny. Stunned by the news, Amber questions why her husband intends to avoid her on their wedding night. The head maid flinches in surprise at the young duchess's sudden and assertive behavior. The head maid explains Calyx's immediate departure for a monster hunt, assuming Amber is ignorant of his duties. Amber reflects with frustration that facing this cold rejection again is even harder than the first time. She recalls how this night became a painful memory and realizes Calyx's departure was entirely unnecessary. Amber gasps in realization as she recalls a critical strategic detail from her previous timeline. She remembers that Calyx's absence left the castle vulnerable, allowing her enemies to gain total control.
Amber recalls how her lack of authority forced her into submission under Belladonna's manipulative rule.
Deciding to take control, Amber removes her veil and demands an immediate meeting with the Duke. The head maid explains the Duke's busy schedule, while Amber firmly asserts her new title. Amber insists on performing her wifely duties, which include greeting the knights before their difficult expedition. The head maid watches in bewilderment as Amber's previous fear transforms into an aura of command. The head maid notes with shock that the Duchess seems to have become a completely different person. Marching with purpose, Amber's determined footsteps echo through the halls of the desolate the Lisdo Castle. While walking, Amber silently reflects on the deep hatred she once held for her cold surroundings. She admits that despite her resentment, seeing her home reduced to ashes was a devastating sight. A hollow boom echoes as the head maid leads Amber toward the gates where the knights gather. The head maid scoffs internally, believing Amber is too naive to realize her marriage is unwanted. The maid anticipates Amber's terror, expecting the Duke's cold demeanor to crush her newfound confidence.
Her heart thumps as Amber prepares to face the young, battle-hardened version of Calyx once more. Amber pushes aside her fear of Calyx's hatred, focusing solely on the mission to save her future.
Calyx reacts with cold irritation at being interrupted during his final preparations for the monster expedition. Amber stares in silent shock as her husband's youthful, unscarred face brings back many memories.
Breathless, Amber struggles to reconcile this stern young man with the version of him she once knew.
Calyx stands before her, appearing remarkably young and regal in his dark, ornate military uniform. Amber's heart flutters as she realizes her husband is far more handsome than she previously remembered. She calculates that Calyx is currently only 24, years before their actual first meeting in the past.
Amber scolds herself to stay focused, reminding her heart that this is still the same man.
An awkward silence stretches between the couple as they stand face to face under the vast starry sky. Amber politely greets her husband, initiating a conversation that never happened in her original timeline.
Amber introduces herself as his wife and explains she came to personally bid him a safe journey.
Completely caught off guard by her kindness, Calix stammers in confusion at his bride's unexpected gesture.
Calix tries to maintain his distance, bluntly stating that her presence at his departure is unnecessary. Amber voices her disappointment, gently calling him out for planning to abandon her without a single word. The stern Duke's composure cracks as he desperately tries to find an excuse for his avoidant behavior. Amber watches in confusion as Calix becomes visibly embarrassed by her direct and honest confrontation. Amber is stunned to see the supposedly cold Duke looking so vulnerable and easily flustered by her. Amber warns herself not to be swayed while requesting a private, urgent discussion with her husband. Calix remains quiet for a long moment, staring at Amber with a look of deep, unreadable contemplation. Resuming his authoritative tone, Calix invites Amber to speak her mind before he departs for the war. Amber makes a bold plea, directly asking her husband to cancel his expedition and stay with her. Please provide the text you would like me to read. Calix stares at Amber in total silence, stunned by her bold request for him to stay. Calix abruptly turns around, suggesting they move their private conversation away from the prying eyes of his men. The couple sits in a dimly lit room, the silence between them heavy with tension and anticipation.
Amber reiterates her request with firm determination, emphasizing her desire for him to remain at the castle.
Calix argues that his presence is vital for the territory's safety, attempting to justify his immediate departure.
Amber shocks Calix by asking if his mission is simply a convenient excuse to escape their union. Amber explains her use of her father's intelligence network to investigate market conditions before her arrival. She reveals the monster threat is minimal, admitting her investigation was motivated by her past trauma. In the quiet chamber, Amber continues her explanation while Calix listens with a somber, silent expression. Amber flatly tells the Duke that she knows his personal presence on the expedition is unnecessary. Calix looks away and touches his face, quietly acknowledging her statement while appearing somewhat flustered. Amber acknowledges her husband's lack of interest in their marriage and herself with a calm gaze.
A rattle sounds as Calix reacts to Amber pointing out his absence from their wedding events.
Amber implores him to stay and help her adjust to the castle instead of leaving her. Calix remains silent, his head bowed as he processes his wife's direct and emotional request. The couple sits in heavy silence, Amber's firm gaze fixed on her husband's hesitant posture. Amber worries internally that Calix might reject her request despite its reasonableness based on local customs. She reflects that failing to change his mind now will lead to a miserable future.
Clenching her hands, Amber resolves to convince him as Calix finally agrees to change his plans. Calix stares directly at her, announcing that he will only send his knights on the expedition.
Amber is visibly stunned, gasping at how easily her husband conceded to her bold request. Calix prepares to depart the room, asking if their talk is over, but Amber calls him back. Standing up quickly, Amber urgently asks her husband for one more favor before he leaves. Remembering the past, she recalls how conservative Eastern customs made her accept his informal speech. She reflects on how being addressed casually made her feel more like a subordinate than a wife. Amber firmly requests that he use honorifics with her to ensure her respect within the household. Calix looks stunned and slightly embarrassed, his mouth slightly open as he processes her unexpected demand. Amber maintains a stoic and determined expression, waiting for her husband's reaction to her request. Amber nervously laughs in her head, wondering if asking for formal speech was going too far. Despair begins to cloud Amber's thoughts as she fears the cultural differences might be too great. Calix looks down with a blush on his cheek, hesitating as he tries to find his words. The Duke stammers a single word, his face still turned away in deep embarrassment and contemplation. Calix agrees to her wish, surprising Amber by addressing her with the formal honorifics she requested.
The headmaid watches from a distance, suspiciously wondering if the Duke is scolding his new bride.
Calix leads Amber out of the room, both of them appearing tense as they face the guards. A quick tap sounds as Calix stops before his men, preparing to make an important announcement.
Calix surprises his gathered knights by announcing that he will no longer be joining the expedition.
A murmur of shock ripples through the group of knights as they process their leader's decisions. Calix assigns Sir Zeit to lead the knights, while his men acknowledge the order with a shout.
Calix tells Amber to rest, promising to see her in the morning with a respectful address.
The knights and headmaid are frozen in shock at the Duke's sudden change in behavior. Overwhelmed by the success of her confrontation, Amber sinks to the floor in a moment of relief. Amber repeats his parting words, stunned that he actually used formal honorifics as she had asked. Looking up, Amber reflects on the surprising character of the young Duke Calix Thalsdo she just faced. She contrasts the young, unscarred man before her with the cold, battle-worn version from her past life.
Amber shakes her head vigorously, deciding to push thoughts of Calix aside to focus on her mission.
She resolves to secure her position in the castle, which is currently filled with her enemy's loyalists.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the castle as the sun begins to rise over the mountains. Observing the dawn, Amber realizes it is time for the laundry maids to begin their daily work. Amber stands up with renewed energy, determined to start her plan as the new day begins. With a look of fierce determination, Amber decides to go and find her one true ally. A flashback shows Amber sitting in a dark room, remembering Gina as her only past comfort. Her attention is taken by a sudden pause and clatter as Genia stops working and Amber glances. Genia introduces herself with a gentle smile as a maid working in the castle's laundry section. The humble maid places a hand on her chest, appearing concerned for the well-being of the Duchess. Genia offers Amber some bread, expressing her simple desire to provide comfort to the struggling woman. Her face buried in her hand, Amber appears deeply distressed and overwhelmed by her current situation. Amber seeks answers from the maid, questioning if she erred or why the Duke avoids her. The black-haired maid explains the Duke's frequent absences are usually due to necessary monster subjugations.
Amber listens intently as the maid reveals a royal edict also summoned the Duke to war.
A small sob escapes Amber as she hunches over the table, her hand covering her mouth. Running with determination, Amber resolves to find the girl first and secure her as an ally.
Amber stops suddenly as she hears something, her eyes wide with shock at the unexpected sound.
A group of maids gathers nearby and one points out Amber's location with a loud shout. Recognizing a chillingly familiar voice, Amber turns around with a look of pure, unadulterated shock. A woman in an elegant red gown demands to know why Amber is loitering without working. Standing with her back turned, Amber silently observes the newcomer as the sun sets behind the towers. Amber grits her teeth, a bead of sweat rolling down her face as she suppresses her frustration. Facing the woman, Amber politely suggests that the stranger should introduce herself before asking for others' names. The woman in red reacts with fury, questioning the audacity of anyone speaking so disrespectfully to her. Narrowing her eyes, the woman in red gives Amber a suspicious and deeply judgmental glare. Realizing the woman has mistaken her for a mere maid, Amber clenches her fist in quiet anger.
The woman in the red gown haughtily clarifies that she is certainly not a member of the staff.
Surrounded by blooming lilies, Amber regally introduces herself as the castle's new mistress, Amber Thallistow. The woman in red offers a tight, knowing smile as she finally identifies the new Duchess. Amber maintains a serene and polite smile, masking the growing tension between her and the older woman. The older woman offers a disingenuous apology, mockingly asking for forgiveness for her previous rude behavior. Introducing herself as Belladonna Thallistow, she informs Amber that the new Duchess must learn from her. Amber's expression darkens as she identifies Belladonna as the person who stole her wedding dowry.
Belladonna seethes with rage, questioning the headmaid's previous report that the girl was easily cowed.
Amber observes the older woman's volatile reaction, silently noting the fierce intensity of her new opponent. Fanning herself aggressively, Belladonna challenges Amber's confidence and warns her that such bravado has limits.
Belladonna arrogantly claims that according to Eastern tradition, the eldest family member dictates all important matters.
Walking past with a smirk, Belladonna announces she will use Amber's dowry to manage the territories. Belladonna demands Amber's compliance, while Amber privately scoffs at the woman's transparent greed and lies. With a mocking wink, Belladonna tells Amber not to be sad about her inevitable loss of luxury.
Belladonna continues her arrogant chatter, claiming Amber will soon lose the lifestyle she once enjoyed.
Amber remains stoic while noting how Belladonna tries to humiliate her in front of the watching servants. A subtle, sharp clench of Amber's hands betrays the intensity of the anger she is currently suppressing.
Addressing the woman as mother, Amber acknowledges Belladonna's supposed devotion to local culture and law.
Belladonna reacts with confusion as Amber suddenly offers a sweet, knowing smile during their tense confrontation. Amber explains that imperial law, which supersedes local custom, dictates a wife's property belongs to her husband.
Belladonna is stunned into silence as Amber suggests she should merely offer advice as the previous Duchess.
Overcome with rage at the insult, Belladonna's hand shakes as she violently squeezes her closed fan. A manic, high-pitched laugh erupts from Belladonna as her composure completely shatters in the garden. Declaring that Amber requires immediate discipline, Belladonna raises her hand to deliver a violent blow. A sudden, sharp slap sounds as the laundry maid rushes forward to shield Amber from the strike. Horrified, Amber rushes to the fallen maid's side to check if she is badly hurt. Belladonna demands the maid move, threatening her with a whip for interfering with her desired punishment.
Belladonna promises a severe flogging if the maid continues to protect Amber, who watches in mounting anger.
Amber suddenly shouts for the violence to stop, her face shadowed with an intense, burning rage.
Belladonna haughtily asserts her right as mistress to punish any servant within her own castle walls.
Amber's heart thumps with fury as she asks if being mistress justifies using thoughtless, cruel violence. Trembling with impotent rage, Belladonna strides away while warning Amber that she will soon regret her defiance. Amber gasps in shock as she looks up and sees someone unexpected standing nearby in the garden. Duke Calix stands motionless with his knights, his stern expression unreadable as he observes the aftermath. Bella spins around in shock, gasping as she questions what Calix is doing that. A sharp turn follows as Calix sternly demands an explanation for the chaotic scene. The auburn-haired elder woman hesitates, her eyes narrowing as she prepares a deceptive response. Bella claims she was merely having a minor disagreement with Amber regarding her dowry.
Amber looks down in silence, wondering why Calix has suddenly decided to intervene now.
Memories surface of Calix never opposing his father or Bella in his previous life. Calix scrutinizes the elder woman with a piercing gaze, his expression unreadable but intense. A bead of sweat traces Bella's face as she feels the weight of Calix's judgment. Bella tries to downplay the situation, explaining she only wanted to help manage Amber's dowry.
Calix asks with a cold tone if Bella intended to use his wife's dowry herself.
A visible shiver runs through Bella as she reacts to Calix's unusually harsh and accusatory tone.
Bella pleads for Calix to listen as he continues to press her about the dowry.
Calix firmly declares that he will discuss the matter of the dowry with his wife.
Bella argues that Amber is a newcomer and thus her problem to handle and manage.
Looking up at her son, the elder woman desperately seeks his agreement to her authority. A heavy step sounding as Calix walks past, warning Bella not to form.
A quick extend sounding as Calix offers his gloved hand, asking his wife to stand.
Amber and her maid look up from the floor, stunned by the Duke's unexpected assistance.
Bella is appalled by Calix's defiance, her face contorting with rage at his sharp tone.
Amber stares at him in bewilderment, questioning why he is acting so uncharacteristically helpful.
Calix maintains his blunt expression, leaving Amber to wonder about the reason for his change.
Amber notes that despite his actions, the Duke still appears as indifferent as he ever was.
A sudden realization strikes Amber as she observes the Duke's face more closely than before.
Amber realizes this Calix lacks the war scars that defined him in her previous life.
She recalls how the atmosphere around him grew much colder during the war years ago.
A close-up shows the massive, jagged scar that once dominated the Duke's muscular back. Amber remembers him as a battle-hardened beast, his body covered in the marks of war.
A soft ba-dump sounding as Amber realizes the man before her is still relatively unburdened.
Amber notices Jenya is struggling, realizing the maid likely injured her ankle during the fall.
Calix addresses the brown-haired boy nearby, asking where the injured maid can receive medical care.
A quick reach sounding as the boy offers to lead the way for the group. Amber suddenly stops in her tracks, her long red hair trailing as she pauses. Calix looks over his shoulder, stating his intention to speak with his wife alone first. Looking at the ornate floor, Amber expresses regret for causing such a public scene. Amber tries to explain herself, claiming she simply had tasks she needed to complete.
Calix reminds her that he owns the castle, so she should simply ask him first.
Amber is incredulous, finding the idea of asking the Duke for a favor completely absurd.
Amber flinches as she thinks to herself that asking him for anything is utterly impossible.
A quick glance follows as Calix asks for clarification regarding her sudden and visible hesitation.
Amber thinks about how this version of Calix knows nothing of their complicated past life.
Calix surprises her by promising to return her entire dowry to her without any delay.
Stunned, Amber asks for clarification, unable to believe he would surrender the wealth so easily.
Calix hesitates, explaining that life in the East is difficult for a woman without wealth. Amber is amazed, her orange eyes reflecting her shock at his unexpected concern and generosity. Clenching her fist, Amber assumes he thinks she only wants the money for personal luxuries. A sharp stand-up sounding as Amber decides to leave and check a morgade. Calix begins to speak about the maid's condition, but he is quickly cut off. Amber's expression turns cold as she dismisses his concerns and prepares to depart. A loud bang sounding as the heavy wooden door is slammed shut with great force. Rhythmic click-clack sounds as Calix stands alone, staring at his empty and outstretched hand. Calix slumps into his chair with a sudden plop, letting out a weary sigh while covering his eyes. He broods with his hand over his face, troubled by the fact that Amber skipped breakfast.
Calix recalls her claim that she could never ask him for anything, concluding she does not trust him.
He gazes away in deep thought, reflecting on the events that transpired earlier that day at dawn.
A flashback begins with a heart-thumping ba-dump as Calix sees Amber in her white wedding dress for the first time. Amber looks radiant and happy in her bridal attire as another ba-dump sounds in Calix's chest.
A rhythmic ba-dump continues as the scene shifts to the massive, sprawling castle nestled against the mountains.
Standing before large doors, Calix hears a sudden, resonant clang as a guard delivers the Emperor's refusal to meet.
Calix pleads with the guards, exclaiming, "I just can't go back like this." The guards inform him that it is His Majesty's will for him to leave, but Calix shouts, "Your Majesty, this year monsters was so intense that I really need the Imperial family's help."
Frustration boils over as Calix strikes the wall with a heavy kung, his face flushed with deep anger. A dark, grainy texture signifies a transition as the story delves deeper into the history of the East. The land was once prosperous, a time when the Eastern territories were filled with lush, purple vineyards.
Now the lands are barren and devastated by persistent droughts and monster waves, leaving the East desperate for Imperial help.
A chessboard illustrates the Emperor's horrific treatment of the East, prompting the question of why help is denied.
A younger colleague sits at a desk playing a focused game of chess against a scarred veteran knight. The young boy notes that despite their plight, the Duke's people have no interest in seeking the throne.
The scarred man remains silent, looking down with a somber expression as he processes the child's serious observation.
Moving a piece with a sharp tack, the boy suggests one only feels threatened by an opponent's power. Calix reflects on how he always had to bow to the Imperial family while desperate for even minimal support. With a heavy tulsuck, Calyx leans against a window, wondering how long he must endure such a life. He walks alone through a grand arched hallway, thinking he is merely waiting for everything to end.
A gentle breeze sounds with a soft salang as Calyx catches sight of someone through a nearby window.
Calyx notices the smell of flowers and the arrival of spring as happy laughter echoes from the garden.
From a distance, he sees the back of a red-haired woman as ladies admire her beauty.
Amber beams with joy while holding a bouquet, agreeing that the flowers are beautiful amidst cheerful laughter.
Calyx's heart gives a sudden rhythmic badump as he watches the vibrant scene from the balcony above. A close-up reveals Amber's bright orange eyes and warm smile, accompanied by another heavy badump.
Pure white lilies bloom beautifully in the garden, bathed in the soft light of the spring sun.
Calyx looks down curiously as a man nearby notices something and exclaims for others to look.
Aristocratic women discuss the newcomer, asking, "Did you say her name is Amber Light? And the second lady of an aristocrat from the Light family, right?" Another odds, "Oh, the middle one," while one mentions her family's great wealth.
Calyx continues to listen intently, acknowledging that what they are saying matches the information he had previously heard.
With a quick and steady Joe Buck footsteps, he walks away, thinking she is completely different from himself.
Time passes as snow covers the tree branches, signaling the arrival of a cold, harsh winter at the castle. Calyx looks stunned and wide-eyed, repeating the name Amber Light as if processing a shocking revelation.
He sits back with a heavy tulsuck, clutching his head while wondering what the Emperor is thinking.
Calyx worries about how he will provide for her, fearing he cannot even afford a single piece of lace.
A carriage arrives with a clattering deal kayong, and a woman's foot steps onto the pavement with a firm tack. Amber clenches her hands with a nervous kokok while Calyx gives her a subtle sidelong Hilgum glance.
Calyx swallows hard with a gultuk sound as Amber turns her head with a quick duribon and whick.
Walking with a steady geobuck, Calyx decides to head to the field to hunt monsters for their valuable course.
In the present, Calyx sighs realizing why Amber thinks poorly of him and admitting he hates himself.
Amber tends to a maid with a bruised face, telling her to rest for a day to recover. The maid smiles and breathes a sigh of hoo, offering a quiet thank you to the Duchess.
Amber prepares a wet cloth, wringing it out with a strong quack sound into a wooden bowl.
Gently placing the cloth, Amber tells the startled Genia to turn her head so she can help.
Genia protests in surprise, telling Amber she doesn't have to do such things for a lower-ranked maid.
Calyx reflects on the Emperor's horrific treatment and why the imperial family refuses to aid the Eastern people.
Belladonna fans herself haughtily, claiming the Great Duchess has influence everywhere, both inside and outside the castle.
Genia squirms uncomfortably as she begins to voice a concern regarding the intimidating nature of the Great Duchess.
Amber realizes no one can depend on Belladonna, surprised she never knew Genia felt this way in her past.
Amber questions why she's being given this information at the specific time.
A maid slams her hands down with a bang, pleading for the Duchess to take her in.
The maid explains her belief that Amber has the power to change the castle after their encounter.
A soft but dumb sounds as Amber realizes the impact of her actions on those around her.
Amber reflects on how she is acting much differently now compared to her past life.
She recalls the painful memories of her former self who did nothing but cry with a sob.
Reaching out, Amber takes the maid's hands and offers a sincere and gentle thank you.
The maid looks up with tearful eyes and calls Amber her grace in a trembling voice.
Amber helps the maid stand, promising herself that she will definitely succeed in this new life.
Transitioning to mealtime, Amber decides to eat first before organizing her next set of plans.
A firm step echoes through the hall as the black-haired Duke enters the dining room.
Calyx pauses in surprise at Amber's presence while she reacts with a startled exclamation.
Amber watches the Duke approach, wondering if he usually eats his meals in the dining hall.
A soft clink rings out as a sophisticated dish is served for the couple's dinner. A lavish feast is spread with a clatter, causing Amber to ask about the extravagant display.
Calyx explains he was instructed to put his heart and soul into the meal for them.
Shimmering with surprise, Amber wonders if the Duke prepared such a grand meal specifically for her. A clink sounds as they dine, while Amber notes they are behaving too politely for a couple. Amber brings a fork to her lips, carefully tasting the food laid out before her. Calyx watches her eat with a subtle, calm expression, his gaze resting on the red-haired Duchess.
A clean sound signifies that the meal has been finished, leaving the plate completely empty.
Satisfied, Amber thinks it is the first time she has enjoyed such a meal in the East.
Calyx sips his wine thoughtfully, his expression unreadable as he looks toward the table.
Amber breaks the silence, telling the Duke she is aware of his worries for the territory.
She looks at him with a soft gaze and expresses her gratitude for his concerns. When he fails to respond, Amber feels embarrassed and her spirits begin to droop in silence. A rhythmic badum thumps in her chest as she observes the Duke's strangely still posture.
Calyx suddenly blushes a deep red while holding his wineglass, looking completely flustered and embarrassed.
He lets out a series of gulps as he drinks rapidly, making Amber wonder if he's drunk.
Amber asks if the Duke is feeling all right after his sudden change in behavior and appearance.
Letting out an ahem, Calyx recovers enough to state that he is fine while avoiding eye contact.
Amber's heart goes badoom as she thinks he's acting weird and wonders if he's the same person.
Calyx hesitates with a quiet appearing unsure of how to proceed with the conversation.
He explains that the expedition team will depart tomorrow with Sir Zayit leading the mission. Amber notes the expedition's popularity and believes the knight's skills will make the task easy. A somber title card marks the history of the Kale Kingdom War over a snowy graveyard.
After the war, the ducal house began to fall apart as devastation gripped the entire region.
Calix recalls the Emperor's orders, noting that they cannot avoid the conflicts forced upon their house.
He explains that they must grow stronger to heal the scars left by the previous war.
Amber listens intently, her expression turning serious as she processes the Duke's grim explanation.
She begins to protest, wanting to clarify that her intentions were not meant to be offensive.
Calix tells her to ignore Eastern issues and just live a quiet life within the castle. Standing with a radiant glow, Amber asks if he'd still say that if she could save them.
With a determined gaze, Amber declares she has a way to solve the East's food shortage.
Calix is stunned into a complete and utter silence by her bold and confident proclamation.
Amber recalls a strange phenomenon that began 50 years ago, its cause remaining a mystery. The fertile eastern land was devastated after a sharp decrease in precipitation left the soil sick.
Calix clutches his head, admitting that no one has identified the cause of the land's decay.
Amber acknowledges that her claims sound ridiculous but remains firm in her attempt to help.
She thinks of a clue to the food shortage that will be discovered 8 years from now.
Amber reflects that she should be able to recall enough from her memory, noting the East situation had already deteriorated irrevocably.
Amber thinks about meeting a specific child, visualized as a light brown-haired girl clutching a large book.
Amber suggests inviting one person, but Calix interrupts, asserting he will take care of the East's problems.
Calix tells his wife she doesn't have to interfere, looking at her with a steady and serious gaze.
Amber looks completely enraged, her orange eyes widening as a dark aura of frustration surrounds her. Amber asks His Grace if he truly thinks of her as nothing more than a mere ornament.
Standing up, Amber declares she is a person, not an ornament, shocking Calix with her sudden outburst. Amber asserts she isn't a trinket the Duke can just carelessly lock away inside of a cabinet.
A thud and throb sound as Calix protests her claim, calling it absurd and questioning how he could.
Calix clenches his fist tightly on the table while beginning to explain his true intentions to her.
Thoughts reveal he wanted her to live as if she were in the West, hiding the East's reality.
Calix revealed he feared her reaction if she discovered everything about the East and his true self.
Amber looks startled as a ring falls with a clang, symbolizing his fear that she might leave.
Calix gasps with surprise as Amber calls out to him, snapping him back to the present moment.
With a nervous gulp, Calix raises his head to meet the red-haired woman's determined and focused gaze.
Amber asserts that right now she is present as the Duke's wife and the Duchess of Thelesdo.
Calix looks at her silently against a backdrop of blooming roses, his expression unreadable but attentive.
Looking down slightly, Amber tells the Duke that she is begging him to listen to her request. Amber asks Calix to send an invitation to Lady Freya while he wonders why she is begging him. Calix turns his head with a quick turn, blushing a deep red as he processes her request. Calix asks if she once said she wouldn't ask anything of him, while Amber wonders about his expression. Calix pouts while asking if she thought he was untrustworthy, leaving a flustered Amber completely baffled.
Amber doesn't remember saying such a thing and wonders what on earth he is talking about now.
Clutching his forehead, Calix dismisses his own words, telling her to just forget it ever happened.
Amber brightly promises to write as many invitations as he would like for their upcoming important meeting. Calix wonders to himself why he is specifically writing an invitation to Lady Freya right now.
Amber beams, explaining that the lady is an essential clue to finally solving the region's food shortage.
Calix's heart gives a rhythmic badump as he watches Amber's radiant and confident smile from across the table.
Several soft badump sounds echo as a flustered Calix sits alone, his face flushed with deep embarrassment.
An ah sounds as Calix looks away, Amber stating she will communicate through a servant if needed.
Amber laughs, suggesting this method is the easiest way for both of them since he is busy.
A clench sounds as Calix looks down, appearing frustrated or perhaps dejected by her distant formal tone.
Amber smiles gently and says she understands, closing the conversation on a polite and calm note.
Wavy lines fill the background as Calix stares down, agreeing to proceed with the plan she proposed.
A thud sounds as Amber staggers into her study, moving quickly to process the strange encounter.
Amber plops into her chair with a sigh, wondering since when Calix became the type to pout.
A close-up highlights Calix's pouting expression, which Amber finds completely unexpected and hard to believe.
Amber reflects that in her past life, she never actually looked him in the face properly. She decides not to worry about useless things since Calix is at least listening to her now.
Amber focuses on the scrolls laid out on her desk, knowing what she must do next.
A slide sounds as Amber unties a scroll, her mind shifting toward the management of her dowry. Looking at a chest filled with jewels, Amber ponders the best way to utilize her personal wealth.
A quick knock-knock sounds at the door and Amber calmly tells the visitor to come in.
A gray-haired butler named Heinrich Jasper enters the room after a steady step, asking if she called.
Heinrich Jasper has served for 3 generations and remained loyal even when treason turned the dukedom upside down.
Amber reflects that although she and Bella were always being compared, Heinrich never took anyone's side.
Amber looks at Heinrich thoughtfully, considering his long history of service and neutrality within the ducal house.
Amber smiles brightly amidst roses, declaring that the situation will change significantly from this moment forward.
Amber calls out to Heinrich, her expression shifting to one of serious and decisive intent for their plans.
Amber states that her dowry jewels should be used entirely at the disposal of the suffering territories.
Heinrich Jasper looks stunned as he asks if Amber truly intends to use her entire dowry.
Amber smiles calmly and explains that she would like to have a discussion about it.
A visible hesitation overcomes Heinrich as he stands amidst the library shelves, unsure how to respond.
Amber thinks it's hard to believe a newcomer while tying her ribbon since Bella's healthy. She reflects on how the people in the territory perceive those from the West.
Heinrich admits that because of those perceptions, it is difficult for him to trust her easily.
A map illustrates how lifestyle and culture vary greatly between the empire's east and west.
Westerners who made fortunes through business are shown as open-minded and lively socialites.
Meanwhile, the conservative East remains unable to understand the mentality of those from the West.
People whisper judgmental comments about Amber's Western origin and her perceived extravagant lifestyle. Amber reflects on being harassed by stereotypes, thinking about the heavy burden of regional prejudice.
She recalls seeing ruins and starving people, valuing their lives more than her own lavishness.
Heinrich's expression softens as he listens to the Duchess's sincere explanation.
Heinrich says he understands her intentions but notes the duchy's position regarding the 5 million star.
He notes selling the dowry would yield enough to manage the fief for 3 years. A nervous gulp sounds as Heinrich realizes she wants to do all of that for serfs.
Amber asks Heinrich if he is now willing to help her achieve her goals. Bowing deeply, Heinrich asks the Duchess what specific tasks he needs to do for her.
Amber says they will discuss who to sell to and how the funds will be used.
Amber holds a document and suggests they go over the plan in more detail.
A tap sounds as Amber points to a scroll, identifying the areas requiring the most attention. She notes that with this amount, the most critical areas of the territory are settled.
Amber suddenly stops, remembering another important detail that she needs to mention.
Amber tells Heinrich to prepare food, clothes, blankets, and animal fat for the cold serfs.
Noticing his stare, Amber asks if there is something wrong with her specific instructions.
Heinrich quickly clarifies that he is simply impressed by how skilled and knowledgeable she is.
Amber logically states it is normal to research the place where she would be living.
Heinrich glances at her, thinking he was worried if she could manage the house's affairs.
The red-haired woman remains lost in deep thought as she considers her next move.
Letting out a who, Heinrich thinks that his previous worries were likely completely unnecessary.
The sun sets over the castle towers, painting the evening sky in bright orange hues.
Amber thinks that almost everything is handled, but one specific thing still vexes her.
Amber asks about weapon trading, and Heinrich explains they deal with Count Nasto.
A shake sounds as Heinrich clarifies there are no other nearby places to receive weapons.
Narration explains that Count Nasto would surely interfere if they attempted to trade elsewhere.
Amber looks serious as she contemplates the difficult situation surrounding the region's weapon supply.
She thinks they must procure weapons for future wars despite the Knight's pride.
Amber wonders if they can withstand the coming war with their current worn-out weapons.
A memory shows a man shouting at Amber, asking how she could do this to him.
The woman in the memory looks distressed, admitting that it was fine in her father's eyes.
The man argues that Natasha is his most precious person, which another man denies.
Amber runs away as a voice calls her name, her hair flowing behind her.
Amber sighs, thinking of a deal without Nasto's influence, even at a long distance.
A tap sounds as she dips her quill, deciding that the method is unavoidable.
A rhythmic scritch echoes through the library as Amber writes late into the way.
Amber walks through the dark hall with a candle, exhausted from her long day.
A flutter sounds as she spots Calyx by the window, surprised by his presence.
A clock sounds as Calyx shuts the window, his gaze fixed on the moonlight night.
Amber flinches as Calyx approaches, a steady step echoing through the silent, dark hallway.
Calyx and Amber stand together in the dark, an unreadable tension lingering between them. The black-haired man asks Amber if she was waiting for him in the darkness.
Calyx remains silent as his deep blue eye fixates on the red-haired woman.
Calyx confirms he was indeed waiting for his wife, standing across from a stunned Amber.
Shocked by his admission, Amber can only let out a soft and bewildered gasp.
A turn sounds as Calyx tells Amber not to wait in the future and sleep.
A flop sounds as Amber wonders why he waited when they were meant to live separately.
Glancing back at the man, Amber feels a strange tension filling the quiet, moonlit bedroom.
Amber's heart gives a sudden but dump as she struggles to process the Duke's unexpected behavior. Calyx gazes out at the moon, framed by the ethereal beauty of blooming white lilies.
Standing with his shirt partially undone, Calyx appears troubled while clutching his hands together tightly.
A gasp and twip sound as Amber flinches, turning away from the Duke in surprise. Amber desperately tells herself to pull it together since the man before her is Calyx.
A scrunch sounds as a blushing Calyx attempts to explain himself, clearly feeling quite flustered.
Amber recalls Calyx saying he didn't want to share a bed, her expression turning somber.
A stand sounds as Amber decides she understands and moves to leave the shared bag.
A step sounds as a confused Calyx calls out to his wife while she walks away.
A drop sounds as Amber prepares a separate sleeping space, determined to keep her distance. A curl-up sounds as Amber bids him goodnight while settling onto the chaise. Amber pauses, wondering what's happening as she reflects on Calix's awkward and unusual behavior. Amber realizes this is Calix's first time in such a situation as he stands there blushing.
A sudden blush colors Calix's face as he reacts to the confusing and intimate atmosphere.
Amber asks why he's surprised and requests that he sit down with her for a moment. A creak sounds as Calix stiffly sits down, his posture rigid and his expression very tense.
A stiff sigh sounds as the two sit together, the air heavy with their mutual awkwardness.
Amber tells Calix to relax, explaining they don't need to do anything difficult for each other.
A mumble sounds as Calix repeats her words about acting while she discusses their morning appearance.
Amber explains their proximity as a formality to prevent rumors about their first night together.
A slide sounds as Calix questions her, his voice low as he processes her cold logic. A creak sounds as Calix asks how she knows he doesn't want to sleep with her.
A hesitate sounds as a flustered Amber struggles to find a response to his blunt question.
Amber reflects on the past, assuming he went to war because he disliked their first night. Amber thinks her logic is sound and suggests that he isn't the only one feeling uncomfortable. Looking away, Calix admits that he doesn't like the current situation either, feeling quite troubled.
Amber decides it's best to be clear, hoping to resolve the misunderstanding between them once.
Amber tells the Duke not to let his dislike for her weigh on his conscience.
Amber stands up, announcing she'll sleep in the bed now since she is feeling tired.
A creak, wiggle, and tuck sound as Amber gets into bed and pulls up the covers.
Lying in the dark, Amber reaffirms her decision to protect the East and its people.
She wonders about her future in the East as she looks toward the people she serves.
Recalling a child, Amber smiles and thinks about how much she wants to see them again. Amber realizes she needs a relationship with Calix for that future, but remains deeply uncertain. Amber drifts off to sleep, her thoughts finally quieting as the night grows deeper and still. A step sounds as someone moves through the room while Amber remains fast asleep. A lightly and creak sound as Calix approaches the bed, looking down at his sleeping wife.
Soft Z sounds echo as Calix calls out to his wife, finding her already deep in slumber.
A sigh sounds as Calix wonders if she only sleeps well after leaving his side.
A rustle sounds as an unkempt Amber wakes up, rubbing her eyes in the morning light.
A loud yawn sounds as Amber fully wakes, her hair messy after a long night's rest.
Feeling the cold bed, Amber wonders if the Duke has already left the room before her. A loud and stretch sound as Amber prepares to face the new day's challenges.
Amber wakes up and brushes a lock of red hair away, her eyes looking quite thoughtful.
She is startled as a sharp gasp sounds while finding Calix already dressed and waiting.
Calix's posture changes as a raise sounds, his blue eyes gleaming with an intense, focused light.
His gaze shifts with a soft slide sounding as he focuses intently on his wife's face. Calix observes that his wife is up early, while Amber explains she wanted to see off the nights.
The Duke simply acknowledges her intention with a brief stoic confirmation as he looks away.
Calix announces he will wait at the training grounds, his steady step sounding as he leaves. A heavy shut sounds as the Duke departs, leaving Amber standing alone in the silent room.
Amber wonders if he dressed all night, a tinkle sounding as she rings for her attendance.
The bright morning sun shines over the stone castle walls under a clear blue sky. Calix stands before his armored knights, discussing the strategic objectives for the upcoming military campaign. Amber arrives in a green dress, looking radiant as Calix's heart gives a sudden, heavy padump. Denis Bertrand interrupts with a cheerful greeting, causing Calix's heart to bedump as he spins around.
Denise recalls guiding Genia previously, and the Duchess confirms he is correct with a pleasant smile.
Denise formally introduces himself to Amber, who warmly thanks the blonde knight for his prior assistance. A sharp ha-ha sounds as Denise laughs, unaware that Calix is watching with a darkening expression. Denise remarks on her cool atmosphere, ignoring the heavy thud sounding as Calix glares at him. Realizing the danger, Denise suddenly excuses himself for urgent business while Amber watches him go, confused.
A series of hurry sounds echo as Denise runs toward the castle, announcing everything is ready.
Amber suggests they move along, her heels giving a quick tap sounding as she leads Calix. The red-haired Duchess maintains a serious, dignified expression as she prepares to face the military personnel. The Thalestone Knights stand in rigid formation, their silver armor gleaming under the bright afternoon sun.
Amber somberly reflects on her previous life, remembering how most of these men died in war. A clinch sounds as Amber grips her hands, resolved to protect the lives she now controls.
Turning toward her husband, Amber calls out to Calix with a look of firm, unwavering determination.
Amber asks the Duke for permission to address the knights personally before they depart for battle.
A quick tap sounds as the elder madam arrives, demanding to know if everyone is pleasant.
The woman in blue considers encouraging the troops, a rattle sounding as her maid eagerly agrees.
A sharp gasp sounds as the woman in blue stops, shocked to see Amber already there.
Amber formally introduces herself as the new Duchess, leaving the older woman stunned and visibly outraged.
Addressing the soldiers, Amber explains she won't delay them further since they are all very busy.
Sir Zite observes the Duchess, skeptically wondering what a precious lady from the West could say.
Amber bluntly states she will not offer a simple thank you since she is still new.
She explains that such words would be hollow given how little time she has spent here. Sir Zate listens intently as the Duchess pauses to deliver the next part of her message.
Amber promises to dedicate herself to protecting the East while the knights are away at war. She instructs them to discard their worries about their home and focus entirely on the battle.
With a confident smile, Amber tells the knights to return safely once their duty is fully complete.
As Amber walks away, Calyx stares at her back, his expression filled with profound, stunned realization.
A soft exhale sounds as Calyx smiles, clearly moved by his wife's unexpected and powerful speech.
A sudden, rhythmic clap sounds as Sir Zate begins to applaud the Duchess with genuine respect.
The training grounds erupt as multiple clap sounds echo from the inspired knights while Amber stands amazed.
A visible tremble sounds as the elder madam seethes with rage, clutching her fan in fury.
The woman in blue vows to teach the Duchess a lesson for her perceived arrogant behavior. A loud whinny sounds as the knights mount their horses, preparing to ride out from the castle.
Amber approaches the commander, asking if he is indeed Sir Zate, the leader of these knights.
Sir Zate turns back toward her, inquiring what business the Duchess has with him at this hour.
The two engage in a quiet conversation while Calyx watches them from a distance with narrowed eyes. Calyx remains silent, his gaze fixed on his wife as she speaks privately with the military commander. Sir Zate expresses confusion, questioning why the Duchess would be searching for such a specific, unusual item.
Amber tells Sir Zate she can't explain yet, but the Duke has already agreed to the arrangement.
Amber promises to care for the East while the knights are away, leaving Sir Zate speechless.
Sir Zate admits he was simply surprised by the Duchess's unexpected and specific request. With a bright smile, Amber assures him it isn't difficult and thanks him for his cooperation.
From a distance, a heavy stare sounding as Calyx watches his wife speak with the commander.
A sharp twip sounds as Calyx turns his head away, his expression unreadable and cold.
Rhythmic step sounds echo as Amber follows behind the Duke while they walk through the castle. A stand and stop sound as Calyx abruptly halts to ask what she was discussing with Sir Zate. Amber explains it was a request for the future, while Calyx silently repeats the word to himself.
Calyx questions why she didn't ask him for help if she needed something for the future.
Amber clarifies that the request involves an expedition, making Sir Zate the only appropriate person to ask.
Amber wonders why she felt the need to make an excuse to her husband just now.
A series of step sounds follow as someone approaches the couple, calling out to the Duke and Madam.
A stride and bow sound as Heinrich reports that the matter they discussed yesterday is finally ready.
A sudden raise sounds as the butler pauses, his expression turning slightly more serious.
An awkward feeling fills the air as Heinrich asks if he interrupted an important discussion between them.
Calyx simply calls her his wife before walking away, leaving Amber to deny any interrupted conversation.
Amber announces she has tasks to attend to and prepares to depart from the courtyard.
Calyx instructs his wife to send Heinrich for him if she finds herself in need of anything.
Loud stomp sounds echo as Amber walks away while the butler stands by her side.
A tilt sounds as Amber wonders about Calyx's odd behavior before Heinrich calls for her attention.
Heinrich asks if they can move to her office, and Amber agrees to go there immediately.
A bow sounds as a black-haired girl introduces herself as the Duchess's new exclusive servant.
A cheerful hee-hee sounds as Genia confirms she is feeling much better thanks to Amber's help.
A pink smile sounds as Genia enthusiastically thanks Amber for hiring her and promises her best.
A soft grab sounds as Amber takes Genia's hands, expressing gratitude for her difficult decision. A smile and teary sound as Amber reflects on how happy she is to have her first ally.
Amber tasks Genia with selecting other maids, and the girl eagerly accepts the important responsibility.
A thoughtful sounds as Amber realizes she still needs a lady-in-waiting for more complex tasks.
Amber asks Heinrich to bring any meticulous child who can read and write as a candidate.
A quick raise sounds as Heinrich prepares to present a new arrival to the Duchess.
Heinrich announces that a reply to the invitation sent to Count Freya has already arrived.
Amber is shocked by the speed, but Heinrich explains the Duke ordered an immediate reply.
A soft hold sounds as Amber clutches the letter, realizing Calyx was concerned in his own way.
Amber recalls Calyx blushing while promising to write as many invitations as she might need.
Amber looks away thoughtfully, wondering if things between them are starting to change for the better. Amber wonders if the distance between them is shrinking, recalling Calyx's gentle words about her wishes.
She remembers Calyx agreeing to her terms with a serious and focused expression on his face.
The memory of a flustered, blushing Calyx lingers in Amber's mind as she processes her feelings. Amber thinks about their night together, wondering if treating Calyx differently will cause him to change.
A sudden startled sound as Amber is pulled from her thoughts by someone calling to her.
A sincere and top sound as Amber resolves to focus on the reply she is holding.
Amber prepares to write back, her expression firm as Heinrich waits patiently by her side.
A slide sounds as Amber handles the stationery, ready to begin her work in the library. A rhythmic clip-clop and clink sound as a carriage travels down a dark, wooded path.
A heavy clank sounds as the man inside confirms they were both invited to the castle.
A startled sound as the man mentions the Duchess wants to meet the young girl specifically.
A firm grip sounds as the brown-haired girl clutches a book, feeling quite nervous and confused. The man looks back at his daughter with a neutral expression as they continue their journey.
A metallic clank sounds as the father tells her to stop worrying and look at the scenery. Amber reads a reply from Count Freya, who promises to bring his daughter immediately to help resolve the food shortage.
Looking at the portrait of Lariat Freya, Amber resolves that she must meet the talented young girl soon. Behind-the-scenes discussions reflect the creative process as the team debates the tone of the upcoming dialogue exchange.
A vibrant illustration features a girl with blue eyes, marking the transition into the next chapter of the story.
The grand stone castle stands silent under a darkening sky, signaling the start of an evening arrival.
Count Freya salutes the Eastern noble with a firm greeting, while his daughter stands behind him looking quite nervous. Amber watches the new arrivals with a thoughtful gaze, identifying the young girl specifically as Laureate Freya.
Sensing the Duchess's attention, the brown-haired girl reacts with a startled look, her eyes widening in surprise.
A sudden, sharp blur sounding as the girl quickly adjusts her posture under the heavy gaze of the Duchess.
Amber offers a warm smile and finds the girl's shy reaction charming, signaling them to follow her inside. The Duke and Duchess sit across from Count Freya and Lariat as Amber clarifies that she issued the invitation. Count Freya politely inquires why his daughter was specifically requested to attend such an important gathering at the castle.
The Count explains that Lariat is far too shy for social duties or to serve as a high-ranking maid.
Amber maintains a pleasant expression while stating that she called the young lady for a matter of very important business.
Lariat flinches nervously as the Duchess addresses her, the girl's anxiety mounting during the formal meeting.
Count Freya dismissively claims that his daughter has nothing of value to offer to a noblewoman of Amber's standing.
Amber closes her eyes and calmly disagrees, preparing to reveal the true reason for her interest in the girl. Amber shocks everyone by mentioning that she read Laureate's personal contributions to a specific horticultural research paper.
She details her interest in the girl's root plant breeding studies, causing Laureate to gasp in sheer disbelief.
Lariat clutches her hands, stunned that such a high-ranking noble would ever read what she considers a trivial work.
Amber looks confused, asking why the girl would characterize her hard-earned research as something trivial or unimportant.
A sudden, heavy heart-beat dump sounding as Lariat blushes, deeply moved by the Duchess's genuine interest in her studies.
The girl is knocked back by the realization, her mind racing as the Duke and Amber watch her reaction. An internal scream sounding as Lariat becomes overwhelmed with joy, having finally found someone who recognizes her talent.
Amber observes the girl's modesty, noting how Lariat seems to view her groundbreaking research as merely small corner notes.
With a deep rhythmic thud sounding in her chest, Laureate tearfully thanks the Duchess for taking her work seriously.
Amber smiles at the girl's reaction, surprised that a simple acknowledgement of her work could bring such immense happiness.
Amber envisions a future where Laureate becomes a renowned researcher, her heart racing at the potential she sees. Shifting to the practical matter at hand, Amber expresses her desire to speak privately with Laureate about the future.
Amber asks for Laureate's direct assistance with a new business venture, causing the girl's heart to give a sudden badump.
Count Freya remains skeptical, questioning if his daughter is truly capable of contributing to such a serious and important matter.
A soft sigh sounding as Lariat's expression false, her father's lack of confidence clearly dampening her newfound spirits.
Count Freya looks toward the Duchess, waiting for a justification for why his daughter should be involved in politics.
Amber stands firm, guaranteeing the Count that this is a task that absolutely no one else but Lariat can do.
She encourages the Count to take this opportunity to finally place his trust in his daughter's unique capabilities.
Amber looks at the Count with a serious expression, confirming that his cooperation is essential for the East's future.
Calix interjects, telling the Count that he will handle the investment details personally while Amber works with Lariat.
Turning to his wife, Calix tells Amber not to worry about the business side and to focus on her guest.
Amber is momentarily stunned, wondering if the Duke actually intended to help her out just now.
She nods and asks the Duke to handle the Count while she leads Laureate away for their private discussion.
Lariat follows Amber, still looking surprised by the sudden turn of events and the Duchess's kindness.
A soft rattle sounding as a door opens to reveal a room filled with beautiful, meticulously cultivated plants.
The two women sit for tea surrounded by greenery as Amber thanks the girl for bringing the specimens.
Lariat's face lights up with a radiant smile as she confirms that she cultivated all the plants herself.
The girl begins to chatter enthusiastically about the rare insects and colorful flowers she has successfully grown at home. Lariat suddenly stops speaking, her expression turning wary as she realizes she might be talking too much.
A gloomy atmosphere settles as Lariat assumes the Duchess finds her horticultural hobbies useless and silly.
Looking down, the girl admits she lacks courage and struggles to get along with people preferring plants. Lariat recalls her lonely life at home, staring out a window while surrounded by her silent, floral companions.
Amber somberly realizes that this lack of confidence is why it took Lariat so long to succeed in her previous life.
Amber reflects that Lariat's previous failures likely stemmed from a lack of recognition for her passions.
A gentle touch sounds as Amber places her hand over Laureate's while addressing her kindly. Amber reassures the girl that her life's work has never been useless or without merit.
Lariat looks up at the Duchess with tear-filled eyes, asking if her words are truly sincere.
Amber offers a warm smile, her expression full of compassion for the nervous girl. The Duchess confirms her belief in the girl's work, providing the validation she long sought. Amber brightly declares that Lariat is destined to become the savior of the entire eastern region. A rhythmic tapping sounds as the black-haired Duke handles his cane while reviewing a document.
Calix advises the Count not to worry, expressing full confidence in his wife's sensible actions.
Count Freya quickly clarifies that he has absolute trust in the noble couple's intentions.
The Duke remains stoic and focused as he listens to the older man's nervous explanations. Amber recalls her own firm stance, insisting that her position is far more than a decoration.
Calix warns that dwelling on excessive worry can be perceived as an insult to others.
In a memory, Amber expresses her deep desire to fulfill her duties to her best ability.
Calix looks away thoughtfully, contemplating his wife's impressive growth and her surprising, passionate resolve.
Amber stands tall and poised, her gaze filled with determination as she embraces her noble responsibilities.
The Duchess explains her plan to invest in Laureate's research to end the regional food shortage.
A diagram illustrates the spread of poison through the land, causing vital crops to wither.
Laureate asks if any plants are actually capable of bearing fruit in such a desolate environment.
Amber gestures toward a strange, spotted plant, asking if Laureate is referring to the Rodan species.
The brown-haired girl looks at the resilient plant, recognizing it by its many unfortunate reputations.
Narrator text explains that Rodan flowers bloom even as the eastern part becomes increasingly desolate.
The plant is called the Devil's Flower and is considered an evil sign of devastation.
Amber notes that common bias blinded people to Rodan's unique ability to thrive in poison.
Laureate's eyes widened as Amber proposes transferring the plant's resilient traits to common edible crops.
The girl reacts with shock, realizing the Duchess is suggesting an advanced and innovative breeding project.
Laureate mutters about selecting specific Rodan mutations to use in hybrid breeding for fast results. Amber smiles inwardly, believing they will succeed if they secure what she requested from Sir Zeit. Laureate pauses her enthusiastic rambling, a look of confusion crossing her face as she considers something. The girl marvels at the Duchess's brilliant plan, praising her for finding such an incredible solution.
Amber feels a bit guilty, secretly admitting to herself that she lacks deep scientific knowledge.
Amber claims her lack of prejudice helped her see the potential Laureate was destined to find.
Laureate dismisses the compliment, blushing as she insists a gloomy person like her lacks such insight.
The Duchess stresses that the girl now has a vital role in solving the food crisis.
Amber encourages her guests to stop demeaning herself and to recognize her own immense value.
With a confident look, the Duchess expresses her absolute belief in the girl's untapped potential. Amber urges Laureate to begin believing in herself just as the Duchess believes in her.
A soft gulp and tight squeeze sound as Laureate reacts with deep, visible emotion.
The girl looks at her benefactor with newfound respect and formally accepts the heavy responsibility.
Laureate resolves to trust herself more, her expression shifting from nervous hesitation to firm determination.
A rhythmic clip-clop sounds as the carriage travels at sunset while they discuss the meeting. Laureate smiles radiantly, confirming that she feels wonderful after the successful and productive meeting. She reflects on how her research was once mocked, feeling overjoyed that her work is worthwhile.
Laureate asks her father if the Duke's support isn't a happy outcome for their Countdom. Count Freya worries that her involvement might cause trouble if the Duchess cannot protect her.
He warns that Eastern social circles are cruel, but Laureate defends the Duchess's character.
The girl insists she will not tolerate insults against the woman she now deeply respects. A sudden startled sound as the Count reacts to his daughter's sudden and fierce defiance.
He marvels at Laureate's transformation, watching as she vows to do her absolute best.
Count Freya recalls the Duke's polite behavior, noting how the cold man changed for his wife.
During the carriage ride home, Count Freya apologizes for his previous impatience and admits that the new Duchess seems like a truly great person.
Laureate radiates pure happiness as she beams with a wide smile, confirming her deep respect and agreement with her father's assessment.
Amber reflects on the meeting's success, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction that her initial plans have been carried out perfectly.
Sitting together in a parlor, Amber and Calix enjoy tea while the Duchess expresses her sincere hope for a future without any complications. A silent glance sounding as Calix sips his tea without offering a verbal response, while Amber watches him with a thoughtful expression.
Amber breaks the silence by complimenting the Duke, noting that he did an excellent job discussing the investment details with the Count.
Calix keeps his gaze steady and offers a rare, direct acknowledgement of his wife's efforts, telling her she also did a good job.
Amber beams with a radiant and heartfelt smile, offering her sincere thanks to the Duke for his unexpected and kind words. A heavy, sudden badump sounding as Calix looks at his smiling wife, his expression turning stunned and his face beginning to redden. Amber closes her eyes and asks the Duke if he feels happy as well, her face glowing with genuine warmth and contentment. A quick movement sounding as Calix abruptly turns his head away, his face blushing deeply as he avoids her direct gaze. Amber looks at the Duke with a puzzled expression, calling out to him as she wonders about the cause of his sudden reaction. A rhythmic, rapid badump sounding in Calix's chest as his heart races wildly while he remains visibly flustered and unable to look back. Overwhelmed by the intense badump in his heart, Calix clenches his fist tightly on his lap as he struggles to regain his composure.
Composition regained slightly, the Duke mutters that he understands the situation, though he remains deeply affected by his wife's radiant presence.
A light top sounding as Amber stands, deciding to take her leave since the Duke seems to have nothing more to say.
A sudden jump sounding as Calyx starts to stand, letting out a startled gasp as he watches the Duchess prepare to exit. A sharp bang sounding as the door closes behind the departing Duchess, leaving the black-haired Duke standing alone and stunned.
While walking through the hallway, Amber reflects on the Duke's odd behavior, wondering why he found it so difficult to simply answer her.
She pauses to consider the possibility that Calyx was actually feeling a sense of regret or sympathy for her current situation.
A soft sigh sounding as Amber touches her chest, questioning why her own energy feels so heavy and strange after the interaction.
Back in the room, Calyx holds his head in distress as a series of heavy but dump sounds echo through his flustered thoughts.
The Duke's heart continues to bedump wildly as he reflects on how incredibly strange and confusing his feelings have become lately.
He covers his mouth with a trembling hand, trying to calm the persistent bedump sounding through his body while he avoids any witnesses.
A gray-haired maid in formal attire approaches Amber in the corridor, addressing her with a stern and professional inquiry.
The maid informs the Duchess that the Great Duchess is requesting a meeting with her, causing Amber to react with visible surprise.
Amber notes the maid's shift in address, internally questioning why the servant called her Lady Amber instead of using her proper title.
The maid reacts with a start, clarifying that Lady Bella specifically requested the meeting, using a name that implies a lack of formality.
Amber scolds the maid for her perceived rudeness, while the servant defends the address as a sign of regional familiarity in the East. The gray-haired woman offers a stiff and cold promise to be more careful with her manners during any future interactions.
Amber forces a bright and polite smile while asking where she needs to go, though she remains wary of the summons.
A heavy clunk sounding as Amber reaches a set of ornate golden doors, realizing she has been brought to the Vine Room.
A creak sounding as the maid opens the doors, while Amber internally questions why the Great Duchess would choose such a location.
Entering the room with a stoic look, Amber feels certain that the true purpose of this meeting is already quite obvious. Her gaze turns sharp and determined as she prepares to face whatever psychological game the Great Duchess is planning to play.
Amber faces a group of noblewomen, internally realizing that their collective goal is to drain her spirit and kill her energy. She recalls a past life where she was summoned to this room only to be cruelly treated as if she didn't exist.
Memories of her previous loneliness and shaking fear flood back as she remembers being ignored by the laughing and gossiping noblewomen.
Amber remembers her old self, head bowed in sadness and isolation, as she endured the cold rejection of the Eastern social circle.
A confident clack sounding as Amber walks forward, resolving that this time things will be very different than when she lived in fear.
A determined stride sounding as Amber approaches the brown-haired Great Duchess, Bella, who watches her arrival with a cold and mocking smirk.
The Great Duchess remains seated and haughty, her sharp gaze full of disdain as Amber nears the center of the tea party.
A heavy plop sounding as Amber takes a seat without waiting for an invitation, shocking Bella and the other assembled noblewomen.
Bella demands to know if Amber was given permission to sit, but Amber retorts that it was impolite to ignore her arrival.
The brown-haired woman fumes, reminding Amber that Eastern custom requires the permission of one's elders before one is allowed to sit.
Bella declares that the young Duchess has committed a major act of disrespect against her and the traditions of the Countdom.
A pleasant smile sounding as Amber mockingly promises to be more careful next time, clearly refusing to be intimidated by the scolding.
Amber questions why Bella thinks she has authority over the Vine Room, asserting that it should be managed by the Duke's wife. A metallic jingle sounding as Bella holds up a golden chain, telling the younger woman not to worry about its management.
Bella smirks and holds up a golden key, claiming that the Duke personally allowed her to keep it in her possession.
Amber reflects on the former Duke, Detlef Thalisto, noting his past devotion to the Great Duchess. A sharp tack sounds as Bella tops the golden key, challenging Amber to understand her position.
Bella claims she summoned Amber to provide advice befitting her status as a family elder.
The brown-haired woman mocks Amber's influence, noting Calyx's history of absolute obedience to his father's will.
With a sharp snap of her fan, Bella asserts her authority as the castle's Great Duchess. Bella condescendingly tells Amber to stop being clumsy and focus on keeping her own room clean.
A loud tack sounds as Amber slams the table, fiercely questioning why she should follow orders.
Standing tall, Amber declares her rights as Duchess and her refusal to surrender any of her authority. Amber mockingly suggests that the lonely Great Duchess can keep managing the Vine Room herself instead.
Bella fumes with suppressed rage, insisting she has far too much work to handle such tasks.
A sharp tack sounds as Bella clenches her fan, her anger reaching a visible breaking point.
The gray-haired maid confirms that the Duke is currently away at the training grounds as requested.
Bella stands with a sinister look, pleased that no witnesses are present for her next move. A soft whoosh sounds as maids bring in a wooden case while Bella continues her lecture. Bella warns that Amber's body will suffer for her lack of intelligence as she prepares herself.
A heavy click sounds as the case opens, revealing a disciplinary whip for the red-haired Duchess.
Amber reacts with visible alarm as she realizes the cruel intentions of the woman before her.
Bella smiles wickedly, declaring that a disobedient child requires immediate and harsh physical discipline and punishment. Amber's eyes widen in terror as she faces the imminent threat of the elder woman's violence.
Maid suddenly sees Amber's arms, holding her firmly as she shouts in shock and fierce protest.
Looking Bella directly in the eye, Amber fiercely warns that the elder woman will regret this.
Bella dismisses the threat as simple discipline, claiming it is her duty as the family elder.
Raising the whip, Bella shouts that she will not tolerate another word of defiance from Amber. A series of rhythmic knocks sound on the ornate golden doors, interrupting the tense and violent confrontation.
The heavy knocks repeat, signaling an urgent and persistent visitor at the Vine Room's grand entrance.
Bella glares at her maid, demanding to know why someone was allowed near the room's entrance.
The gray-haired maid stammers in confusion as the knocking continues while Amber watches the door.
An urgent voice from the hallway pleads for the madam to open the door immediately. Amber recognizes the voice, her heart racing as she wonders who has arrived at this moment.
A subtle smirk plays across Bella's lips as she considers how to handle the sudden interruption.
Bella reluctantly signals her maids to hide the whip and prepare to allow the visitor entry.
Bella composes her features and commandingly orders the person outside the Vine Room to enter.
A handsome man with light brown hair enters, announcing he is there to pick up the Duchess.
Amber's eyes widen in recognition as she identifies the newcomer as the knight Sir Bertrand. Confusion fills Amber as she realizes she expected Heinrich the butler, not Sir Bertrand, to arrive.
Bertrand approaches Amber, suggesting they leave immediately to take care of an extremely urgent matter. Ignoring Bella's protests, Bertrand firmly states he is taking the Duchess away for a pressing task.
Bella tries to regain control, questioning the urgency while feigning disappointment over their interrupted tea time.
Bertrand offers a casual and cheerful apology for the interruption, maintaining his polite but firm stance.
Bella fumes silently, seething with rage because the butler claimed an important matter required the Duchess.
Amber maintains her composure, politely promising the Great Duchess that she will invite her back soon.
With a bright smile, Amber tells Bella not to be too disappointed as she prepares to depart.
Bella's hand trembles with suppressed fury, her nails digging into her arm as Amber walks away.
Amber follows Bertrand through the hallway, assuring him that she is all right after the narrow escape.
Amber reflects on the timing, recalling how she had specifically asked Genya to call for Heinrich.
Bertrand looks at Amber with a concerned expression, asking if she truly expected the butler's arrival.
Bertrand admits he came of his own volition, confirming he arrived to help her personally. Amber stops in the hallway, looking back at Bertrand to ask what his intervention truly means.
Bertrand explains that the butler was simply busy, so he volunteered to escort her himself instead. Amber stops and turns to Bertrand, asking him to be honest about what he wants. Bertrand asks Amber to clarify her meaning after her blunt question regarding his intentions. Amber notes the difficulty of opposing Bella, assuming the knight wouldn't side with a stranger.
Amber looks at Bertrand skeptically, questioning if he truly has a hidden motive for his help.
The light brown-haired knight stares back in silence, seemingly considering his response to her inquiry.
Bertrand admits he cannot share details yet, but insists they share a common enemy.
Bertrand explains he simply wanted to inform Amber that he could offer her some assistance.
Amber is stunned, asking why he would risk a direct confrontation with the Great Duchess.
With a gentle laugh, Bertrand reminds Amber that the knights also work for the East.
Bertrand expresses his sincere desire to protect the East as he smiles warmly at Amber.
A polite bow follows as the knight excuses himself to return to his professional duties. Amber watches him leave, internally noting how quickly he departed after making his bold declaration.
A rhythmic clack sounding as Amber walks away, pondering Bertrand's identity in her past life.
She recalls seeing him with Calix before, though he was never a prominent figure then.
A soft clack sounding as Amber wonders if Bertrand's rebellion led to his past disappearance.
She stops abruptly in the corridor, struck by a sudden and mysterious realization about the situation.
Staring at a family portrait, Amber considers the hidden secrets buried within the Duke's grand castle.
Night falls and Amber tosses fitfully in bed while soft, pained groans escape her lips.
A terrifying nightmare begins as shadowy hand seize Amber, who desperately pleads for her freedom. Bella appears in the dream, looming wickedly while promising to break Amber's spirit and habits.
The vision of Bella commands Amber to die while the younger woman winces in fear.
A powerful swish sounding as the former Duke swings a red sword with a malicious grin.
Amber wakes with a start, a sharp gasp sounding as tears stream down her face.
A sudden crash sounding as an image of shattering glass accompanies her cry of refusal.
In the darkness, Calix blinks awake, his expression shifting to one of confusion and concern.
Calix stands by the bed, calling out to his wife as her pained groans continue.
Amber remains lost in her distress, sobbing while she struggles against the remnants of her nightmare.
Calix watches her with a worried frown, a bead of sweat tracing down his face.
A gentle brush sounding as Calix reaches out his hand toward Amber's trembling and vulnerable form.
A soft stroke sounding as Calix begins to pet Amber's head to comfort and calm her.
Amber's breathing hitches as she feels the soothing touch, her features finally beginning to soften.
Calix lets out a long, weary sigh while he continues to watch over his wife.
A rhythmic pat sounding as Calix remains seated on the bed, providing a quiet presence.
The sun begins to rise over the castle towers, bathing the stone walls in light. A soft stretch sounding as Amber wakes up and extends her arms in the morning.
Amber touches her neck in confusion, feeling a lingering sense of warmth from the night.
She gasps in surprise, realizing Calyx is sleeping soundly right beside her in the bed.
A close-up reveals Amber's wide orange eye, reflecting her utter shock at the Duke's presence.
Amber sits up quietly, noting that she has never seen Calyx's face look so peaceful.
She recalls how he used to rush away like an arrow whenever they shared a room.
Looking into the mirror, she wonders if the Duke is still actively trying to avoid her.
A sudden whoosh sounding as the memory of Bella's dark presence flickers through her mind.
Amber looks around the silent room, processing the shift in atmosphere since her rescue.
She reflects on how the nightmare made the threat of Bella feel even more imminent.
Touching her cheek, Amber feels a faint blush while she contemplates the strange night events.
Amber thinks that this life might turn out well, though she remains deeply curious.
She recalls the vividness of the nightmare and the comfort, doubting it was a dream.
A legendary red sword appears, identified as the artifact that once destroyed the entire East. A firm grip sounding as Amber clenches her fist, staring at her reflection with resolve. Amber decides she must take action, resolving to try a new strategy to protect her future. Standing tall, Amber vows that in this life she will prevent anyone from harming the East.
The brown-haired maid informs Amber that a woman named Roxy has applied for the maid position.
Amber sits at her desk thinking no one would come, while her maid describes the candidate.
Amber tells the maid to have the newcomer start by organizing books in the next room.
A soft click sounding as the maid leaves, wondering if Amber is actually a baron's daughter.
Amber decides to handle her task slowly, reflecting on the importance of her current secret mission. A quick tock-tock sounding as Amber leans on her desk, trying to remember Bertrand's past.
The gray-haired elder man bows respectfully, announcing that he has an important report for the Duchess.
The butler reports that a merchant group from the East wants to purchase Amber's entire jewelry collection.
Surprised, Amber asks if there was ever a merchant of that scale operating within the East.
The elder man hesitates, looking troubled as he prepares to reveal the name of the interested merchant.
Amber stares in disbelief when the butler identifies the prospective buyer as the head of Pizza Top. Standing suddenly, Amber asks if he refers to the merchant group run by Count Nastos' associate.
Amber realizes that Count Nastos' influence makes finding another merchant in the region nearly impossible.
She thinks that despite his status, no merchant would have the cash to buy everything at once. The butler warns that the merchants will likely use threats to secure the jewelry at a bargain.
Amber clutches her head, remembering how difficult this merchant was to deal with in her previous life.
Amber asks who exactly contacted them, and the butler identifies the man as the head, Baron Rupold.
Touching her chin, Amber repeats Rupold's name as she begins to piece together his past motivations.
She recalls a memory of Rupold conspiring with Bella to drain the dukedom of all its wealth.
A close-up of Amber's determined eye reveals her realization that Rupold is an immediate threat.
Memories surface of maids gossiping about the manager of Piazza using stolen funds to cover a scandal.
Amber reflects on Rupold's behavior, realizing his arrogance was always tied to the Duke's waning political power. The elder man explains that the head of the Piazza Guild is notorious for his poor manners. Looking down, the butler suggests it might be inappropriate for the Duchess to meet such a man. Amber smirks, declaring the situation is perfect as she prepares to face the merchant herself.
Amber recalls her father's training, stating she knows exactly how to handle a greedy merchant.
With a confident look, Amber vows to use her knowledge to outmaneuver Baron Rupold. A quick flick sounding as Amber pulls a hidden document from her drawer to secure an advantage. An image of the legendary red sword appears as Amber resolves to eliminate every threat to her home. Holding a pen, Amber insists that she and the butler must work together to resolve this issue.
Baron Rupold, a short man in a red coat, insults the castle's appearance upon his arrival.
The butler leads the arrogant merchant through the hallway, politely showing him the way to the meeting.
A heavy thud sounding as the ornate doors are opened to reveal the Duchess's reception room.
A black-haired maid stands at attention, waiting nervously as the meeting with the merchant begins.
Dressed in blue, Amber greets Baron Rupold while calmly sipping tea among a display of roses.
Rupold removes his top hat, offering a fake smile while greeting the new Duchess of Thalis there.
The merchant smirks rudely while the black-haired maid winces at his obvious lack of respect. Amber's expression turns cold as she notes that Rupold is just as detestable as he was before. Rupold confirms he is there to buy the jewelry, acting as if he is doing her a favor. A dull plop sounding as the merchant makes himself comfortable on the sofa without being invited. Rupold boasts that no other merchant will ever offer the Duchess better conditions than he provides. Amber responds with feigned surprise, asking the merchant to explain the details of his supposedly great offer. Smiling sweetly, Amber asks to hear exactly how beneficial his conditions are for the dukedom. Rupold suggests a price of 2 million stars, a figure significantly lower than the jewel's actual value. Rubbing his chin, Rupold claims that his company's current cash situation is somewhat complicated, a soft chuckle sounding as Rupold promises to pay the remaining balance in 6 months' time. Amber notes to herself that he intends to delay payment without signing any formal legal documents. A soft slurp sounding as the merchant drinks his tea, feeling certain of his victory. Rupold insists his offer is the best possible deal, oblivious to Amber's secret merchant lineage. The merchant grins widely, confident that he has successfully deceived the seemingly naive young Duchess. The red-haired woman smirks confidently as the merchant sits across from her in silence. The red-haired woman rejects his offer, stating she cannot trade at such a ridiculous price.
Looking down on her, the merchant suggests that her grace is ignorant of how the East operates.
The merchant smugly declares that in Eastern commerce, his powerful trade guild, Piazza, is the law.
Unfazed by his posturing, the red-haired woman coolly asks for the meaning behind his bold claim.
The merchant boasts that the region would be abandoned if not for his guild's connections to Count Nasto.
A heavy tang sounding as the merchant slams his hand down, listing food and weapons as guild-controlled goods.
Smirking rudely, the merchant insists that these essential daily necessities are only available through his trade union.
The merchant suggests she view their purchase of her jewelry as an act of grace toward her.
The merchant mockingly thinks that Amber is only pretending to know business because of her merchant father.
Leaning back, the red-haired woman asks with a bored expression if the merchant is finally done talking.
Amber expresses surprise at his careless behavior, her hand on her chin as she observes his reaction. Turning the tables, Amber suggests that the merchant is the one in desperate need of her grace.
A shadow falls over Amber's face as she brings up a recent accident involving Count Zymo.
The merchant reacts with visible shock, his face turning red as he asks what accident she refers to.
Amber smiles sweetly and asks if the merchant doesn't find the entire situation to be a pity. Sweat beads on his face as the merchant nervously asks Amber what she is talking about.
A map illustrates that Count Zymo's territory is the most vital trade route for the guild's operations.
Amber bluntly states that the merchant has caused a major accident that threatens his entire guild standing.
Sipping her tea, Amber points out that he recently harassed and teased the daughter of Count Zymo. The merchant is overcome with panic, his face flushing red as he asks how she knows that.
The scene shifts to the past, where a desperate plea for mercy echoes throughout Count Zymo's castle. A man grovels on the floor, begging the Count for forgiveness before the guild headquarters finds out. Praying with desperation, the merchant promises the Count he will do anything in exchange for his forgiveness. The Count refuses to let the guild pass through his lands after the merchant's unforgivable behavior.
The noble grants the merchant 2 months to find a suitable way to atone for his mistakes.
Looking horrified, the merchant realizes he must find a significant bribe to satisfy the angry noble's demands. The merchant recalls slapping the noblewoman, mistakenly thinking she was just a common maid at the castle.
In the present, the merchant is stunned that news of his scandal has already reached Amber's ears.
Amber reflects on how this man eventually used the dukedom's wealth to fund his bribes and business. Despite his efforts, the guild continued to experience friction with the nobility over their corrupt practices.
Amber reveals her knowledge that he intended to buy her jewelry at a bargain to bribe the Count.
Amber notes that Count Nasto is likely unaware of the merchant's secret failures and his desperate situation.
Amber describes the gruesome consequences the merchant would face if Count Nasto discovered his massive business blunder. Horrified, the merchant asks if Amber is threatening him with the information she has uncovered about him.
Amber smiles brightly, explaining that she could inform Count Nasto or they could show each other grace.
Sweating profusely, the merchant asks what Amber wants from him in exchange for her silence and help.
Amber claims she knows exactly what Count Zymo wants more than a bribe of mere money.
The merchant asks with wide eyes if Amber is truly certain she can provide such a solution. Amber smirks and says she doesn't like giving away valuable information for free during a business transaction.
Desperate to resolve the issue, the merchant agrees to her terms as long as she settles his problem.
Bowing his head in submission, the merchant begs the Duchess to let him know her specific conditions.
Amber closes her eyes with a tranquil smile, telling him that her conditions are actually quite simple.
Beaming among a field of roses, Amber demands 5 million stars from the merchant for her assistance. The merchant is aghast, shouting that paying 5 million stars is a completely absurd and impossible demand.
Amber sighs and threatens to write to Count Nasto if her conditions are too difficult for him.
Amber recalls the rumors of the Count's ruthless personality and the losses he once caused to others.
Dark blood splatters across a chaotic background, symbolizing the violent end that awaits those who fail.
A soft gulp sounding as Amber suggests the guild owner would likely disown his own son-in-law.
The merchant grovels, claiming that even after foraging, he only has 3 million stars available to pay.
Sweating and desperate, Baron Rupold asks if the Duchess agrees to the 3 million star price due to his difficult situation.
Rejection is met with confusion as the red-haired woman calmly asks to receive the remaining 2 million stars as aid items.
Smiling brightly, the red-haired woman explains she wants 1 million stars in aid items to ensure the East storehouse survives the winter.
Tension rises as the red-haired woman declares that the final 1 million stars will be used to acquire the sword Durandal. A heavy thump sounding as the merchant reacts in horror, asking why she would want a cursed object like that sword.
The red-haired woman reflects on the history of Durandal, an ancient sword that brought ruin to her home in her past life.
A soft clatter sounding as the merchant shakes, while the red-haired woman notes he cannot complain regardless of his personal anger.
The red-haired woman points out that the merchant's boss is not cruel, so at worst he would only face being fired. Sipping her tea with a tranquil smile, the red-haired woman asks if losing a job is better than losing limbs.
Overcome with a furious panic, the merchant realizes this young girl possesses the mind of a ruthless business veteran.
A quick flip sounding as the black-haired maid reveals a document while the red-haired woman claims she is acting out of care. A dull clatter sounding as the red-haired woman presents contracts explaining the official recorded price is for the merchant's own protection.
The red-haired woman reassures the merchant that she has written favorable terms for both sides and he has no reason to worry.
A sharp gnash sounding as the merchant grit his teeth while the red-haired woman instructs him to simply sign his name. Looking defeated and crossing his arms, the merchant reluctantly agrees to the Duchess's overwhelming terms as the meeting finally concludes.
A soft rustle sounding as the merchant bends over in shame, realizing he was played exactly like a joke in her plan.
News spreads through the castle that the Duchess has successfully sold all of her dowry jewels for a significant profit.
Maids gossip by the well as the black-haired maid Genia feels proud that their mistress outmaneuvered the evil merchant.
Looking up at the sky, a maid suggests that the Duchess might be far more talented than any of them originally believed.
A loud, noisy sounding as workers deliver the massive shipment of aid goods with instructions to store them in the innermost warehouse.
A sharp crumple sounding as an older woman pulls a curtain aside, her expression hardening with obvious displeasure at the Duchess's success. A beautiful ribbon brooch sparkles in its box as a voice asks if they can truly receive such a lovely item.
The red-haired woman presents the black-haired maid, apologizing that her current condition prevents her from giving a better gift.
A soft squeeze sounding as the red-haired woman thinks of how the black-haired maid's gossip helped her story and wishes to repay her.
Genia giggles with a happy hee-hee and holds the gift tight, insisting she only told the truth about what she witnessed.
Excitedly, Genia informs the Duchess that more maids are eager to work for her after seeing the aid goods arrive.
A relieved pew sounding as the red-haired woman reflects on how the money from the jewels will change their winter. Memories of a cold interaction surface as the red-haired woman thinks back to how the black-haired man has been acting lately.
The red-haired woman looks on with a distant expression, remembering her previous life struggles with the silent Duke of Thalisto.
A quick turn sounding as the black-haired man walks away, leaving the red-haired woman standing alone in the quiet hallway.
Resting her chin on her hand, the red-haired woman wonders if Calix is intentionally avoiding her since that particular day.
A flashback shows the red-haired woman asking the black-haired man if he is happy too, a question that met only silence.
The red-haired woman thinks that since the supplies were brought to his territory, he should have at least said a word.
A tight clench sounding as the red-haired woman grows angry, her patience wearing thin at the Duke's continued and obvious avoidance.
A dizzying turn sounding as the red-haired woman experiences an infinite repetition of missed meals and empty seats at the table.
The red-haired woman asks Genia about the Duke's whereabouts, only to learn he is busy training in the field again. With a sweet but scary smile, the red-haired woman asks the sweating maid who has been reporting her location to Calix. A sudden stand-up sounding as the red-haired woman rises, startling the maid as she calls out for Sir Bertrand. A soft sounding as the red-haired woman resolves that she will no longer allow the Duke to hide from her.
The sun shines over the high towers of the castle as the scene shifts to the outdoor training grounds.
A sharp swish sounding as the black-haired man swings his practice sword with intense focus and impressive physical strength.
A soft rustle sounding as the sweaty black-haired man pauses his training, his blue eyes showing a hint of surprise and weariness.
A firm step sounding as a foot lands on the stone floor, announcing a new arrival at the training field.
Approaching from behind, the red-haired woman tells Calix she cannot possibly leave her Duke to eat a meal all alone.
A quick turn sounding as the startled black-haired man asks why she is there, while the red-haired woman gives a chuckle.
A swift turn sounding as the black-haired man looks back at a nervous, light-haired man standing nearby in the training area. Looking annoyed, the black-haired man scolds the subordinate, who apologetically claims he is just as afraid of the Duchess as him. A soft gulp sounding as the black-haired man looks away stealthily, his face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and genuine nerves. The red-haired woman looms with a dark, determined expression, her eyes shadowed as she declares that today is the day. A heavy dun-dun sounding as the red-haired woman smiles widely, insisting that the two of them must talk for a bit.
A golden Labrador stands against a dark background, marking a brief transition before the story continues.
A sharp clink sounding as the dining utensils are placed neatly beside a gourmet meal.
A stealthy mood descends as the red-haired woman and the black-haired man dine in silence. The red-haired woman eats quietly, her gaze focused on her meal as she maintains her composure. Looking downward, the black-haired man realizes that she has finally noticed his efforts to avoid her. Reflecting on his past mistakes, the black-haired man vows not to speak foolishly during this second chance.
A sudden turn sounding as the sweating black-haired man worries about what she might do next.
A soft falter sounding as the red-haired woman pauses mid-drink, sensing the heavy tension in the room.
The red-haired woman holds her wineglass with a serious expression, preparing to address the awkward situation.
A respectful bow sounding as the black-haired man lowers his head, unable to meet her intense gaze.
A relieved pew sounding as the red-haired woman looks away, finally ready to break the long silence.
A dull clatter sounding as the red-haired woman sets her glass down, announcing she has something important.
Looking startled, the black-haired man asks what she wants to say as he tries to hide his nerves.
A heavy gulp sounding as the black-haired man panics internally, fearing she might bring up a separation. Fidgeting nervously, the black-haired man fears she is about to suggest that she will finally leave him.
The red-haired woman calls out to the Duke, noticing his distracted and clearly distressed state of mind.
Startled by her voice, the black-haired man asks if she is truly comfortable continuing their current conversation.
The red-haired woman notes his behavior matches his recent avoidance while he tries to explain his actions. With a sad gaze, the red-haired woman suggests he shouldn't endure their forced marriage if he is unhappy.
A sudden stand-up sounding as the black-haired man denies her claim, desperate to correct her misunderstanding.
Leaning forward, the black-haired man admits his actions were misleading but tries to explain his true intentions.
A rhythmic thump sounding as the sweating black-haired man hesitates, claiming that he is actually quite satisfied.
Looking confused, the red-haired woman tilts her head, unable to comprehend his sudden and intense emotional outburst.
Resting her chin on her hand, the red-haired woman asks if she is truly the source of his unhappiness.
An embarrassed blush creeps onto the black-haired man's face as he looks away from her searching gaze.
Looking downward with a flushed face, the black-haired man struggles to manage his overwhelming feelings of shame. A soft nod sounding as the black-haired man confirms his feelings, his gaze fixed on his own collar.
A surprised gasp sounding as the red-haired woman thinks his bashful reaction is actually quite cute.
A soft hump sounding as the red-haired woman giggles, telling him to stop avoiding her from now on.
A soft sounding as the red-haired woman shifts the conversation toward a much more serious topic.
The red-haired woman brings up the matter of the weapons transaction, signifying a shift to business matters.
A soft nod sounding as the black-haired man acknowledges he heard about the deal from Sir Heinrich. The red-headed woman explains the guild's desire for a new trade route, confirming the details of their proposal.
Looking determined, the black-haired man expresses his own desire to sever ties with the troublesome Count Nasto.
A tight squeeze sounding as the black-haired man clenches his fist in anger while thinking of the Count.
The black-haired man fumes, accusing the nobility of playing recklessly with the lives of his people and engineers.
The red-haired woman reflects on how the Duke achieved swordmaster status through sheer grit and difficult conditions.
A memory shows the Duke bowing to commoners, prioritizing the rights of his people over his noble pride.
Thinking deeply, the red-haired woman wonders if there was another reason for his past humble and self-sacrificing actions.
The red-haired woman suggests expanding their trade beyond the East, leaving the Duke stunned by her bold proposal.
The red-haired woman looks out with a solemn expression as she considers the implications of her daring plan. Looking completely stunned, the black-haired man wonders how such a thing could even be possible. A small, melancholic smile plays on the red-haired woman's lips as she watches the Duke's stunned reaction.
Looking away, the red-haired woman reflects on the inevitable necessity of facing her own family, despite their history.
A sharp clatter sounding as a pen is dropped, signaling a transition into a memory of her previous life.
Haunted by the past, the red-haired woman recalls how she once desperately wrote letters to her family's home. The red-haired woman agonizes over the deep emotional pain her family once caused her in another life.
A sharp crumple sounding as she crushes a letter, resolving that she can never return to her old ways.
A happy ha-ha sounding as a younger version of the red-haired woman marvels at the sights of the capital. A happy mood fills the air as a red-haired man smiles at her, recalling how she once begged him for this trip.
Giggling with a happy hee-hee, the younger red-haired woman expresses joy that her favor was accepted.
Laughing, the red-haired man calls her a brat and promises to find her the best guardian.
The red-haired man and the young girl marvel at a large, sparkly red cake.
The red-haired man signs a document while the young red-haired girl watches curiously. A hesitant mood descends as the red-haired man pauses while walking with the girl.
The red-haired man presents blue flowers to the girl, who smiles as petals drift down. Smiling brightly, the red-haired girl reflects on how she believed her family truly loved her.
A few years pass and the scene shifts to the grand mansion of the Light family.
A series of scratch sounds echo as a royal marriage decree is signed for the two families.
Stressed, the red-haired man laments the situation as Amber asks him how he is doing.
The red-haired man says he must visit the palace immediately, leaving Amber confused and startled.
A swift swoosh sounding as the man rushes out while Amber calls after her father.
Amber looks worried and fidgety as she stands alone in the quiet hallway. A shattered frame shows a family portrait, marking the moment everything began to fall apart.
Kneeling, the red-haired man begs the emperor to reconsider the marriage order for his daughter.
The emperor coldly asks if the man is denying his sincerity after receiving royal care.
Prostrating himself, the man pleads that Natasha cannot be forced into a marriage like that.
The emperor suggests that if Natasha is so talented, there is no other path available. A radiant glow surrounds the red-haired man as he looks up desperately at the emperor. The emperor smiles sinisterly, noting that the man fortunately has a second daughter to use.
The red-haired man is petrified as the emperor targets his other daughter for the marriage.
Back home, Amber stands before her dejected father and her silent, blonde-haired sister.
Amber asks her father if he truly intends to marry her to the Duke of Thalastar.
Horrified, Amber refuses the marriage, crying out that she cannot marry a man she has never met. The red-haired man hides his face, begging Amber to sympathize with his impossible position.
Amber angrily demands to know why she's being forced to substitute for her sister.
The blonde-haired woman remains silent, wondering if her talent makes her sibling appear worthless.
The red-haired man tries to explain his decision as Amber turns away in anger.
Clenching her dress, Amber trembles and wonders why this is happening to her. Tearfully, Amber screams at her father, asking why he never chooses to protect her. A desperate call sounding as the man reaches out, but Amber walks away in a huff.
Amber cries into her pillow, realizing that her father has always preferred her sister. Reflecting on the past, Amber admits she could never understand her father's cruel decision. Memories of the Emperor's sinister smile haunt Amber as she realizes the depth of the threat.
Amber realizes her father was simply petrified by the Emperor and saw no other way.
Returning to the present, Amber prepares to speak as she sits for tea.
Amber informs Calix that she has sent a letter to arrange a secret business meeting. Calix suggests they must ensure the Emperor remains unaware of their private negotiations.
Amber explains her plan to meet the guild in a remote area of the east.
Looking concerned, Calix warns that traveling so far will surely raise suspicion at the palace.
Amber looks suspicious, wondering if Calix is trying to prevent her from leaving the estate.
A sudden start sounding as Amber insists she must handle this matter on her own.
Blushing, Calix looks away and mutters that Amber has completely misunderstood his intentions.
Amber suggests they travel incognito, a proposal that leaves the black-haired man feeling quite surprised.
Narration explains that incognito trips allow rulers to scout territory and bless their local residents.
An incognito trip is considered a significant duty for both the Duke and the Duchess.
Amber reflects on how she never cared for such duties in her previous, unacknowledged life.
Calix looks on with a serious expression as he listens to Amber's strategic reasoning. Amber thinks to herself that she must proceed with this mission for her plan.
A soft clatter sounding as Amber fidgets with her cup, contemplating her next move.
The black-haired man remains deep in thought, his expression unreadable as the word thoughtful appears.
Pausing mid-sentence, the black-haired man prepares to deliver a difficult truth about their journey. The red-haired woman mentions essential knowledge before traveling incognito, to which the man asks for clarification.
Looking distressed, the black-haired man admits that the current state of the territory is very poor.
With a gentle smile, the red-haired woman reassures the Duke that she is already aware.
A sudden squeeze sounding as the black-haired man desperately addresses her, his internal anxiety clearly growing. The black-haired man stares in disbelief, stunned by her calm acceptance of the dire situation. Framed by roses, the red-haired woman maintains her elegant composure despite the gravity of the topic. A soft rustling sounding as the black-haired man warns the reality is worse than she imagined.
The red-haired woman realizes he views her as a fragile glass decoration that might easily shatter.
He insists she stay in the city to avoid hardship, hoping to spare her any pain.
She reflects on how he spoke these exact words in her previous life of long suffering.
Determined, she resolves to prove she is now someone completely different from what the Duke expects. Turning away, the red-haired woman maintains her resolve while keeping her true intentions hidden from him. The black-haired man remains troubled, his mind fixated on the dangers awaiting them in the east.
Seeking clarity, the red-haired woman asks how he can be so certain about his protective stance.
He simply replies that he needs her to trust his judgment for her own safety.
Standing her ground, the red-haired woman firmly reminds him of her status as his devoted wife.
A gentle radiance surrounds the red-haired woman as she prepares to convince him of her strength.
She looks him in the eye, asking if the Duke will finally place his faith in her.
Night falls over the silent stone bridge as a vast field of stars fills the sky.
A sudden movement shifts the curtains in the quiet room as the evening air blows through.
Peering through the doorway, the black-haired man watches her, still wrestling with his deep inner conflict.
A soft rustling sounding as he repeats his warning about the harshness of the journey ahead.
A grand castle stands silhouetted against a vast, sparkling night sky as the late hour passes.
Sitting alone at night, the black-haired man contemplates the risks and implications of traveling incognito.
The black-haired man reviews records of the dry and dusty lands that seem all too familiar.
He regrets his proposal, fearing her reaction to seeing his beloved homeland fall into such ruin. Despite his worries, he feels a growing desire to support her and her mysterious new goals. Returning to their chamber, the black-haired man gently reaches out to touch her while she sleeps.
A sudden halt sounding as he stops himself from making any contact with her soft hair.
The black-haired man quickly pulls his hand away, overcome by a wave of intense self-doubt.
He stares at his own calloused palm, feeling unworthy of touching someone as delicate as her.
He thinks that his rough hand would only cause her pain if he were to touch her. A fading memory shows another woman touching his face, fueling his current sense of deep hesitation.
Shielding his eyes, he vows to protect her and never let her suffer like the other.
His attention shifts as he discovers a letter tucked away inside a small box in the room.
A soft rustling sounding as he reads about progress in wheat research and samples being sent. A document mentions Lady Lariat's control of poison, surprising the Duke as he reads further on. He finds a draft written by the red-haired woman offering her assistance to those in need. Recognizing the research handwriting as hers, he realizes she has been working tirelessly in secret. A realization dawns on him that all of her efforts have been for the Eastern land.
A soft flutter sounding as he tries to reassure her that everything will turn out well.
Boldly, the red-haired woman declares she can solve the food shortage in the Eastern land.
She greets the blonde-haired girl warmly while the black-haired man watches her with silent admiration.
She expresses her unwavering resolve to face the desolate lands without ever trying to run away. A brief hesitate sounding as the black-haired man wavers, unsure of how to respond to her.
A sharp open sounding as a door is pushed ajar, revealing the warm light of the hallway.
The black-haired man wonders if he is prejudiced toward her as he stands by the door. He walks away on the patterned carpet, his mind racing with thoughts about her surprising capabilities.
The black-haired man watches over the sleeping red-haired woman, noting she reminds him of someone else.
Resting peacefully, the red-haired woman remains blissfully unaware of the heavy, contemplative atmosphere within the room. A firm determination takes hold as the black-haired man clenches his fists, silently making a final decision.
Kneeling beside the bed, he wonders if their relationship will change once the upcoming incognito trip concludes.
With a resolute gaze, the black-haired man struggles to finish his vow as a soft light fades.
Preparing for the journey, he tells Genya to handle any complications that occur while he is away.
Amber instructs Genya to seek help from Heinrich or Bertrand, leaving the maid confused about the latter. Smiling brightly, the red-haired woman explains that Sir Bertrand has already committed to guarding the palace grounds. Amber considers Denis Bertrand's motivations, believing he shares her deep-seated grudge against a woman named Bella.
Genya acknowledges her mistress's command with a thoughtful expression while reflecting on the unexpected choice of allies.
When the maid asks about an escort for the trip, the red-haired woman appears genuinely caught off guard.
Genya mentions the army's absence just as a sudden open sounding marks another maid entering the library. A quick tip-tap sounding follows as the brown-haired maid Roxy approaches Amber with several important documents. A soft sounding escapes Genya as she quietly worries about the implications of relying on Sir Bertrand. Roxy promises to organize the necessary affairs, earning a warm and appreciative word of thanks from Amber. A sudden loud sounding startles everyone as Genya realizes a perfect candidate for the escort duty.
Genya enthusiastically suggests that the Duke himself should be the one to escort Amber on her journey.
Imagining a romantic outing, the excited maid gushes over the idea while Amber remains in stunned silence.
Laughing it off, Amber dismisses the suggestion as completely unreasonable, insisting such a thing could never happen. A sneaky expression crosses Genya's face as she questions why a romantic escort is so out of reach.
Roxy agrees that the Duke's escort would be suitable, much to the delight of the dark-haired maid.
Flustered, the red-haired woman begins to stammer as she tries to shut down the maid's persistent teasing.
Amber holds her head in disbelief, loudly wondering how such a scandalous and unlikely situation could occur.
A mental illustration depicts how society would mock a husband for acting as his own wife's escort.
A soft sounding as Amber imagines a blushing Calix offering help, leaving her feeling deeply embarrassed.
Shaking her head to dispel the disturbing thoughts, Amber insists that reality would never match Genya's imagination.
Looking downward, Amber skeptically concludes that Calix would never behave in such an affectionate or helpful manner.
A sudden freeze sounding as Genya stops moving when she notices Amber's intense and focused stare.
With a quick duck sounding, Genya hurries away to attend to the many tasks required for the trip.
Roxy presents several records for inspection, and Amber happily agrees to review the meticulously prepared information immediately.
A soft rustling sounding as Amber looks through the papers, impressed by the thoroughness of Roxy's secret work.
Opening a drawer with a pull-out sounding, Amber discovers a hidden treasure that brings a smile to her face. Amber calls Roxy closer, her eyes shining with kindness as she prepares to offer a personal gift.
A sudden halt sounding as Roxy stops, watching Amber hold out a delicate lace garter as a reward.
Presenting the lace, Amber tells Roxy it isn't much but hopes the maid will appreciate the thoughtful gesture.
Roxy looks on in utter surprise while Amber gives a quick, warm nod of her head to encourage her.
A sudden halt sounding as Roxy hesitates to reach out her hand to accept the lace accessory.
Amber notes the accessory matches the color of Roxy's eyes perfectly, speaking with a gentle and caring tone.
A soft halt sounding as Amber's hand pauses while she notices something unexpected about the maid's wrist.
Staring with wide eyes, the red-haired woman is frozen by a sudden and shocking realization about her maid. With a sudden take-back sounding, Roxy snatches the item away and hides her hand with panicked speed. Looking distressed and shadowed, the brown-haired maid struggles to form words following her sudden and defensive reaction.
A quick tip-top sounding as Roxy bows and flees the room, leaving Amber completely confused.
Another maid enters with a tip-tap sounding to announce that dinner has been fully prepared downstairs.
Amber asks about her husband, only to learn that Calix is working late and will likely miss dinner.
With a quick bow head sounding, the maid departs after Amber acknowledges the news with a sad expression.
Amber wonders if the Duke is intentionally avoiding her, her face clouding with a look of growing suspicion.
The scene shifts abruptly to the late evening hours as the mansion falls into a heavy silence.
Yawning tiredly, the red-haired woman finally prepares to retire for the night after a long, stressful day.
Looking at the closed bedroom door, Amber reflects on the distance between her and her husband tonight.
Amber tells the Duke he shouldn't fear hating her while they stand in the room.
Amber reflects on how Calix has been avoiding her since that day, coming home late.
She recalls the rare sight of Calix sleeping peacefully, a moment she has only witnessed once.
Amber shakes off her heavy thoughts, deciding to sleep early for the busy workday tomorrow.
A sudden halt sounding as Amber checks her pajamas and decides a blanket will cover her. Suddenly, Calix appears in the doorway, his unexpected presence startling her in the dim bedroom light. Surprised, Amber stammers out his name while looking at his silent, shadowed figure in the doorway.
Panicked, Amber tells him to stay still, leaving the Duke confused and standing in place.
A soft, timid sounding as Amber regrets extinguishing the candle while blushing intensely under his gaze. She quickly tries to regain her composure, telling him it is okay for him to move now.
Amber's heart races with nervous energy as she begins walking across the room towards the bed.
She blushes deeply, the atmosphere between them growing increasingly heavy and tense in the quiet night.
Calix approaches his wife, his expression unreadable as he moves closer to her in the darkness.
A rapid palpitate sounding from his chest as his heart beats intensely beneath his thin white shirt. A sudden palpitate sounding continues as Calix exhibits signs of deep nervousness while standing near her.
Blushing, Amber turns away from him, wondering why she is staring so intently at his chest.
Amber's heart races, her face flushed with a deep, embarrassed heat as she avoids his eyes.
Calix struggles to find words, clearly affected by their close proximity and his own growing embarrassment.
Standing amidst ethereal white flowers, Amber looks away, overwhelmed by the romantic tension between them. Several panels highlight Amber in her thin nightgown as she feels exposed and deeply flustered.
Calix blushes deeply as he looks at her, his usual stoicism replaced by visible, bashful emotion.
Calix begins to ask her something, his voice trembling slightly in the quiet, dimly lit chamber.
He explains he finished his preparations sooner than expected, justifying his early return to their bedroom. Clenching his fist, Calix thinks about his decision to stop avoiding her starting from today. Amber similarly reflects that she no longer wishes to maintain the distance between her and Calix.
Amber turns away and tells him to sleep since it's late, her heart still fluttering wildly.
Amber thinks she wants to hide herself away from his intense gaze while her heart races.
Calix thinks about the situation, his hand covering his mouth as he tries to stay calm.
They both stand awkwardly near the bed as Calix begins to speak with a hesitant tone.
A soft flutter sounding as Amber recalls their agreement to finally share the same bed tonight.
To her surprise, Calix turns away and announces he will sleep on the sofa instead. Amber looks disappointed as she watches him lean against the sofa, re-establishing the distance between them.
A soft rustling sounding as Amber climbs into the large, empty bed alone, feeling rejected. She turns away under the covers, forcing herself to focus on sleeping despite her inner turmoil.
Staring into the dark with wide eyes, Amber realizes that sleep is completely beyond her reach.
A low, torpid sounding as Amber sits up, deciding she needs brandy while Calix asks her where she's going.
Calix sits up and watches as she explains she is just going to the kitchen.
They walk together through the quiet mansion, Amber surprised by his insistence on following her.
Calix states they should go together because it is too late for her to be alone. Amber stops and stares at him, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts about his protective behavior.
A soft mumble sounding as she contrasts this Calix with the cold version from her past life.
She remembers the past Calix coldly ordering her to stay in the castle without any warmth. A dark, misty transition reflects the somber and confusing nature of her memories of him. Calix calls out to her, pulling her back to the present with a soft, concerned address.
He asks if she doesn't want to go, noticing her sudden and inexplicable look of distress.
Amber turns away and says she doesn't need anything anymore, deciding to return to sleep. Lying in bed, Amber struggles to reconcile current Calix with the cold-blooded man she once knew.
She wonders if the horrors of war in his previous life were what changed him completely.
A tragic memory shows Calix mourning on a blood-stained battlefield, surrounded by fallen swords and snow.
Contemplating her future, Amber thinks about her role in this life while feeling a deep sadness. A clear morning sky dawning over the estate, signaling the start of a long day. The Duke's laughter echoes across the castle walls as he makes a final, mysterious decision.
Genya wonders about the identity of the escort chosen for the red-haired woman's secret journey.
Amber dismissively suggests any night will suffice before questioning the black-haired maid's sudden and persistent curiosity.
Surveying the busy courtyard, Amber notes the curious absence of any knights near the waiting wagons. A sudden, distinct horse sounding draws their attention as they wait for the mysterious escort's arrival.
Reacting to the approaching hoofbeats, Amber turns her head with a look of quiet and focused anticipation.
Calix appears in his blue uniform, his white cape catching the wind with a flutter sounding.
The black-haired man gazes forward with a stoic expression, surrounded by a soft flutter-sounding atmosphere.
Amber's heart begins to race with a flutter sounding as she stares at her husband's appearance.
With a graceful and swift swoosh sounding, the Duke leaps down from his massive black steed. Amber calls out to her husband as he approaches with a series of rhythmic patter soundings.
A heavy day's sounding hangs between the couple as they stand silently together in the courtyard. Calix extends his hand with a blink sounding, gently requesting that Amber give him her hands.
A blush deepens on Amber's face as she begins to guess the reason for his arrival.
Looking at her husband, Amber wonders if he intends to personally escort her toward the waiting carriage. With a quick and decisive whip sounding, the Duke takes her hand to lead her away. A thick sense of suspense sound builds as Calix struggles to maintain his stoic and calm composure. Amber questions his sudden behavior with an abashed sounding while Calix leads her toward the carriage.
Their hearts beat together with a loud but dump sounding as they cross the courtyard hand in hand.
A soft flutter sounding accompanies the gentle patter of their steps as they reach the carriage. Noticing the comforting heat of his grip, Amber feels her heart race with another badump sounding.
Calix helps Amber toward the carriage, telling her to get in while she agrees to board.
With a sudden sought sounding, the Duke apologizes to his wife for his recent lack of respect.
Calix easily lifts her up with a soft sounding, his strength surprising her amidst glowing flowers.
A powerful butt dump sounding thuds in Amber's chest following the sudden and intimate physical contact between them.
Flustered, Amber asks him to release her hands, and Calix complies with a frantic swoosh sounding.
Staring in disbelief, the red-haired woman begins to process the magnitude of the Duke's unexpected behavior.
Calix explains the difficult road ahead, prompting Amber to question his actual meaning regarding the trip.
The Duke lets out a thoughtful sounding while adjusting his uniform with a quick rustle sounding.
Calix's profile shows him formally announcing his intention to serve as Amber's personal squire for the journey.
Stunned into silence, Amber can only mouth a single word of confusion at his sudden proposal.
Calix confirms his decision with a nod, sounding as Amber attempts to clarify his incredible claim.
Amber tries to rationalize the situation, assuming his involvement is due to a lack of available staff.
The black-haired man insists on taking full personal responsibility for her safety throughout the upcoming trip.
A soft rustle sounding occurs as Calix bows respectfully before his wife's stunned and wide-eyed gaze.
Amber stammers her husband's title, her face flushed with heat as she looks down at him.
Calix reaffirms his dedication to her protection, dismissing the idea of delegating the task to others.
Genya gushes over the Duke's romantic gesture while the other maids watch with excitement and admiration.
Gazing at her with intense blue eyes, Calix formally petitions Amber to assign the escort task to him.
Amber reflects on societal expectations of happy couples while struggling to reconcile their relationship with his behavior.
A sudden realization strikes the red-haired woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and embarrassment.
The courtyard fills with a low chatter sounding as the maids excitedly discuss the Duke's public devotion.
A deep and visible sense of embarrassed sounding washes over Amber as she hides her face.
A final, quiet rustle sounding marks the moment Calix prepares to begin their secret journey together. Calix decisively declares their departure for the city of Torquem, signaling the start of their mission.
With an agile and graceful motion, the Duke mounts his horse to take his place beside her.
Watching him from the carriage window, the red-haired woman remains deeply affected by his attentive actions.
Amber struggles with a mix of suspense and embarrassment soundings as they finally set off together.
The Duke commands the party to begin moving, his authoritative voice echoing as the journey officially commences.
The black-haired man blushes as Amber wonders if the Duke's kindness exceeds simple politeness.
Amber sits alone while a badump sounding echoes her thought that his behavior cannot be real.
Clenching her hand with a sharp sounding, she questions how she can believe his sudden change.
A soft sounding occurs as the red-haired woman gazes thoughtfully out of the carriage window.
The carriage train travels across a barren landscape under a bright sky with a rhythmic clip-clop sounding.
Wind catches Amber's hair as she continues to stare out at the passing scenery in silence.
Amber reflects on her fear of her heart bleeding again while trying to maintain her composure.
The scene shifts to the high stone walls of a grand mansion under a clear blue sky.
A woman in a red dress asks for confirmation while standing beside an older maid.
The maid hesitates with an sounding while discussing how someone was forced into this marriage.
A hand reaches into a pocket with a rustle sounding while questioning the need for incognito travel.
A sinister laughter sounding escapes from the lips of the woman in the red dress.
She notes how much Amber trusts Calix while looking at letters left on a table.
The woman in red smirks, vowing to make Amber realize the truth sooner or later.
A sunset glow settles over the mansion of Baron Torquem as the traveling party finally arrives.
A quick tip-top sounding marks the moment a woman's foot steps down from the carriage.
Amber reflects on her first visit to Torquem territory while a servant invites the Duke inside.
Baron Torquem expresses shock at the Duke's visit to his humble estate as Calix stands stoically.
With a respectful bow sounding, the Baron claims he cannot repay such a great favor. An sounding escapes the Baron as he looks up with a humble, smiling expression.
A head-up sounding accompanies the Baron's realization that the red-haired woman is the Duchess.
With a respectful nod sounding, the Baron welcomes the Duchess and expresses his pleasure at meeting her. Amber watches the Baron bow to Calix with a whoosh sounding while she stands quietly behind. The Baron invites his guests to enjoy a dinner party as the sun begins to set.
Amber's eyes narrow as she suspects that the Baron is actually on Bella's side.
Opening a door, the Baron mentions his daughter manages the house but lacks careful attention.
He clarifies that his daughter still tries her best to ensure their guests have no inconveniences.
A line of servants bows in the foyer, greeting the Duke and Duchess with professional respect.
A woman in a lavender dress approaches with a soft graze sounding as she enters the room.
A rustle sounding occurs as Lydia Torquem stands before the Duke and his red-haired wife. Standing amidst glowing flowers, Lydia introduces herself and offers a warm greeting to the couple.
Calix acknowledges the Baron's daughter with a polite nod sounding while looking at her stoically.
Lydia smiles at the Duke, urging him to take care during his stay at the mansion. She explains she is leaving to prepare the dinner party, noting their long journey's fatigue.
Calix tells Amber they will see each other later, and she quietly agrees to the arrangement.
As Calyx walks away, Amber turns to address Genia while Lydia watches them from a distance. In the library, the Baron asks Lydia if she understands exactly what she must do.
He warns that if she succeeds, the mistress will take full advantage of her position.
Calyx reads a letter with a rustle sounding, wondering what might happen next in their plans.
A formal document states that a man's physical affection often leads to extramarital relations with others.
Smirking behind her fan, the mistress believes replacing a man's obsession is the key to control.
With a smile sounding, the Baron tells Lydia he is confident she understands his complex plan.
The Baron encourages Lydia, claiming that with her beauty, the task will be incredibly easy.
Pointing a finger over tea, the Baron reinforces his manipulative instructions to his daughter.
Lydia listens intently as her father asks if she truly understands the goal of his scheme.
A smile sounding appears on Lydia's face as she is asked to secure the Duke's position.
Surrounded by a sparkling aura, Lydia confidently promises her father to handle the situation successfully.
A rustle sounding accompanies Amber as she walks through the ornate hallway in a new dress.
Amber spots Calyx and feels a powerful but dump sounding as her heart races at his sight.
Blushing deeply, Amber wonders why her heart beats so fast just before someone addresses her.
Amber confirms her well-being while a radiant aura surrounds the Duke's strikingly handsome presence. A sparkling aura surrounds Calyx as flowers bloom, highlighting his incredibly noble and graceful appearance.
Feeling overwhelmed, Amber turns away from her husband with a quick and avoid-sounding motion.
Calyx urges her to hurry while Amber's heart races with a rhythmic but dumped sounding inside.
The traveling party gathers for a formal dinner within the Baron's spacious and elegantly decorated dining room.
Amber struggles to control her racing heart with another badump sounding as she questions her reaction.
A series of furtive and badump soundings accompany Amber as she stands closely behind her husband.
Stunned, Amber processes the unexpected seating arrangement while a dazed sounding hangs over her initial confusion.
A maid helps Amber into her seat at the far end of the long dining table.
Amber observes the table with caution, suspecting a plot while a clanging sounding marks the service. A servant presents a dish of creamy soup garnished with specialty salmon to the seated guests.
Baron Torquem inquires about the meal while Amber politely expresses her deep satisfaction with the food.
A sharp clack sounding echoes through the room as the Baron calls for his daughter's presence.
Lydia Torquem enters the room with a respectful bow sounding, apologizing for her late arrival.
Clad in a purple dress, Lydia offers a charming smile while requesting forgiveness for her tardiness.
Amber gazes at the Baron's daughter, silently confirming the woman's identity as she observes her carefully. Surrounded by flowers, Lydia is invited to take her place at the table with a smile. Amber watches in shock as Lydia takes a seat directly beside the Duke at the table.
Lydia seeks permission to sit next to Calyx, her gaze fixed on the stoic, black-haired man.
The brown-haired woman repeats her request to sit beside the Duke with a hopeful and polite expression.
Amber watches the interaction with a serious expression, her eyes reflecting a sudden sense of realization.
Lydia rationalizes her seating choice by pointing out the limited space available at the small table.
Amber stares intently at the Baron's daughter, wondering what the woman's true intentions might actually be. Showing no outward jealousy, Amber calmly invites Lydia to sit and eat before the meal cools.
Lydia acknowledges the Duchess's invitation while silently questioning Amber's unexpectedly calm and bland reaction to her.
A servant begins to present the next course, featuring a bottle of the region's specialty wine.
Lydia focuses her attention on the Duke, her expression filled with a sense of careful calculation.
Calyx remains silent and stoic as Lydia addresses him by his title during the formal dinner.
Holding a wine bottle, Lydia politely asks the Duke if he would join her for a glass.
A rich red wine flows into a glass with a pour sounding while Amber watches the scene.
Lydia laughs softly while sitting beside Calyx, attempting to engage him in a lighthearted dinner conversation.
The Baron's daughter holds her wineglass with a subtle smile, clearly pleased with her proximity. A light blush colors Lydia's cheeks as she continues to observe the Duke with focused intensity. Baron Torquem and his daughter share a moment of silent understanding across the candlelit dining table. The Baron laughs, noting how grateful his daughter is for the opportunity to meet the Duke. Baron Torquem praises Calyx's legendary heroism, claiming that Lydia has long looked forward to this meeting. The Baron reveals Lydia's dedication to preparing for the trip while the woman reacts with bashful modesty.
A sudden halt sounding occurs as the Baron asks Calyx to offer Lydia a compliment. Calyx sets down his teacup, his expression hardening as he prepares to address the Baron's request.
A thick, silent sounding falls over the room as everyone waits for the Duke's response. Baron Torquem sweats nervously, assuming that the Duke has noticed the subtle details of their preparation.
Laughing loudly, the Baron boasts about Lydia's devotion to the Duke while she protests her father's words.
Lydia attempts to downplay her father's claims, insisting her feelings are purely based on gratitude and respect.
Amber watches the exchange with utter confusion, struggling to understand the purpose of their dramatic behavior. Lydia politely asks for permission to present a special gift to the Duke during the dinner.
Following Lydia's command, a maid enters with a bow, sounding to bring out the intended present.
The wooden box opens with a blink sounding to reveal 2 rare and brightly colored lucuma fruits.
Calyx expresses surprise at the fruit, questioning whether people in the region still grow the rare lucuma.
Shaking her head with a soft sounding, Lydia explains the extreme rarity of the fruit following regional destruction.
Amber questions the unfamiliar fruit while the Baron asks if this is her first time seeing lucuma. The narrator explains that sharing a lucuma fruit is a traditional wedding night custom. Count Zymo notes that the fruit is typically served to couples on their nuptial night.
Amber stares at the fruit with a look of quiet shock and growing realization. A sudden clock sounding accompanies the slicing of the green fruit on a white plate.
Amber pushes the fruit toward the Duke, stating she prepared it especially for him.
The brown-haired Lydia looks on with a soft smile while encouraging the Duke to eat. A tense silence fills the room as Amber waits for her husband's reaction to the gift. Another soft clack sounding marks the moment the plate is set before the black-haired Duke. Amber's hand trembles as she experiences a sudden sharp squeeze of intense and visible anxiety. A rhythmic ba-dump sounding echoes as Amber worries Calyx won't be swayed by her gesture.
A gentle gray sounding follows as the Duke slowly moves his hand toward the table.
A rhythmic ba-dump sounding fills Amber's thoughts as she hopes to maintain her current position.
Calyx looks up with a cold gaze, asking if there are any other remaining matters.
Count Zymo lets out a nervous, audible swallow sounding as the tension in the room rises.
The mustached man tries to adjust his expression, stammering while attempting to find his words.
Count Zymo asks Amber about adopting to the east, and she politely confirms her success.
With a forced smile, the man notes that things are different than what he heard.
The Count comments on the Duke's poor appetite, implying meal preparation is Amber's local duty. Amber looks visibly annoyed as the Count suggests she does not understand specific Eastern customs.
Count Zymo gestures to Lydia, suggesting she could take better care of the Duke's needs. A sudden oomph sounding follows as Calyx slams the table, demanding to know his intent.
Panic-stricken, the man insists he was merely expressing worry for the Duchess's heavy local responsibilities.
Calyx decides to leave immediately, causing everyone to rise with a sudden and sharp jerk.
Realizing he overstepped, the Count acknowledges his mistake in speaking so disrespectfully to the Duchess.
The brown-haired woman follows the Duke down the hallway, calling out for him to wait. A sudden and sharp stop sounding accompanies the Duke as he halts his corridor stride.
Calyx holds out his hand, coldly informing the madam that she is no longer needed.
The black-haired Duke turns to his wife and simply tells her it is time to depart. Amber feels her heart stirred as she witnesses her husband's sudden, firm, and protective stance. A rhythmic but dump sounding accompanies a hand reaching out amidst a shimmering and magical atmosphere.
Calyx takes Amber's hand while their hearts beat with a series of frantic but dump soundings.
A firm grip marks the moment the black-haired Duke takes Amber's hand with deep conviction.
Amber and Calyx stand together, their hearts continuing to beat with heavy ba-dump soundings.
The couple walks together down the silent hallway, leaving the uncomfortable dinner scene far behind.
Calyx pauses and turns his head toward Amber to address her with a much softer expression.
The Duke offers a sincere apology for the disrespect Amber endured from the mustached man.
Looking away, Calyx explains that he takes full responsibility for everything occurring in the East. Calyx blushes while expressing his deep hope that Amber does not come to hate the region.
A rhythmic but dump sounding fills Amber as she realizes she is seeing a new side.
Calyx looks deeply conflicted, pondering his next move while reflecting on his own swirling emotions.
Amber reaches out her hand toward her husband with a look of gentle and sincere affection. Placing her hand on the Duke's face, Amber offers him a moment of quiet, tender comfort.
A sudden stirred feeling overtakes the Duke as Amber tells him not to worry.
Reassuring her husband, Amber smiles radiantly and tells him that she is doing perfectly fine.
A loud but dump sounding follows as Calyx blushes intensely while looking at his smiling wife.
Later that evening, Calyx sits on the edge of his bed alone, processing the events. Calyx experiences a sudden jerk sounding as he recalls the image of Amber's bright smile. Clutching his forehead, the Duke wonders if he is losing his mind over his wife. A rhythmic but dump sounding echoes as Calyx feels his heart racing at the recent memory.
Calyx lets out a heavy high sounding, finally admitting that his feelings are driving him crazy.
A light step sounding echoes through the dim hallway as a foot moves forward. Calyx's blue eye widens as he hears a noise, wondering what could be happening nearby.
With a knock-knock sounding at the door, Calyx looks up and wonders who comes visiting.
A quick walk sounding follows as Calyx moves toward the door, suspecting someone has finally arrived. With an open sounding, the Duke peeks through the doorway and questions if it is the Duchess. A sudden halt sounding occurs as Calyx stops in his tracks upon seeing Amber in the hallway. The black-haired man's face settles into a frown as he looks at her and addresses her.
Amber reflects on Calyx's strange behavior, letting out a pew sounding while worrying about her sleep.
A transition shifts the focus toward other stories as the late-night silence deepens within the mansion. The moon shines through the large window, casting a cool blue glow over the quiet estate. Amber walks gently through the hall, wondering about the plot but feeling relieved by the trick. She pauses with a somber expression, fearing that the hatred from her previous life might repeat.
A grainy texture signals a transition back to the past when many events happened previously.
A murmur, whisper sounding fills a grand ballroom where nobles gather and talk amongst themselves.
Amber glances toward Calyx, recalling how even the Emperor harbored hatred toward the powerful Duke.
She remembers how Calyx's striking appearance alone was enough to attract a massive amount of attention. Ladies gossip behind fans, praising the Duke for being incredibly brave and strong on the battlefield. Amber notes that despite the hatred from his family, many girls still desired to marry him.
Countless women sought to please Calix, even if it meant giving Amber many annoyed, envious looks.
The red-haired woman wonders why those girls were so wary of her during their previous encounters.
Amber casts a final glance back at the memory, her expression reflecting a deep, lingering sadness.
Turning away, she acknowledges that there was truly nothing between her and the Duke back then.
The scene shifts back to the present as Amber continues her late-night stroll through the manor.
Walking with a tip-tap sounding, she wonders if his straightforward nature prevented ties with other women.
She stops suddenly, questioning if the current version of her husband might actually be different now.
Amber imagines Calix being open with other women, unlike his stoic self before the previous war.
A sharp clock sounding catches her attention as she looks toward a partially open door nearby.
Looking down toward the stairs, Amber wonders who could possibly be awake and meeting so late.
Her eye widens in shock as she catches sight of something completely unexpected in the darkness.
With a turnback sounding, Amber spins around to fully witness the scene unfolding behind her.
She stares in disbelief at Calix and Lydia Torcum standing together, wondering why they are meeting.
Amber ducks behind a corner, questioning why she feels the need to hide from them now.
With a squeeze sounding, she clenches the fabric of her nightgown tightly against her chest.
A soft tip-top sounding marks her quiet movement as she decides to step out.
Calix reacts with a jerking sounding, sensing the Duchess's presence as he stands beside the other woman. With an appear sounding, Amber steps into the light, shocking both the Duke and the Baron's daughter.
A surprise sounding hangs in the air as Amber stares at the pair with a cold expression.
Calix asks Amber why she's still awake instead of resting as the tension between them grows.
Lydia looks away with a blush, appearing flustered by the Duchess's sudden and unexpected appearance. Amber wonders if she is feeling hurt as a sharp sting of jealousy flares within her.
She finds it hard to breathe, her eyes filled with a sudden and intense sense of betrayal.
Fuming, Amber questions why the man who acted like a stone Buddha is now meeting women late.
Recalling his earlier outburst, she becomes unhappy and wonders why he is just standing there staring.
Calix stares back with a confused expression, seemingly unaware of the reason for her growing anger.
With a clench sounding, Amber grips her shawl tightly, her gaze fixed on her silent husband.
Calix tells Lydia to look at him for a moment, causing the woman to flinch nervously. Lydia makes a quick excuse and flees with a clump sounding, leaving the couple alone together.
A heavy, quiet sounding falls over the hallway as the Duke and Duchess face each other.
Calix questions her with a staring sounding, noticing the visible distress on the red-haired woman's face.
Calix suggests they go somewhere else to talk, and Amber responds with a quiet nod sounding.
Calix and Amber walk together through the hallway with a clump sound air.
They stop and turn toward each other as a soft clump sounding echoes.
Calix asks if she is angry with him, causing Amber to flinch slightly.
Amber turns with a surprised expression while Calix explains the situation with Lydia.
She laughs it off, insisting there is no reason for her to be upset.
Calix reveals Lydia came to expose her father's malicious plan, shocking the Duchess. Earlier, Lydia approached the Duke in the hallway asking for a private moment.
Calix reacts with a frown sounding, clearly displeased by the woman's late-night interruption.
He tells her to return home, but she desperately pleads for him to listen.
Moving closer with an approach sounding, Lydia claims she came solely for the Duke.
Calix remains cold and unyielding as he listens to the woman's desperate advances.
With a back-off sounding, he questions her nonsense while she nervously retreats.
The Duke sternly reminds her that he previously rejected any further specialized services.
Lydia is left trembling and startled, whispering his title with a look of fear.
Calix decides to address her disrespect tomorrow, causing the woman to flinch nervously.
Panicking, Lydia tries to clarify that his assumptions about her intentions are wrong.
She insists there is something vital she needs to share with him immediately.
In the present, Calix explains the Baron's plan was for Lydia to seduce him.
Amber reacts with a startled sound as she hears about the intended replacement attempt. Calix questions why she would feel anger toward a woman sent for such purpose. Amber internally reasons that they aren't a real couple, so she shouldn't interfere.
Calix notes her obvious anger, but Amber stubbornly denies having any such feelings.
Standing before her, the Duke requests that the Duchess look directly at him.
A close approach sounding occurs as Calix leans in, making Amber feel quite nervous.
She steals a quick glance sounding, her cheeks beginning to flush from his proximity.
Calix's intense gaze remains fixed on her, his blue eyes reflecting a sudden softness. Amber's heart begins to beat with a badump sounding as she covers her face.
Noting her flushed complexion with an approach sounding, Calix comments on her red face.
Amber's heart continues with a badump sounding as she denies any romantic fluttering feelings.
With the right sounding, Calix attributes her condition to a very low alcohol tolerance.
Amber looks up in confusion, surprised by his practical and unromantic medical conclusion.
He wonders if the dinner wine was too strong for her usual constitution.
As he advises her on light drinks, a soft puff sounding escapes Amber's lips.
Calix's blue eye widens in surprise at her sudden and unexpected lighthearted reaction.
Amber breaks into a giggle, sounding while the Duke watches her with total confusion.
With a ha-ha-ha sounding, she laughs at how his serious face ruins the moment.
Puzzled, Calix asks if he misspoke while Amber continues to laugh at his earnestness. She realizes his stoic nature is a mismatch for his attempts at being caring.
The Duke remains baffled, questioning why she finds his concern so incredibly humorous.
Amber struggles to explain her laughter, her amusement lingering in the quiet hallway.
A warm smile sounding fills the air as Amber admits she simply feels happy.
Calix blushes as his heart reacts with a badump sounding to her genuine joy.
Surrounded by flowers, Amber dismisses the need for a special reason for her happiness.
His heart continues with a thump-thump sounding as he looks at her fondly. Amber explains her insomnia and decides it is finally time to return to bed.
The Duke politely asks if he may escort her back to her pyther room.
Amber pauses, looking at him with a silent and thoughtful expression for a moment.
With a bright smile sounding, she happily accepts his offer to walk her back.
Later, Amber sits on her sofa, reflecting on the Baron's scheme Lydia exposed.
She wonders why the Baron is suddenly targeting her position for his own daughter.
A white box opens with a quick clack sounding, revealing several old and folded letters.
Amber holds a letter with a determined look, refusing to let the matter go easily.
The scene shifts as white clouds drift lazily across a brilliant and blue midday sky.
Amber asks the brown-haired Lydia if she understands the true purpose of their private meeting.
Looking down nervously, the brown-haired woman reacts with a tense and heavy swallow sounding. With a deep bow sounding, Lydia offers a sincere apology for her previous day's disrespect.
Amber acknowledges the apology while remaining silent, her profile reflecting a deep and calculating thought.
Lydia admits her initial plan was to charm the Duke during the upcoming secret trip.
Calix stares coldly as he recalls questioning Lydia's improper behavior during their late-night encounter. Lydia explains the Duke's rejection of her father's service offers and her desperate confession.
Her hands tighten with a grip sounding as she details her father's ambitious, crazy plans.
Looking up pleadingly, Lydia requests the Duchess's forgiveness while showing her deep and genuine remorse. Amber watches her with a stern expression, the weight of the situation filling the room. Lydia flinches with a sharp startle sounding as she waits for the Duchess's final judgment.
The brown-haired woman admits she was easily swayed by her father's intense and selfish ambition.
Amber points out that Lydia's sudden interest in her position before returning east is suspicious.
Amber questions why she would suddenly desire a position that already has a rightful owner.
Amber asks if someone provided Lydia with urgent information regarding the Duke's secret travel plans.
Moving her hand with a raised sounding, Amber holds up a specific and significant old letter.
The letter displays a royal crest and a signature, causing the brown-haired woman to freeze.
Trembling, Lydia lets out a muzzled gasp, realizing her father lied about burning the document. Amber asks Lydia if she recognizes the signature while holding the letter with newfound confidence. Amber recalls studying Bella's signature in a notebook, realizing its usefulness in exposing the scheme. Shock and fear overwhelm Lydia as she reacts to the revelation with an alarm sounding.
A close-up captures the absolute terror on Lydia's face as her family's lies are revealed.
Dropping to her knees with a genuflex sounding, Lydia blames the mistress for the orders.
Sobbing, the brown-haired woman admits her foolishness and desperately pleads for Amber's mercy and forgiveness.
Amber decides to let the matter go for now, surprising the emotional and relieved Lydia.
The Duchess warns that her future treatment of the Torkham family depends entirely on Lydia's behavior.
Lydia bows her head low, confirming she understands the Duchess's terms with absolute solemn obedience.
The brown-haired woman walks away with a tremble sounding, completely defeated by the Duchess's authority. Resting in her chair, Amber lets out a tired Kang sounding as she processes everything.
Amber realizes the Mistress Bella likely orchestrated the rude scheme due to her hatred for Calix.
She remembers how hostile Bella was toward the black-haired Duke in their previous troubled life.
A maid enters with a tip-top sounding, announcing it is time to prepare for departure.
As the maid helps her into a cloak, Amber notes the biting cold of the outdoors.
A loud knock-knock sounding echoes through the room, prompting Amber to wonder who has arrived.
Amber tells the visitor to enter as she finishes her grooming in front of the mirror. Calix enters the room, his heart reacting with a badump sounding to the Duchess's striking appearance. Walking toward him with a tip-tap sounding, Amber confirms that she has prepared everything well.
Calix remains silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on Amber as they stand together privately. Noticing his stare, Amber asks if there is a problem or if he is feeling on ball.
Calix warns her that the journey to the Eastern lands will be a difficult, grueling experience.
Amber smiles softly, assuring the Duke that she is fully aware of the challenges they face.
Amber reflects on the significance of this trip, feeling a personal connection to the upcoming journey.
Calix acknowledges her sense of responsibility for the Eastern land as they continue their quiet conversation.
Surrounded by blooming roses, Amber expresses her deep desire to experience the world on her own.
The black-haired man watches her, noting that her determination is the reason for her many plans.
Calix reaches out, offering to accompany the red-haired Duchess on this new and uncertain path.
Amber places her hand in his with a gentle sounding, accepting his offer to travel together.
Amber reflects on the peaceful conclusion of their trip as they depart for their next destination.
She recalls sharing supplies and listening to the heartfelt stories of the local people she encountered.
Despite their hardships, the red-haired Duchess finds hope in the resilience and smiles of the struggling families.
Standing beside the black-haired Duke, Amber feels a growing sense of accomplishment in changing the East. As they near Duke Petro's territory, the carriage moves with a sudden, loud thump sounding over ground.
A rhythmic clop-clop sounding of horses echoes as Amber looks out with a startled expression.
The journey continues through the harsh terrain with a sharp, high-pitched hiss sounding from the carriage.
Amber's eyes widen in genuine shock as the reality of their surroundings finally begins to set in. The landscape reveals a desolate and barren wasteland under the darkening hues of a twilight sky.
Stepping outside, Amber surveys the deserted environment where the wind howls through the jagged, rocky cliffs.
She realizes this isolated location was specifically chosen for its secrecy, though its desolation is haunting.
Looking through a window, Amber notes the extreme difficulty of communicating with the world from here. Calyx explains that the local population is significantly smaller than those in other more prosperous territories.
Their discussion is interrupted as an elderly man with a wooden cane approaches the noble couple.
Identified as Viscount Petro, the gray-haired man offers a humble apology for his delayed and late greeting.
Bowing deeply, the Viscount expresses his profound gratitude for the vital items Amber sent him recently.
His weathered hands grip the cane as he mentions enjoying warm food for the first time.
Amber graciously accepts his thanks, assuring the elderly Viscount that she was truly happy to assist.
Turning her attention toward the window, Amber questions the activities of the children playing outside nearby.
The gray-haired Viscount reacts with a heavy ah sounding, his expression filled with a lingering sadness.
He explains the children are often left alone to forage for food due to missing adults.
Suddenly, the room is filled with a loud bang sounding as a door is thrown wide open.
A small, disheveled girl rushes in with a frantic rush in sounding, pursued by a concerned maid.
The girl named Clara drops to the floor with a heavy knee-down sounding before the Duchess.
With tears in her eyes, the young girl desperately pleads for Amber to help her mother.
The Viscount scolds Clara for her disrespect, ordering the child to move away from the Duchess.
Amber gently lowers herself with a soft sit-down sounding to meet the crying child at eye level.
With a comforting gaze, the Duchess asks Clara to explain exactly what is happening to her. Clara breaks into a heartbroken sob sounding while begging for someone to save her dying mother.
Amber listens with a somber profile as the child's desperate sob sounding continues to fill the air.
Calyx looks toward the Viscount while the sound of a painful sob sounding lingers in the room.
Determined to help, Amber decides to visit the girl's home immediately before taking her scheduled meal.
The scene shifts to a cluster of makeshift tents huddled together on the barren, rocky earth.
Inside, a woman named Avril struggles for breath with a faint huff sounding, appearing dangerously weak.
Amber learns from the Viscount that the people here are suffering from severe and chronic malnutrition.
The Viscount recounts how the overworked Avril fainted days ago and has not recovered since then.
Clara continues to cry with a soft sob sounding, overwhelmed by the helplessness of her mother's condition.
Disturbed by the sight, Amber asks if such debilitating conditions are common among the people here. The Viscount notes that Amber's recent supplies have provided some small measure of relief for the woman.
However, he warns that once the supplies are exhausted, the tragic cycle of suffering will surely repeat.
Amber orders her maid Jenya to bring the most useful spare items to help the sick woman.
She reflects on her past life, determined to use her more active role to change this future.
As Amber tends to the sick woman, Calyx stands silently behind her, watching the scene with concern.
With a sudden startle sounding, the Viscount reacts as Calyx offers to personally help with the situation. The elderly man is stunned, questioning how he could possibly allow a duke to perform such labor.
Amber thanks her maid while Avril lets out a painful cough sounding from her bed of straw.
Calyx remains steadfast, firmly repeating his genuine desire to help in any way that is needed.
Carrying a heavy load of wood, Calyx regrets letting Amber see the darkest parts of his territory.
He drops the bundle with a heavy bang sounding, the weight of his responsibilities now clear.
Letting out a tired pew sounding, Calyx wonders if Amber will want to leave after seeing this.
Calyx stands behind Amber, privately questioning if he can truly hold her back now. The black-haired duke turns slightly, his expression reflecting the heavy burden of his thoughts.
Looking over the desolate landscape, Calyx wonders if asking Amber to stay is right. Amber sighs with a haze sounding while the Viscount apologizes for their poor treatment.
The gray-haired Viscount explains his isolation, prompting Amber to ask about his absent family.
Petro reveals his wife's passing and his children's abandonment of their noble titles long ago.
Calyx seeks clarification, asking if the elderly man truly resides in this place completely alone.
Bowing with a solemn bow sounding, the Viscount insists he absolutely cannot leave this land.
A vision of the past reveals the East as a golden land of brilliant help.
Young Petro ambitiously vows to transform the East into the most livable place for everyone.
Accompanied by a ha-ha sounding laugh, young Petro stands resolutely before the visiting Duke Miles.
Duke Miles Talesdoe smiles warmly among roses, agreeing to search for something Petro has requested.
Young Petro asks about Miles's departure, and Miles explains he must prepare for his wedding. Miles confirms the bride's arrival at the Citadel, surprising the young Petro with the news.
With sparkling eyes, Petro asks about the Duchess's character and her rumored talents and abilities.
Miles humbly praises his future bride, claiming she is a far better person than himself.
Petro's heart reacts with a badump sounding as he considers the change that would come.
The narrative shifts, revealing how the once affluent eastern land has drastically changed over time.
Farmers lament the lack of rain, confused by the unprecedented and harsh change in weather.
A leaf withers with a rustle sounding, emphasizing the unexpected and tragic decline of nature.
The scene captures the desolate state of the village and the Duke's distant stone mansion. A voice from within the mansion questions if the drought will continue for another year.
An administrator warns the Duke that things will worsen as local crops continue to fail.
Calix covers his eyes in despair.
The black-haired man informs the Duke of another pressing problem currently plaguing the troubled territory.
Roaring with a grah sounding, a monster attacks as a haya sounding battle cry erupts.
Calix slashes through the monsters with a huff sounding, his white cloak stained with blood.
A bloody sword is gripped tightly, letting out a sharp puff sounding amidst the carnage. Breathing heavily with a huff sounding, the blood-splattered Duke stares ahead with a fierce intensity.
Viscount Petro explains how desolation and monsters drove the residents and nobles away one by one.
Amber looks at the elderly man, questioning why he chose to stay despite the abandonment.
Petro remembers the beautiful fields of his youth, which he believed were unlike any other.
Dismissing it as useless gossip with a ha-ha sounding laugh, Petro avoids dwelling on the past. The Viscount asks for the couple's generosity, admitting he is simply relying on his confidence.
With a flap sounding of her cloak, Amber reflects on finding opportunity at despair's end. A message across the sunset details Amber's original thought that saving the East ensured survival.
Amber realizes that others must love this land as desperately as she does in both lives. Determined, Amber looks ahead, realizing her reasons for saving this land have evolved beyond mere survival. Footsteps echo with a top sounding as the couple stands together on the high, cracked balcony. Calix looks at his wife, softly asking if the land's current state has disappointed her.
Turning toward him with a tip-top sounding, Amber addresses Calix as they share the view.
They stand together privately, their presence punctuated by a soft tip-tap sounding on the stone. Calix admits he never heard the stories regarding the land's former and significant eastern affluence.
Looking at the cracked earth, Calix finds the tales of the land's beauty hard to believe.
Calix expresses a deep, wistful desire to show Amber the beautiful land from the old stories.
Amber remains silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon as she processes his words.
Calix somberly admits he was wrong to expect more, his expression shadowed by the setting sun.
Amber speaks rapidly, explaining that medical manpower and health administrators are more urgent than simple goods.
Amber considers her strategy for assessing the East's medical situation without alerting the other regional territories. Turning back with a smile sounding, the Duchess brightly asks the Duke for his personal thoughts.
Standing against a vibrant sunset, Calix looks down thoughtfully while letting out a quiet whisper.
A light blush touches Calix's cheeks as he confirms Amber's previous claim that she doesn't hate this place. Inside the room, Amber looks up at Calix with a gentle smile, expressing her own heartfelt wishes. Amber envisions the desolate land returning to its former beauty and abundance as she smiles among blooming flowers. Calix's heart reacts with a sudden but dump sounding as he considers the possibilities for their shared future. Crouching alone in the moonlit room, Calix reflects on how Amber has remained true to herself after all. Standing together on the balcony at sunset, Calix begins to make a silent, determined vow to his wife. His hand tightens into a fist with a firm squeeze sounding, reflecting the strength of his inner resolve.
Amber gazes at him with an affectionate smile, promising to do absolutely everything she can for his sake.
Cloaked in dark robes, the couple walks through the night village while a soft tip-tap sounding follows them. Beneath a starry night sky, the log cabin stands silent as Amber observes a specific line of the landscape. Noting the presence of human traces, Calix confirms someone entered first before responding with a solemn nod sounding.
Amber's question about a golden crow is interrupted by a sharp knock-knock sounding against the wooden door.
Amber's eye widens with a sudden startle sounding as she mentions glowing laurel leaves while feeling deeply confused. Calix hesitates with a soft, hesitant sounding before opening the door with a sharp clack sounding to reveal the visitor. A cloaked figure opens the door with a low kss sounding, leaving the identity of the visitor in question.
Shocked by the visitor's appearance, Amber watches as he enters the room with a deliberate step sounding.
Inside the dimly lit cabin, the floorboards groan with a repetitive clack-clack sounding under the weight of footsteps. The mysterious man removes his hood with a quick takedown sounding, finally revealing his familiar and weary face. Recognizing the man, Amber stands frozen as her father greets her warmly after a long time apart. With a look of deep sadness and longing, the reddish-brown-haired man addresses Amber as his beloved daughter.
Stunned into silence, Amber reacts with a sharp freeze sounding while questioning why her father has come here.
Her father speaks with a gentle and regretful tone, noting that it has been 3 months since they last met.
Amber turns to Calix, requesting a private moment to speak with her father as a rustle sounding fills the air.
Agreeing to her request with a respectful nod sounding, Calix promises to wait for her outside the cabin. The heavy door closes with a loud slam sounding, leaving Amber and her father alone to face their past. Amber maintains a somber and serious expression as she prepares to address the man standing before her.
Expressing her surprise, Amber admits she never expected him to travel all the way to such a remote location.
Casting a quick glance sounding his way, Amber explains that his personal entrustment was the reason for her arrival. Her father's hands move with a nervous roll sounding as he expresses his concern for her happiness and well-being. Amber looks at him skeptically, questioning if he truly brought a bodyguard with him on such a secretive trip. Her father looks startled, asking if she came alone, while Amber remains puzzled by the mention of a bodyguard. Suddenly, a glowing magical portal erupts between them, marked by a sharp double exclamation sounding of surprise. A blonde figure begins to emerge from the swirling white and purple light of the mysterious magical gateway. Stepping fully into the room, a blonde woman in a decorated blue cloak arrives with a soft rustle sounding. Amber's eyes widen in total disbelief as she stares at the unexpected visitor appearing from thin air. The blonde magician Natasha Riart greets Amber with a light tap sounding, her arrival causing immediate shock and confusion.
Natasha stands calmly before her younger sister, her cold gaze revealing her status as a rare and emotionless genius.
Utterly stunned, Amber can only whisper the word sister as she processes the arrival of her powerful sibling.
A memory reveals young Natasha as a blank-faced child, gifted with magic but stripped of all human feelings.
The scene shifts to a grand garden fountain, setting the stage for a past event at a noble gathering.
A group of young girls enjoys a tea party, calling out for Amber to hurry up and join them.
Young Amber looks hesitant as she holds on to Natasha's arm while a sudden shout draws their attention away.
A young boy points aggressively, ordering Amber not to bring the monster back to their play area again.
Defending her sister, young Amber insists Natasha is not a monster despite the boy's cruel and mocking insults. The boy continues to mock Natasha, claiming that adults warn them not to play with someone who cannot laugh.
Natasha's expression turns dark with a gloomy sounding as the boy demands that she leave their presence immediately.
Enraged by his taunts, young Natasha shoves the boy backward with a forceful and sudden push sounding.
The confrontation escalates quickly as the boy hits the ground with a heavy and dull thud sounding.
Losing control, young Natasha delivers a brutal punch sounding to the boy while Amber screams out in absolute horror.
Horrified, young Amber screams for her sister as a brutal punch sounding marks a violent escalation.
The grand mansion stands silent and imposing under the glow of a bright full moon. Young Amber eavesdrops as her mother plans to send Natasha to a distant school, wondering why everything is happening this way.
Her father agrees there is no other way, while the mother suggests that Amber must also be sent away. Amber is devastated as her mother assumes her understanding nature means she will accept being cast aside without complaint.
A girl at a noble gathering apologizes to young Amber while looking visibly uncomfortable and nervous.
Amber stands frozen as the girl bluntly bans her from ever attending her tea parties again in the future.
Her hands tighten around a book with a firm squeeze, sounding as she resolves to compensate for her sister's perceived lack. Now an adult, Amber questions if her father neglects her because she lacks Natasha's genius for magic, leaving him stuttering. Overwhelmed by years of neglect, Amber demands to know why her father never truly cared for or prioritized her.
A sharp knock-knock sounding hits the door as Amber reflects on her lifelong role as her sister's caretaker.
Sobbing into her pillow as a knock-knock sounding continues, Amber listens as her father begs for her attention.
Standing outside her closed door, her father begins to speak with a heavy and hesitant tone.
A single tear falls as her father pleads for her to understand and yield to their wishes one last time.
Amber collapses in despair, screaming that she has already yielded her entire life and has nothing left to give.
Natasha looks on stoically as the narrative notes that she was always the one receiving Amber's constant, silent care. Amber stares at the blonde woman in the blue cloak, questioning why Natasha has come to this desolate place. Her father explains that Natasha insisted on acting as a bodyguard after reading Amber's letter, leaving Amber stunned. Amber reacts with a sudden flinch, sounding as Natasha bluntly remarks on the desolate and ruined state of the Eastern Territory. Her father calls out to Natasha nervously while Amber admits she is well acquainted with her sister's cold and detached manner.
Natasha expresses relief at meeting Amber and asks for guidance on how to avoid difficult work in the future.
Feeling a surge of deep unhappiness, Amber realizes her sister has no idea of the internal struggle her presence causes.
The narrative recalls 10 tragic years that ended in Amber's murder at the hands of a truly despicable emperor.
Amber questions if her family would have ever bothered to visit her if she had not initiated the contact herself.
Her father quickly dismisses her accusation, his face filled with immediate panic and a desperate need to explain.
Looking ashamed, her father admits their previous behavior was shameless and that they felt they couldn't possibly reach out first.
A memory shows the father's shock when Amber's letter finally arrived, breaking the long and painful silence between them.
Her father places a hand on his chest, struggling to find the words to express the depth of his regret.
Amber looks away, her thoughts revealing a bitter realization that she actually believed she would be able to forgive them. Her hand clenches into a tight fist as she notes her current resentment feels far worse than her previous encounter with Bella.
Tears well in Amber's eyes as she admits to feeling an overwhelming sense of frustration and profound sadness. Natasha admits she lacks human emotion and doesn't understand Amber's anger, yet acknowledges that Amber has endured much rage.
Amber stares at her sister with a cold, questioning look, waiting to hear the point of this strange confession.
With a blank and emotionless expression, Natasha looks directly at Amber and bluntly orders her sister to hit her.
Natasha stands firm, telling Amber to strike her as many times as it takes until her sister feels satisfied. Amber remains silent, her expression hardening as she processes Natasha's bizarre and detached offer for penance.
Amber scoffs at the idea that violence would bring her peace, but Natasha insists it is the only way to fight back.
Letting out a heavy and tired sigh sounding, Amber touches her forehead and admits that hitting Natasha wouldn't change anything.
Turning away with a sudden turn sounding, Amber moves toward the door, having reached the limit of her patience.
Walking away with a steady step sounding, Amber stops to address both her father and sister with a final statement.
Amber turns back with a sharp turn sounding, telling them that true apology would mean not asking for forgiveness at all.
Her hand tightens on the railing with a firm clench sounding as she reaffirms her vow to leave her horrible past behind.
Amber looks at her family with a chilling resolve, demanding that they simply accept the reality of her resentment.
She orders them to live with the knowledge of her anger, while her father can only whisper her name in sorrow.
Her father agrees to stop seeking forgiveness, finally accepting that the current state of their relationship is entirely his fault.
With a pained grit sounding of her teeth, Amber listens as her father admits he never treated his daughters equally. Amber scoffs at the mention of equality, questioning if this pathetic attempt at reconciliation is the best he can offer her.
Her father reacts with a sharp lift sounding of his head, defensively claiming that their past decisions were never easy.
Avoiding her gaze with a quick swish sounding, the man looks down and begins to offer another weak justification.
Shadowed by guilt, her father finally confesses that his actions were driven by a paralyzing fear of the Emperor. The father recalls how their territory was attacked by the Emperor's order following a rejected marriage.
Amber looks on with a grim expression as she listens to the horrifying family history.
Her father covers his face, apologizing for being a coward who abandoned his own daughter.
A painful memory shows Amber boarding a carriage as her father watches with deep regret.
He admits he took her kindness for granted, wrongly assuming she would understand his neglect.
A sniffle sounding escapes him as he vows never to repeat such a terrible mistake.
Standing in the dim light, the father offers Amber another sincere and heavy-hearted apology. Amber remains silent, her expression obscured as she processes the emotional weight of his words.
She admits she lacks the confidence to ever restore their broken family to its past state.
Her father can only whisper her name, his face filled with sorrow at her rejection.
Amber reflects on the fact that she has already moved past the trauma they caused.
Outside, a crescent moon shines peacefully over the quiet, snow-dusted roof of the small cabin.
A whoosh sounding fills the air as Calyx monitors the powerful magical energy swirling nearby.
A soft shine sounding emanates from the cabin windows while Calyx keeps his protective watch.
Clenching his fist, Calyx determines his magical shield will be sufficient to protect the house.
Calyx looks up at the moon, wondering if the difficult conversation inside is finally over.
Suddenly, a burst sounding marks Natasha's forceful exit as she storms out of the cabin.
Stride sounding, Natasha marches toward Calyx, who reacts with a sharp and startled exclamation.
Calyx stops in his tracks, beginning to recognize the powerful blonde magician standing before him.
Natasha notes his recognition, her cold blue eyes assessing the man who serves as Amber's protector.
Calyx observes that very few magicians possess the power required to pierce through his shield.
Natasha mentions rumors of a certain magician, while Calyx notes that Amber's husband isn't foolish. Calyx stands his ground, his gaze meeting Natasha's with a level of calm, noble authority.
A smirk sounding plays on Natasha's lips as she begins to test Calyx's true magical capacity.
Calyx reacts with a flinch sounding as yellow magical energy begins to crackle around them.
Crackle and shine sounding erupt as Natasha aggressively challenges Calyx, questioning if he could defeat her.
A sudden clock sounding marks Amber's arrival as she demands to know what they are doing. A close sounding of the door follows as Amber steps between the two powerful, clashing figures.
Amber clears her throat, questioning if Natasha was supposed to invite the Duke inside the cabin.
With a step-step sounding, Amber invites Calyx inside while he agrees with a respectful nod.
Natasha maintains her cold and piercing stare, watching Amber and Calyx with an unreadable expression.
A turn sounding of her heel marks Natasha's decision to follow the pair back inside.
Stride sounding, Natasha moves as Amber looks back, calling out to her sister with hesitation.
A simple question mark reflects Natasha's blank reaction as she continues to stare at her sister.
Natasha turns away with a quick turn sounding, bluntly stating she was already heading back inside. Stiff sounding, Calyx meets Cole Riart, who introduces himself as Amber's father with nervous respect. A heavy silence falls over the group as they sit together in the cabin's dim light.
Amber mentions their first meeting, while her father admits to hearing many stories about the Duke.
Amber notes to herself how surprisingly friendly her father is being toward their powerful guest. Her father's mind is filled with terrifying rumors describing the Duke as a bloodthirsty wild beast.
Amber asks him to speak comfortably, but her father is appalled at such a casual suggestion.
Amber insists he should relax, though her father remains deeply intimidated by Calyx's noble presence. Calyx explains he recently received his title, yet the father still feels unable to speak informally.
A loud thud sounding hits the table as Amber firmly demands her father stop being formal.
Natasha snaps at them to stop arguing over manners, noting they have wasted an entire hour. Her father finally gives up, agreeing to speak more naturally as Amber's irritation reaches its peak.
Amber laughs as she suggests they finally begin discussing the important matters they came for.
With a shift sounding, the father leans forward to reveal the purpose of his urgent visit.
Amber asks Calyx to review the stack of documents her father has brought for his inspection.
Calyx looks down at the papers with a serious expression, preparing to analyze the new information. With a quick nod sounding, Amber informs the group that her client is currently in the plaza.
Calyx looks over the documents, deciding he will disguise himself as a resident while investigating the plaza.
Amber smiles with a gentle smile sounding as she explains that Baron Ruppelt will assist in manipulating the account books.
The scene shifts to the nervous Baron Ruppelt, who sweatily claims that they are on excellent terms.
Cole Riart asks how Amber will handle the money, and she explains she will send it disguised as family letters.
Natasha watches Calyx with a sharp glance sounding, her expression remaining cold and analytical during the secret meeting.
Amber notes there is more to discuss, her hand moving with a quick flip sounding of the paper. Her finger hits the map with a rhythmic top sounding, detailing how riots allow for weapon purchases for the East.
Amber suggests finding reliable connections in the upper areas, specifically mentioning Sir Notherland as the right person.
Calyx looks deeply earnest as his heart begins to race with a heavy badump sounding during the intense discussion.
Reacting with a sudden flinch sounding, Calyx is startled when Amber looks at him and addresses him as Your Grace.
Amber asks for his professional opinion on which weapons to acquire, and Calyx quickly agrees to help.
Calyx begins a frantic rummage sounding through his notes, realizing he had separately written down the necessary information.
Calyx passes a document over with a soft rustle sounding, asking Amber to take a look at it.
Amber notes the document is brief, while Cole observes that the number of knights in the order is small.
Cole lets out a sharp gasp, sounding shocked to learn there are only about 100 people in the order.
Calyx feels flattered as Amber expresses her amazement that he defeats monsters every year with so few knights.
Amber is quiet with a soft, amazed sounding, praising the knight's talent before suggesting they end the meeting.
Cole offers his help for any future problems, but Amber replies she will simply send a letter if needed.
A heavy silence follows as Amber tops the papers, her expression becoming somber as the meeting concludes.
Amber avoids her father's gaze with a subtle glance sounding, her eyes reflecting a mix of hesitation and sorrow. Startled with a sudden gasp sounding, Cole freezes when Amber looks at him and thanks him as her father.
Cole can only whisper her name in response, his eyes wide as he processes her small gesture of reconciliation.
Amber looks away, admitting that saying the word isn't as difficult as she previously thought it would be.
Cole looks deeply touched, expressing his hope that they can safely and successfully secure the current deal together. Amber stares at the table in silence, her mind clearly elsewhere as the emotional weight of the conversation settles. Reaching out with a soft hold sounding, Amber takes her father's hand and quietly agrees to work with him.
Cole asks how they arrived without a carriage, while Natasha stands with a firm stand, sounding ready to leave.
Amber calls out to her sister as Natasha walks toward the center of the room with a steady step sounding. Natasha's boots begin to glow with a soft shine, sounding as she reveals that they arrived through teleportation magic.
Natasha bluntly states she hates wasting time in carriages, leaving Amber to think that her sister's methods are extreme.
Calyx informs Amber that he will take his leave first, catching her off guard as she looked back.
Touching her shoulder with a light top sounding, Calyx tells Amber he wants her to be able to say goodbye. Calyx offers a kind look, reiterating that his only wish is for her to feel comfortable during this farewell. A heavy thud sounding marks the door closing behind Calyx, leaving Amber and her father alone in the cabin.
Cole Riart admits that the Duke is quite different from the terrifying rumors he has heard in the past.
Natasha notes that the Duke was also kind to her, leading Amber to question if that was truly the case.
Natasha prepares to leave, her magic crackling with a sharp clack sounding as Amber asks what she is doing.
Natasha pauses to look back at her sister, her gaze as unreadable and detached as ever before she departs. Natasha reflects on the Duke's power, noting that his magic seems to instinctively head toward whatever he cares about. Amber looks confused when Natasha mentions this, wondering why her sister is making such a strange and specific observation. Turning away with a quick turn sounding, Natasha decides not to interrupt further, leaving Amber to her own thoughts.
A powerful woof sounding fills the room as a teleportation gate opens and Amber bids her father a safe journey.
Moving with a rhythmic step-step sounding, Natasha and Cole enter the magic gate, Natasha giving one final silent glance. Stride sounding, Natasha walks into the light, thinking that Amber will be safe as long as Calyx is beside her.
Walking with a steady step sounding, Calyx returns to Amber's side and asks if her family got home safely.
Amber confirms they did, her posture slumping with a tired droop sounding as the tension of the day fades away.
Calyx watches Amber closely, noting the visible exhaustion on her face after the long and difficult conversation with her father.
Calyx asks if she is truly okay, and Amber is momentarily surprised before insisting that she is doing fine.
Amber admits she is just a bit tired and was nervous because it had been so long since they met.
A spin sounding follows Natasha as she tells Calyx to go quickly while he agrees with a soft exclamation.
A stride sounding echoes as Natasha warns Calyx to come on or he will take the whole night.
The group successfully completes the most important phase of their secret operation under a clear blue sky.
Narration confirms that the remaining 3 steps were completed without any major problems as Amber and Calyx observe.
Clop sounding of horses' hooves marks the steady journey back toward the castle under the pale moonlight. Amber stares out with a clip sounding, acknowledging that she must face the deep buried wounds within. Amber sits in solitude, resolving that the inspection will be over tomorrow, and she has made her mind.
A soft flutter sounding accompanies Amber's thoughts as she reflects on meeting with her family recently.
Amber wonders if she would have had a different life if she returned before the Emperor ordered marriage. A vision of being happy with her family flickers in her mind as she faces the reality.
A footstep sounding startles Amber as Calyx approaches her while she sits alone on a garden bench.
A stop sounding marks Calyx's hesitation as he looks at Amber and lets out a soft, surprised breath.
Amber looks away with a somber expression, her face flushing slightly with a mix of complex emotions.
With a turn sounding, Calyx looks toward the dark trees, sensing the heavy atmosphere hanging over Amber.
Calyx remains silent, his blue eyes filled with a quiet concern as he watches his wife's sorrow. A whoosh sounding of energy surrounds Amber as Calyx wonders what he can truly do for her. Time shifts forward a few days as narration notes that Calyx finally came to visit the castle. A soft touch sounding startles Amber as a hand reaches out, calling her madam in the dim light. A badump sounding follows as Amber blushes, thinking that this person is making her heart race intensely. Calyx asks Amber not to pretend to be fine as she wonders what has come over him.
Shadows stretch across the palace grounds as the internal conflicts of the 2 leaders continue to grow.
The story moves back a few hours, showing the crescent moon hanging high over the silent castle.
A lone carriage arrives at the palace courtyard, signaling the return of the travelers from their mission.
Amber sinks into a steaming tub, sighing with relief as she finally finds a moment of relaxation.
Relaxed sounding fills the air as Amber thinks it feels truly great to be back home again.
With a slap sounding to her cheeks, Amber resolves to focus on dealing with Bella the next morning.
Amber stares at the distant castle spires, thinking that she absolutely needs to get a good night's sleep.
Amber grits her teeth, telling herself she needs to do this despite the growing anxiety in her chest.
Standing before the bedroom door, Amber realizes she is back to sleeping in the same room as Calyx.
Amber hesitates at the threshold, her mind racing with uncertainty about what she should do right now. A creak sounding of the heavy wooden door marks Amber's entrance into the dimly lit private bedchamber. The room stands silent and still, the moonlight casting long shadows across the elegant furniture and curtains.
Amber sits down at a small table, the weight of the day finally catching up to her body.
A faint memory of her family walking through the magic gate lingers in Amber's tired mind.
With a sigh sounding, Amber admits it has been uncomfortable being with Calyx since that specific day.
A clack sounding startles Amber as she looks up, surprised by an unexpected noise in the quiet room.
Calyx stands in the doorway, wearing loose white clothes as he lets out a quiet, surprised exclamation.
Calyx asks why Amber is still awake, while she claims she was just thinking about something else.
Amber quickly agrees when Calyx asks if he can join her, her eyes wide with a startled expression.
Amber screams internally, wondering why she answered without thinking when she intended to ignore him for tonight. An approach sounding marks Calyx's movement as he walks over to sit across from his blushing wife. A badump sounding of Amber's heart thumps loudly as she struggles to maintain her composure in his presence.
Calyx watches her with a deep badump sounding gaze, his expression uncharacteristically intense and focused on her.
With a turn sounding, Amber glances away, her face burning with embarrassment as the silence between them stretches.
A flinch sounding escapes Amber as Calyx notes she has been upset since meeting with her family. Amber nervously claims her meeting was just nervous because of the long time, insisting it is no deal.
A lean sounding follows as Calyx moves closer to Amber, his shadow looming over her in the candlelight.
Calyx leans in toward Amber, calling her his wife and pleading for her to be honest with him. Calyx demands that Amber stop pretending to be okay when she is with him, his gaze piercing her facade.
Amber stares back in shock, her face blushing as she wonders what is wrong with him tonight.
Calyx leans in with a focused gaze, urging Amber to finally share her true feelings with him.
In the quiet, blue-lit room, Calyx sits low before Amber, waiting patiently for her to open up.
Amber remains silent for a moment, the faint grit sounding as she clenches her teeth in hesitation.
Turning her head away, Amber finally breaks the tension by simply stating that she is fine.
Looking back at her husband, Amber admits with heavy honesty that she regrets many things in her life.
Amber's gaze softens with sorrow as Calyx calls out to her, his voice a gentle murmur in the dark.
A distant memory flickers of the day Amber first arrived, seen from behind in a flowing wedding gown.
Painful reflections of her past loneliness and resentment surface, symbolized by the jagged cracks over her face. Amber thinks of her family and the sister she left behind, pondering her past and an uncertain future.
A vision of what could have been shows Amber in a different position, perhaps finding a life of duty elsewhere. Amber's voice trembles as she claims to be a victim of the Emperor's orders, expressing her deep-seated regrets.
Sitting in the dim light, Amber covers her eyes, admitting that there is another side to her complex emotions.
Amber reveals the pain of her past choices, believing she acted like a coward and struggles to continue this way.
Turning to Calix, Amber wonders if he has ever experienced the same suffocating feelings of regret that she has.
Despite the weight of her past, Amber firmly declares her intention to remain by his side at the castle.
Amber claims that nothing will truly change her reality, even if she continues to harbor these deep feelings of regret.
Calix reaches out and gently takes Amber's hand, causing her to stare at him in wide-eyed surprise. A soft hold sounding follows as Calix grasps her hand, leaving Amber stunned by his sudden, tender physical contact.
Kneeling before his wife, Calix keeps a firm but gentle grip on her hand as the room stands still.
Amber blushes intensely and stammers his title, clearly caught off guard by his display of vulnerability and affection.
Calix admits his fear that she might leave him, explaining his previous silence regarding the situation in the East.
A warm memory shows the couple together, Calix acknowledging that Amber taught him how to face challenges with bravery.
Amber smiles softly in his thoughts, though Calix admits that seeing her like this only made him more upset.
Calix expresses his selfish wish for her to know the truth about the East while still choosing to stay.
Amber asks him not to say such things, convinced that his understanding won't change the inevitable outcome of their situation.
With newfound determination, Calix looks at his wife and vows that he will be the one to change.
A squeeze sounding accompanies Calix's firm grip as a badump sounding heartthrob fills Amber with a rush of emotion.
Calix closes his eyes for a moment, his face reflecting a deep internal resolve to protect his wife's happiness.
Leaning down, Calix presses his lips to Amber's hand with a soft kiss, sealing his solemn promise.
Calix looks up and swears that he will do everything within his power to support and cherish his wife.
Surrounded by the light of his devotion, Calix vows that every moment of his life will be dedicated to her.
Amber's heart races with a loud badump sounding as she blushes, overwhelmed by the intensity of Calix's sudden declaration.
Calix turns his head slightly, his own face flushed with a badump sounding of excitement and nervous hope.
A sudden gasp sounding escapes Amber as a thud-sounding memory of the past, Calix begging for her life surfaces. Amber stands up with a stand sounding and a creak sounding, demanding to know why he is saying this now.
Staring at her husband's blushing face, Amber wonders if he truly cares about her feelings or has hidden motives.
Amber worries that he is only giving her hope so that he can cruelly betray her at a later time.
Amber questions if his words are sincere, while a dark memory of a colder, more distant Calix haunts her mind.
Amber reflects on the painful reality of how he pushed her away every time she tried to get close.
Calix raises his voice in desperation, insisting that the cold version of him she remembers never truly existed.
Amber accuses him of lying, while Calix stands up with an urgent plea for her to believe his words.
Amber looks at him, struggling with the realization that the man before her and the man from her past are one.
Despite his current kindness, Amber's past experiences scream at her not to trust his sudden change of heart.
A chilling memory shows a stern Calix reaching out while a terrified Amber cowered in their earlier days together.
Multiple visions of Calix's cold and unreadable expressions flash before Amber, fueling her deep-seated doubt and fear.
Amber looks down in conflict, her heart warring with a secret desire to finally believe in his sincerity.
Calix moves closer with a soft touch sounding, reaching for her hand once again to bridge the distance between them.
Holding her arm with a gentle hold sounding, Calix asks what he can possibly do to earn her trust.
Amber stares at him, realizing that the present Calix is desperately trying to gain the trust she long ago lost. A badump-sounding heart and a soft step sounding mark Amber's inner turmoil as she considers taking a chance on him.
Calix leans toward Amber, his shadow deepening as he seeks the truth behind her blushing face.
A badump sounding fills the air as Calix calls her his wife, his gaze becoming intensely soft.
Amber's heart races with a double badump sounding as she gazes back at him, visibly overwhelmed.
A gulp sounding escapes Calix as he struggles to maintain his composure while staring deeply at her.
With a badump sounding heart, Calix reaches out to hold Amber's hands in the moonlit bed charger.
The intensity of the moment builds with a badump sounding as the two move closer together. A badump sounding of their hearts merges as Calix leans in to seal their promise with a kiss.
Surrounded by a badump sounding heartbeat, the couple shares a tender and long-awaited moment of intimacy.
Calix admits his heart is racing, and Amber softly confesses that she feels the exact same way.
A hesitate sounding follows as Amber wonders why her heart feels like it is dropping from her chest.
With a sudden pull sounding, Calix brings Amber closer to him, his grip firm yet remarkably gentle. A lift sounding marks the moment Calix picks her up, reassuring her that her heart is safe. Laying her down with a lay sounding, Calix promises to catch her heart whenever she feels it falling. Amber hesitates, her voice a whisper as she asks if he is truly comfortable with their intimacy. Framed by roses, Amber asks if he is okay even if his feelings for her make him weak. Calix looks at her with devotion, insisting she can be herself as long as she stays nearby.
Calix leans over her, stating she owes him nothing as Amber asks what she can still give him.
Staring into his eyes, Amber wonders why Calix is showing her such an intense side of himself.
Intertwining their fingers, Calix declares his willingness to be whatever she needs him to be right now.
Calix asks for her to command him, telling her to treat him as her very own beast.
Gazing at him, Amber realizes this powerful man is obeying her, her heart racing with nervous excitement.
Amber admits to herself that she was terrified of losing the current version of her husband tonight.
A flashback reveals Amber alone in her wedding dress, thinking of the loneliness she felt long ago.
A clock sounding startles her in the memory as she looks back toward the door in anticipation.
The memory shows Amber and Calix facing each other on their wedding night in the Silent Palace. Back in the present, Calix asks her for another kiss, his voice filled with a gentle longing.
Calix's blue eyes focus entirely on her, reflecting the depth of his sudden and powerful emotional change.
Leaning in, Calix vows to do anything she wants as their lips meet once more in passion. The couple lies together in the dim light, the silence of the room finally filled with warmth.
A distant memory surfaces of young Calix standing alone in a dark, cold room at the palace.
Calix remembers his mother calling his name, her voice a comforting echo in his early childhood years.
A caress sounding accompanies his mother, explaining he was named after a legendary monarch from the East.
Reflecting on the past, Calix thinks of his mother as a warm and deeply loving person.
Calix recalls his mother confronting his father about his infidelity, her voice trembling with a deep pain. Tears stream down his mother's face as she asks how his father could be with another woman.
His father coldly dismisses her pain, claiming their marriage has always been a transaction without any love.
Calix's father looks at his wife with indifference, stating that their union is purely a loveless marriage.
His mother desperately tries to deny his words, while his father remains firm in his cruel assessment.
A tear sounding marks his mother's grief as his father tells her not to mention love again.
With a turn sounding, his mother walks away, her spirit crushed by her husband's cold and detached behavior.
A younger Calix watches the scene in shock, softly calling out for his mother in the hallway.
A sniffle sounding fills the room as Calix realizes his parents were never truly a happy couple.
His father clenches his fist, calling out to Calix with a voice that demands his immediate attention.
Standing before him, his father orders young Calix to put more effort into his strained family relationships. His father's face remains unreadable and stern, showing no remorse for the pain he has just caused. An older Calix confronts his father about the rumors of his affairs, his voice sharp with anger. His father asks if he is being lectured as a brown-haired woman stands behind them in surprise.
A slap sounding rings out as Calix's mother suddenly strikes him to silence his outburst.
His mother demands an apology for his disrespect toward his father, her own face flushed with distress.
With a step sounding, his father leaves the room as the mother desperately tries to follow him.
Younger Calix calls out to his mother as she flinches away with visible, suppressed anger. A sharp grab sounding follows as the mother takes hold of her son's small shoulders.
The mother warns that his actions will turn her into a failure as both wife and mother.
Desperate to save her marriage, the mother begs her son to act as a perfect child. Clinging to her son, the mother pleads for the illusion of a perfect, happy family life.
Younger Calix embraces her back, promising to fulfill any request she makes to maintain her happiness. A visible tremble sounding shows the mother's breakdown as she leans heavily on her young son.
Staring at his mother, the young boy formally accepts his role within their fractured family dynamic. A sharp slash sounding and huff sounding follow Calix into adulthood as a weary, blood-stained soldier. After a quick rip sounding, Calix is summoned for duty despite his visible and bandaged wounds. Bandaged and sitting alone, Calix silently questions if he can continue to stand firm without collapsing. Clenching his fist, Calix determines that he must endure his heavy responsibilities just a while longer.
A memory of his mother's tearful face surfaces as she begs him for his silent cooperation.
Facing away from the room, Calix accepts that his emotional burdens are his alone to bear. Reaching back through time, the memory shifts toward the beginning of Calix's marriage to Amber. Though he expected a cold contract, a badump-sounding heart marks Calix's first impression of Amber.
Amber smiles brightly at him, her warmth and gratitude beginning to melt Calix's long-standing emotional walls.
The scene shifts to young Calix standing in shadow, a silent observer within the cold palace. Walking through the dark hallways, the boy's childhood is characterized by an oppressive sense of loneliness.
A sudden badump sounding marks the moment Calix first felt the spark of life from Amber. Amber beams at him with a loud badump sounding heart as she addresses him with affection.
Looking at her, Calix experiences a sudden and life-changing realization about the woman who is his. Lying together, Amber blushes as she asks for their first intimate encounter to be handled gently. Calix gazes at his wife with a flushed face, his determination to cherish her fully established.
With intense blue eyes, Calix silently vows to do absolutely anything to protect her heart's happiness.
A soft creak sounding fills the room as they settle onto the bed, Amber asking his state.
A badump-sounding heartbeat accompanies Amber's shy confession that this experience is also brand new.
Blushing deeply, Calix admits his lack of knowledge while a badump-sounding heart fills the silence.
Amber gazes back with a badump sounding, admitting she has been thinking about this moment often.
Calix asks his wife to speak up immediately if she faces any issues during their time.
A soft nod sounding follows as Amber looks up at him with a serious and affectionate gaze. A gentle slide sounding accompanies Calix as he begins to undress his wife in the blue light. Sharing a passionate embrace, the couple is surrounded by a badump sounding and a creak sounding.
A social media banner interrupts the narrative, showcasing a profile for an update on the story.
Their lips meet in a tender kiss, sounding as the couple finally shares a moment of intimacy.
A quick swish sounding follows as Calix removes his own shirt while Amber calls out his title.
Stripped of his clothing, Calix reveals a powerful physique while his face remains flushed with desire. Amber's eye reflects an intense blush as she gazes at her husband during their intimate night. Softly whispering his name, Amber's expression is filled with vulnerability and deep-seated longing for his touch.
Calix experiences a sharp flinch sounding, his heart racing as he reacts to his wife's presence.
A strained sounding and ha sounding escape Calix as his passion for Amber becomes overwhelming.
The couple shares a deep smooch sounding and an ah sounding as they lose themselves together.
Amber is breathless with a ha sounding and badump sounding as she looks up at him.
Calix gazes back with an intense ha sounding and a loud badump sounding heartthrob of emotion.
A heavy ha sounding and ah sounding accompany Calix as he embraces Amber in the darkness.
As Amber falls into a snooze sounding, Calix tenderly caresses her hair with a loving gaze.
With a soft shift sounding, Calix pulls the blanket up to protect his wife as she sleeps.
Resting his head on his hand, Calix wonders about the meaning of their union to Amber.
A soft slide sounding marks a close-up of Calix's eye, reflecting his deep devotion to her.
Embracing his sleeping wife, Calix accepts his uncertainty while cherishing the warmth of their new bond. The red-haired Amber wonders what time it is as a swish sounding follows her waking up.
Realizing she is fully clothed, Amber lets out a poof sounding as her embarrassment grows rapidly.
Thinking of her previous life, Amber reflects that her recent intimacy felt entirely new and different. Hiding beneath the covers, Amber wonders if other couples are as constantly in bed as novels suggest. A sudden flinch sounding catches Amber off guard as she remains flustered by her morning thoughts. Ruffling her hair in distress, Amber scolds herself for having such thoughts the moment she wakes.
Deciding to leave the room, a shift sounding accompanies Amber as she moves toward the door.
Amber tells her concerned maid she only needs rest while privately questioning if they overdid things. A distant call of Madam echoes across the stone bridge under a clear and blue sky.
Sir Bertrand greets Amber and asks if she has rested well since returning to the mansion.
With a move sounding, the blonde-haired knight leans in closer to share private news with her. Bertrand whispers that a letter from Baron to Rome caused the butler significant distress all day long.
Bertrand asks about her travels while Amber thinks her own frustration would keep her from sleeping.
Deflecting Bertrand's curiosity, Amber states he doesn't need to know and that she handled the loan.
Amber suggests that Bertrand should focus on trusting her instead of continuing his interrogation right now.
With a smile sounding, Bertrand offers a polite apology to the madam for his overbearing questions.
Amber doubts the knight's readiness as he asks what purpose brought her to the training ground.
Looking out over the yard, Bertrand asks if Amber is here specifically to see the Duke. A turn sounding marks Amber's reaction as Bertrand notes her presence at the mansion's training ground.
A reach sounding follows as a pale hand moves toward the handle of a decorated door.
Amber hesitates before entering, wondering exactly what she should do when she steps inside the room. She wonders if the Eastern land would finally be safe if the Emperor's threats were removed. With a creak sounding, Amber thinks of her child and her original plans to leave the East. A step sounding marks Amber's walk as she recalls doubting she could ever have a future.
Calix stands amidst the many bookshelves, his blue eyes focused on something deep within his thoughts.
A stop sounding marks Amber's entrance as she freezes at the sight of her husband. Framed by white flowers, Calix acknowledges her presence by softly addressing her as his very own wife.
A vision of a bright future surfaces, showing Amber and Calix in a field with their child. Amber's heart swells with hope as she considers the possibility of a shared future with her husband. Amber flinches as she is pulled back to reality by Calix calling out to her once more.
Calix asks if this is the first time she has visited his mother's old private study. Calix explains that the room belonged to his birth mother, while Amber wonders about her identity.
Amber realizes his mother was the former Duchess, Liliana Thelesdo, a woman of great importance.
Thinking of her previous life, Amber remarks on the room's beauty and kindness of his late mother. Calix looks directly at Amber and asks how she would feel about using this room herself.
With a nod sounding, Calix mentions that the room contains many interesting books for her to enjoy.
Calix encourages Amber to use this space as her own if she ever needs a place to relax. Blushing slightly, Calix adds that she should only do so if it doesn't bother her. Amber beams with a radiant smile, gladly accepting his kind offer and thanking him for the room.
Calix coughs and asks why she isn't resting in her room like he had originally told her.
A badump-sounding heartbeat fills Amber with nerves as she stares back at her husband's face.
Calix hides his blushing face while Amber questions why she came looking for him in the first place.
An approach sounding marks Calix moving toward her, the air suddenly filled with a romantic energy. With a touch sounding and badump sounding, Calix gently tilts her head up to meet his gaze. An ah sounding escapes Amber as she hears a sudden, loud commotion coming from outside the window.
With a loud toot-sounding horn, Amber excitedly tells the Duke that a group has just arrived.
Looking down at the courtyard, a messenger announces that the mercenary group has returned much earlier than expected.
A bustle sounding fills the yard as the scarred leader of the mercenaries looks around the grounds.
With a bow sounding, Sir Zayt greets his grace while Calix commends him for his successful mission.
Zayt declares the expedition a success and presents a wooden chest filled with glowing blue gemstones.
Zayt presents 3 low-grade gemstones, noting they are valuable enough for the magic tower.
Calix suggests they move inside for a formal report and the mercenary leader agrees.
A step sounding and turn sounding follow as the men head toward the mansion.
Amber approaches with a bow sounding, greeting her husband with a polite and formal title.
Amber mentions finding a specific item, prompting Calix to ask for its current location.
Amber explains the item is hidden safely in a cart, earning his gratitude for her.
Amber asks about the blood's purpose, but tells him he will learn soon enough.
A steady step sounding accompanies the red-haired woman as she walks alongside the group.
Calix requests that Amber join them to hear the full report from the returning expedition.
Amber agrees to come along while the scarred mercenary watches the couple with silent curiosity.
A rhythmic step sounding follows the trio as they walk together toward the grand entrance.
Observing the couple, the mercenary leader lets out a thoughtful and quiet hum sounding.
Inside the mansion, the brown-haired Lady Bella walks through the hallway with a step sounding.
Lady Bella's face contorts with visible rage as she stares intensely at a nearby door.
An elderly maid reassures Bella that this marriage is temporary and will soon be over.
Bella shouts in frustration, convinced the staff was happy to see her forced to leave.
The maid comforts Bella, claiming that the household will eventually realize who the true mistress is.
Bella's expression shifts as she considers the implications of the knights returning to the estate.
A dark smirk sounding appears as Bella decides it is time to take decisive action.
Bella barks in order to immediately summon Heinrich, her voice echoing with an urgent demand.
Later, Amber and Calix sit together in a private room to discuss the recent news. Calix informs Amber that he will soon be leaving the duchy to fulfill imperial duties.
He explains that the Emperor often requires him to depart on various difficult military missions.
Amber realizes the grave danger Calix will face during his upcoming mission to the kingdom.
A vision of Calix riding into battle represents the harsh journey that lies ahead.
Seeing her expression, Calix asks his wife if she is feeling concerned for his safety.
A soft squeeze sounding accompanies Calix taking her hand as she tries to hide her worry.
With intense eyes, Calix firmly declares his unwavering resolve to return home to her safely.
Another squeeze sounding follows as Calix vows to never leave his wife to stand alone.
Amber looks at her husband with deep trust, acknowledging his strength as the Duke.
Alone, Amber decides she must take action to support Calix before his inevitable departure.
A quick slide sounding marks the opening of a desk drawer as she searches for papers.
Amber plans a welcoming banquet for the knights, choosing to use the estate's great hall.
She reflects on how the hall was neglected and misused during her previous timeline's events.
A memory shows the previous version of Amber prioritizing superficial parties over treating the knights well.
Amber remembers the poor treatment the knights received in the past after their difficult conquests.
A soft knock sounding interrupts her as she begins planning the meals for the banquet.
Heinrich enters the room with a polite bow, intending to speak with the madam immediately.
Amber expresses her intent to discuss the banquet, but notices Heinrich's hesitant and nervous behavior.
Heinrich struggles to find the words to deliver some unexpected and troubling news to Amber.
Amber is stunned when Heinrich reveals that Lady Bella has decided to host the banquet.
The shock remains on Amber's face as she repeats the name of her mother-in-law.
Heinrich confirms that Bella plans to open the Great Hall herself for the upcoming event. Amber learns that Bella has already taken the key to the hall earlier that morning.
A rustle sounding follows as Amber stands up, determined to confront her mother-in-law directly.
A vision of Bella's cruel and mocking laughter flashes through Amber's mind as she prepares.
Letting out a heavy sigh sounding, Amber readies herself for the difficult meeting ahead.
Amber asks for a maid named Jenny as she prepares to leave her private study.
Bella greets Amber with a mocking smile behind her fan, asking about her recent travels. Amber faces the older woman with a cold and steady gaze, prepared for the confrontation.
Bella smirks while her maid listens, remarking that something very interesting has just occurred.
Facing Amber, Bella declares she won't surrender the Great Hall key for a mere greeting.
Snapping her fan shot with a chalk sounding, Bella demands to know Amber's reasoning.
Amber stands firm, asserting her authority by declaring herself the true mistress of the castle. Bella laughs mockingly at the claim, questioning how long Amber has even resided in the duchy.
Dismissing her, Bella suggests Amber is behind on her studies regarding the estate's strict traditions.
Narration explains the history of the White Kingdom and the Great Hall's significance for banquets.
Bella looks down on her daughter-in-law, stating Amber is too young for such a respected event.
Closing her eyes with a tired ha-sounding sigh, Amber prepares for sharp rebuttal. Amber challenges the older woman, asking if the real mistress shouldn't be the one taking responsibility.
Bella's expression becomes one of suppressed fury as she glares intensely at the red-haired woman.
With a polite kubuk-sounding nod, Amber acknowledges the conversation before deciding to move on.
A graceful bingle-sounding turn follows as Amber walks away, leaving Bella and the maids behind.
Bella screams after her, warning Amber to remember who the household staff truly intends to follow.
Bella shouts Amber's name in a fit of rage while the red-haired woman remains entirely unfazed.
Jenny apologizes for her lack of help, but Amber reassures her that her presence was enough. Amber comforts her maid, acknowledging the difficulties of her commoner status in such a confrontation. Back at her desk with a tax sounding, Amber considers how to win this power struggle.
Amber views Bella's provocation as a perfect opportunity to prove her worth as the mistress.
A sudden Dial Kyong sounding marks Amber's realization of the massive amount of paperwork awaiting her.
While Jenny looks downcast, Amber privately decides to promote the girl to her official lady-in-waiting.
A click-sounding door opening reveals Lizzie, who announces she has finished the requested preparations.
Amber studies the newcomer, noting that this woman is an official maid of the estate.
Looking at the brown-haired maid, Amber recognizes her as a girl named Lizzie.
Amber's eye widens as she notices a specific detail about the maid's attire.
Pointing out a lacy wrist accessory, Amber tells the maid that the piece suits her well.
Lizzie thanks her politely, and Amber smiles warmly, happy to see the maid's positive reaction.
As Lizzie departs, Amber watches her go with a thoughtful and focused expression.
A hurried tat-tat sounding of footsteps follows as Calix enters the room, calling out for them.
Amber is startled by the Duke's sudden entrance into her private working space.
Amber addresses her husband as the Duke as he stops to speak of her.
Calix observes her workload, and Amber agrees that being busy is expected for the upcoming banquet.
Calix advises against overdoing the party for appearances, leaving Amber wondering about his true meaning.
Amber pivots the conversation, mentioning there is something she is curious to learn about.
She asks if the duchy was once the independent White Kingdom before joining the Empire.
Amber thinks about the Great Hall's unique design, which seems different from typical imperial banquet rooms.
Calix looks toward the books and confirms that her historical assessment of the land is correct.
He asks Amber if she has ever personally visited the Great Hall she is so curious about.
Amber claims she heard rumors while secretly recalling the hall's layout from her previous life.
Amber notices Calix staring at her and asks why he is looking so intensely.
Calix blushes and hesitates with a meomet sounding, seemingly searching for the right words.
Calix begins to ask Amber a question, wondering if she would mind a specific request. He asks the madam to wait a moment as he moves toward a nearby shelf.
Amber's heels make a sharp meomchit sounding as she halts her movement to wait for him. Seeing a purple book on the table, Amber wonders if the Duke is preparing a secret.
Amber realizes the object is a journal and begins to flip through its delicate pages.
A steady to-book sounding accompanies Calix as he returns, softly addressing her as his wife.
Amber looks up from the papers, surprised by how close her husband has approached.
Calix reveals an exquisite white dress, explaining it belonged to his mother and matches kingdom fashion.
Stunned by the gift, Amber asks why he would give such a precious heirloom to her.
Calix looks at his wife with genuine affection, wondering if she truly likes the special gift.
Calix expresses his heartfelt desire for Amber to wear the traditional white dress at the banquet.
A social media profile appears, briefly interrupting the mansion's drama with a request for online updates.
Holding the delicate white fabric, Amber wonders aloud if she is truly permitted to wear it.
Following historical traditions, the Duchess of Thalesdo and the Duke must wear attire from the kingdom.
Though she loves the heirloom, Amber expresses doubt that the dress will truly suit her appearance.
Calix tells Amber she will look good in anything, causing a deep blush to spread quickly.
In a lighthearted chibi moment, Amber jokingly warns her husband not to be disappointed in her. Looking shy, Calix covers his mouth while assuring Amber that everyone will admire her beautiful look.
A serene smile appears on Amber's face as she enjoys her husband's genuine and heartfelt compliments.
Surrounded by shimmering light, Amber softly thanks Calix for the beautiful and meaningful family heirloom gift.
At night, a younger maid questions the acquisition of jeweled wine glasses, high-quality curtains, and dresses.
A sudden flinch sounding follows as the younger maid nervously asks about the banquet's ballooning budget.
The head maid remains silent, her face bearing visible bruises and marks from a recent physical altercation. The head maid orders the staff to stop nogging and follow Lady Bella's strict and expensive demands.
A clear blue sky signals the passage of time as tension continues within the Duchy's mansion.
During night training, a soldier observes that the madam struggled during the recent official mansion inspection.
A steady step sounding accompanies the soldiers as they discuss rumors of the madam's charitable touring.
A sudden stop sounding marks the soldier's pause as he mentions the young lady's relief work.
The scarred commander asks about the luxury items while others praise the madam's charitable village actions. A quick glance sounding follows as the soldiers exchange suspicious looks regarding the mansion's strange orders.
Two soldiers debate if the expensive orders are actually the madam's doing, fearing public financial backlash.
A soldier dismisses the concern, stating they shouldn't interfere with the affairs of the mansion's mistresses.
A sharp interrupt sounding occurs as a soldier questions the logic of ignoring the obvious corruption.
The group of knights turns to address the commander as he approaches to hear their concerns.
The commander listens as his men report on the noisy preparations and the scattered night order.
Soldiers list the high-quality furniture and dresses being ordered, questioning the necessity of such extreme luxury.
Looking grim, the commander questions if such extravagance is sensible while the East remains impoverished.
Outside by the well, a maid loudly defends the madam, calling the luxury rumors completely outrageous.
The maids realize the extravagant orders likely didn't come from Amber, suspecting the older Lady Bella.
The head maid interrupts the staff, but they gasp in shock at her battered and bruised physical state.
A stunned maid points out the visible injuries on the headmaid's face, her voice trembling. The atmosphere shifts with an appear sounding as Amber suddenly stands before the shocked and huddled maids.
A polite bow sounding follows as the bruised headmaid respectfully greets her young mistress in the courtyard. Looking at the woman with intense concern, Amber calls out to the headmaid to seek answers.
Amber demands to know the truth behind the injuries marking the elderly headmaid's tired and bruised face.
A graceful turn sounding accompanies Amber as she looks closely at the injuries on the woman's face.
Amber correctly concludes that the cruel Lady Bella is responsible for the headmaid's current and painful condition.
Facing the headmaid, Amber explains she came to discuss a very serious matter regarding the estate. Amber asks for the origin of the luxury orders, but the headmaid refuses to disclose information. Amber warns that these actions will ruin the Duke's reputation and jeopardize the estate's fragile finances.
A sharp crumple sounding follows as Amber grips her papers, frustrated by the ongoing financial sabotage.
Amber considers the plight of the commoners, knowing the Duke's finances must support those in need.
Amber pleads with the headmaid to consider the welfare of the struggling people in the East.
The headmaid admits through tears that she didn't commit these actions out of her own will.
A loud shout sounding marks the headmaid's desperation as she tells Amber to look at her injuries.
Desperate and broken, the headmaid begs the young mistress to help them escape Bella's cruel tyranny.
Amber clenches her fist, acknowledging that while she cannot help alone, she refuses to give up.
Amber declares that if they join hands and help each other, they will surely never lose.
Surrounded by blooming flowers, Amber vows to ensure their victory against the corruption of the past.
Maids whisper about the headmaid, whose face is noticeably marked by a recent physical injury.
The elderly woman's expression hardens with a grit sounding as she endures the painful marks.
Bella inquires about her extravagant order, hearing the headmaid confirm its expected arrival at the gate. Looking eager and self-satisfied, Bella decides it is time to inspect her new luxury acquisitions.
A firm step sounding echoes as Bella confidently leads the headmaid toward the castle's grand entrance. Upon arriving at the gate, Bella is stunned to find the entire courtyard completely empty.
Bella's face contorts with rage as she demands an explanation for the missing banquet preparations.
An appear sounding marks Amber's sudden presence as she addresses Bella's wait for the expensive items.
Amber remains entirely calm while declaring that she has personally canceled every single luxury order. Bella shouts Amber's name in a fit of fury, her eyes wide with shock and indignation.
Turning sharply, Bella demands to know why her authority over the estate is being challenged.
Amber explains that the orders were inappropriate for the Duke's current financial and social situation.
Presenting a document, Amber reveals the full list of luxury items to the surrounding estate staff.
Amber notes the repeat of past greed, privately criticizing the selection of uselessly expensive goods.
Amber reassures the headmaid and staff that they no longer need to live in constant fear.
Amber presents a new budget, ordering the funds be redirected to provide food for the people.
The battered headmaid looks at her mistress with uncertainty, asking about the next course of action. Amber offers a small, knowing smile as she prepares to settle the estate's power struggle.
Amber tells the headmaid that it is time for everyone to finally speak their truth.
Bella scoffs at Bella asks Amber if she intends to publicly insult the Duke with these drastic financial cuts. The surrounding knights and maids watch the intense confrontation with visible worry for the estate's future. Two knights exchange confused looks, wondering what exactly is happening at the mansion's main gate.
Amber asserts that true noble respect is earned through dignity and care, not through mindless extravagance.
Bella smugly argues that a grand banquet is exactly how a noble family demonstrates its worth.
A knight considers the mention of Bella's name with a look of extreme and growing concern.
Amber asks the older woman if she has ever actually seen the world outside the castle walls.
Bella claims knowledge of the land, but Amber questions if she understands the East's true poverty.
Amber presents a document and requests that Bella focus on the estate's needs over personal luxuries.
Looking stern, Amber bluntly orders the older woman to stop living such a lavish and wasteful lifestyle.
A sharp pack sounding follows as Bella violently slaps the financial papers out of Amber's hand. Undeterred, Amber continues her reprimand, stating that her actions extend beyond the upcoming banquet's planning.
Amber highlights the ignored petitions from the commoners as papers flutter down with a crumble sounding.
Bella accuses Amber of trying to destroy the Duke's reputation by canceling his official celebration. Standing before a backdrop of roses, Amber declares her responsibility is to care for the people. Amber closes her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts before delivering a final stinging point.
Amber clarifies that the banquet is meant for the hardworking knights, not for the Duke's vanity.
Bella retorts that the knights belong to the Duke, making the celebration his by extension.
Amber challenges the older woman, asking her why she thinks the knights remain loyal to the estate. Amber explains that their loyalty stems from protecting their homeland and their beloved families in the East.
Amber demands that Bella stop abusing her power, emphasizing that honor belongs to the family.
Bella lashes out, telling Amber to stop acting as if she is the only one who cares.
Amber calls for the butler Heinrich, who promptly acknowledges his mistress's request for the financial report.
Amber shows the spending report, proving almost every expense was for Bella's personal luxury and accessories.
Amber asks how these selfish purchases could possibly benefit the people of the struggling Eastern Territory.
A quick glance sounding marks Bella's realization that the maids are now watching her with judgment.
A frustrated Kaduk sounding follows as Bella asks if there is anything else left to say.
Bella orders the Duke to be brought immediately, certain he will punish Amber for her arrogance.
Bella turns to the knights, desperately demanding they testify against Amber's supposed misbehavior and disrespect.
A schwa sounding follows as Amber reveals a list of new weapons arriving for the knights.
The scarred commander examines the weapon report, noting that the materials are high quality and proper.
The black-haired Duke explains that his wife personally prepared the weapon upgrades for the Knight Order.
Looking down at the document, the scarred commander is stunned that the young lady handled this.
The Duke advises the commander to acknowledge Amber's sincere efforts for the welfare of the knights.
The scarred commander remains silent, his stern expression reflecting a moment of deep and serious contemplation.
A firm step sounding follows the group of knights as they march together through the courtyard.
The scarred commander approaches Amber with a newfound sense of respect and determination in his eyes. Bowing his head, the commander vows to support Amber's plans for the future of the East.
A blonde knight nearby watches with a smug expression as a mocking what sounding escapes him.
A steady step sounding marks Amber's resolute walk across the stone courtyard toward the gathered staff.
Accompanied by the knights, Amber hears Sir Bertrand confirm their commitment to upholding their promises.
The elderly headmaid looks down solemnly as the staff remains silent during the heavy atmospheric shift.
Raising her voice, the headmaid declares her complete support for Amber's vision for the estate's future.
The maids and soldiers plead with Amber to make a final decisive choice for the East.
A heavy silence follows as the staff bows deeply, begging their mistress to lead them forward.
Lady Bella watches in shocked silence as the entire mansion staff turns to Amber for leadership.
Looking down at the staff, Amber reflects on the true weight and meaning of protecting the East. Amber declares her intent to manage the castle and demands the keys from the older woman.
Fuming with rage, Bella reluctantly prepares to surrender the keys that symbolize her domestic power. A sharp toss sounding accompanies the keys as Bella violently flings them toward the young misters.
The butler Heinrich catches the keys, bowing as a soft tap sounding marks the transfer of power.
Ready to serve, Heinrich asks the Duchess for her official orders regarding the upcoming mansion preparations.
Amber offers a gentle and knowing smile, signaling the start of a new era for the duchy.
While the maids rejoice, Amber and the knights prepare to prioritize the territory's most urgent needs.
A bright light fills the scene as the narrative shifts forward to the evening's formal banquet.
Resplendent in formal attire, the Duke requests Amber's hand as they prepare for their public entrance. An announcer's voice declares the arrival of the Duke and Duchess as they walk together into the hall.
A lively chatter sounding fills the banquet hall as guests enjoy the surprisingly well-organized and dignified celebration.
Amber politely asks to be excused for a moment, her attention drawn to a guest across the room.
Amber reflects on the success of supplying new weapons and helping the families of the Knight Order.
A respectful bow sounding marks the scarred commander's approach as he expresses his heartfelt and sincere gratitude.
Amber listens intently as the veteran soldier acknowledges her contributions to the safety of the territory. Offering a kind and steady look, Amber tells the bowed Sir Zite to finally lift his head.
Amber expresses her own gratitude for the commander taking her side against Lady Bella's recent corruption.
Sir Zite explains that his actions were driven by his sworn loyalty to the duchy and Duke. Amber realizes that as the Duke's wife, she is now a part of the Knight's sacred oath.
Standing behind her, the Duke watches with a slight smile, pleased by his wife's growing influence.
Heinrich interrupts the festivities with a tray, presenting an urgent and sealed letter for the young Duchess.
Amber reads the letter from Count Freya, surprised by the mention of the researcher, Ms. Riette.
A quick tear sounding follows as Amber opens the envelope to read the urgent news regarding research.
Amber looks troubled, her thoughts immediately turning to Sir Zite and the contents of the message.
Turning to her husband, Amber explains she must ask for another significant favor for the territory's welfare.
Later that night, Amber discusses the disturbing and unusual necessity of obtaining monster's blood with her husband.
A vision of Riette's failing crops illustrates the desperate need for a solution to their agricultural crisis.
Amber explains that monster blood might be the only key to solving Riette's stalled agricultural research.
The black-haired man looks at her with intense scrutiny, surprised by her knowledge of such specialized techniques.
Amber privately worries, unable to reveal that she gained this knowledge from her memories of the past.
Recalling the past, Amber remembers requesting the monster blood from Sir Zite before his recent mission.
Amber asks the Duke to ensure the blood samples are safely delivered to Riette for her study.
A sudden gasp sounding follows as the Duke asks if his wife is truly doing okay. Amber explains her instructions to the commander, but her husband dismisses the excuse as unnecessary.
Blushing slightly, the black-haired man admits he wanted her to consult him before the soldiers.
The red-haired woman stares back in stunned silence as the awkward tension between them grows.
Clearing his throat, the Duke retracts his comment while Amber justifies her past actions internally.
Amber realizes she wouldn't have to explain her motives if she had just asked the commander.
The Duke notes the massive logistics involved in her request while acknowledging his understanding of the situation.
He recalls his prior offer to help her with anything she needs for the territory's welfare.
Amber's heart sinks as she wonders if her actions have accidentally offended her husband's noble pride.
A sudden Kaget sounding follows as the Duke stands with his robe partially open, blushing intensely.
Looking away, the man rubs his neck while the atmosphere in the bedroom remains heavy.
Amid a backdrop of roses, he coughs and insists his recent helpfulness doesn't imply anything more.
The Duke gazes at Amber, confessing his sincere and quiet desire to be useful to his wife. A soft set sounding accompanies the sound of cloth as they finally settle in for the night.
The Duke asks if she remembers his previous promise, and Amber softly confirms she recalls his words.
He reminds her of the day he declared that everything in his life belongs to her.
Looking intense, the black-haired man repeats that everything he has is for her sake and safety.
Amber offers a nervous smile, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of his sudden and direct honesty.
As she sits on the bed, a rhythmic Deg heartbeat sounding reflects her growing invisible nervousness. Blushing deeply, Amber suggests they go to sleep as another thudding sounding fills the quiet room. Her heart continues to race with a Dag sounding as the tension between them becomes almost unbearable.
A surprise sounding follows as the Duke leans in close, causing Amber's heart to hammer rhythmically.
Closing her eyes, the young mistress notes how close he is as a rapid sounding follows.
A quick Dig heartbeat sounding punctuates the silence as the distance between the couple vanishes. They share a tender kiss as a rhythmic Dug sounding signals Amber's intense emotional reaction. The Duke's blue eyes reflect a deep intensity as a Dag sounding marks the intimate moment.
Amber clenches her hands at her chest, her face red as several heartbeat sounds echo around her.
A firm set sounding follows as the black-haired man moves closer to the flustered Amber.
A memory of past coldness returns, suggesting they shouldn't bother each other to remain comfortable.
The Duke pauses as a Ter-Henti sounding illustrates a moment of sudden and deep hesitation.
In a monochrome memory, the Duke states that he also dislikes their current formal arrangement.
Amber recalls her past belief that her husband truly hated her during their early marriage. Emerging from her thoughts, a Deg sounding accompanies her questioning of the Duke's true feelings. A soft cup sounding follows as the Duke gently kisses his wife on the face.
A startled whick sounding marks Amber's confusion as she wonders what just happened between them.
The Duke suddenly pulls back, telling his wife she should rest before bidding her goodnight.
Amber sits in silence, a kick sounding echoing her inner disbelief at his abrupt exit.
Looking over her shoulder with a lyric sounding, she watches him move away in silence.
The black-haired man remains quiet, his expression hidden as he prepares for the next day.
A Kaget sounding marks her shock as the Duke addresses her formally as his mistress.
Amber quickly changes the subject to the knight's weapons while the Duke notes the fast progress.
She smiles privately, thinking about how Baron Ruppolt's cooperation was much better than she expected.
A chibi-style awkward silence follows as the couple struggles to find the right words to speak.
Reaching for the blankets with a kick sounding, Amber notes she has an early morning tomorrow. A startled Kaget sounding follows as Amber nervously suggests they finally go to bed now. Clenching her fist, she wonders what is wrong with her as her face turns bright red. Diving into the bed with a kike sounding, she insists they just need to sleep.
Rolling over with a gurgling sound, Amber tries to recall the events of that particular day.
A vision of the Duke appearing exhausted and flushed flashes through Amber's troubled mind.
In the memory, the Duke claims that their intimate encounter was nothing but a complete accident.
Amber grips the sheets as she realizes that even if it was unintentional, it still mattered.
A sharp gasp sounding follows as Amber stares with wide, shocked, and intensely bright orange eyes.
A sudden rise sounding follows as Amber sits up while the black-haired man asks her what's the matter.
Blushing, the Duke admits he thought his wife was anxious and wanted to reassure her that everything will be fine.
Amber offers a blushing and relieved smile, thanking her husband for his unexpected concern for her well-being.
A quick turn sounding follows as the Duke tells Amber to sleep tight while looking away awkwardly.
Amber covers her face, blushing deeply while thinking that she cannot possibly go to sleep in this state.
Lively chatter sounding fills the air as soldiers notice the arrival of many new weapons and sharp swords.
Two soldiers smile with excitement, noting that they have also received a shipment of brand new armor.
Looking at the Duke, Amber reflects that the sword was one her father had personally cared for. A sharp ring sounding accompanies the Duke as he draws the gleaming sword from its scabbard.
The black-haired man holds the unsheathed blade firmly as it glows with a brilliant shimmering light. Amber reflects that the sword is wonderful, but she does not believe it is a sufficient weapon for Calix.
While watching the Duke, Amber considers that another type of weapon would suit his skills much better.
The red-haired Duchess looks thoughtful until a voice calls out to address her with respect.
Sirzate notes that both the quality and quantity of the new weapons have exceeded their expectations.
Bowing their heads, the commander and his knights express their sincere gratitude to the Duchess.
The red-haired Duchess offers a subtle and satisfied smile while watching the loyal knight order. Amber reminds Sirzate to remember the Duke is his master, to which he readily agrees. Amber explains she has other matters to handle and leaves the remaining military business to her husband. Looking at his wife with a steady gaze, the Duke tells her not to worry about the knights. Amber sits on a sofa across from Baron Ruppoldt in a grand, ornately decorated drawing room. Amber tells Baron Ruppoldt that manipulation through lies is wrong, and the stout man quickly agrees with her.
Amber mentions the sword to Randall, and the Baron confirms he procured it and gave it to the butler.
Amber notes the Baron's hard work, smiling while pointing out that his recent actions were not normal.
A nervous mumble sounding follows as Baron Ruppelt acknowledges the Duchess while sweating and looking quite strained.
Amber asks if there is anything else to report, causing the Baron to hesitate with a worried look.
Amber recalls the Count's business, remembering a past moment when she confronted someone for insulting a noble's daughter.
Looking utterly terrified, Baron Ruppelt cries out in disbelief as the Duchess brings up the sensitive topic.
Baron Ruppelt worries she forgot the matter, but Amber calmly reveals she has already received a reply.
The maid Jaina enters the room holding a letter, prompting Amber to call her name.
A close-up shot focuses on the sealed envelope bearing a mysterious and royal purple wax seal.
Baron Ruppelt looks down at the document with a shocked expression, his mouth hanging slightly open. Staring at the letter in total disbelief, the stout man wonders how such a thing was possible.
Baron Ruppelt asks the Duchess what she did to convince the Count to finally open his gates.
Amber smiles confidently, stating she decided to present the Count with the best gift he could ever receive.
Looking bewildered, Baron Ruppelt begins to repeat her words regarding the concept of the highest honor.
Baron Ruppelt asks if the Duchess is saying she will act as the chamberlain for the Count's daughter.
Narrative boxes explain the long-standing custom of married ladies acting as guides for other noble women. Amber explains that Count Zymo was worried about his daughter's debut and marrying her off for family benefit.
Baron Ruppelt asks if that is truly the deal, noting that the Count is a famous socialite.
Amber explains that since the Count's territory is strategic, his daughter's reputation will benefit in 2 different regions.
Baron Ruppelt stares in realization as he begins to understand the true intent behind Amber's plan.
Amber clarifies that she has decided to build a strong connection with a prestigious lady of the capital.
A sharp clink sounding follows as Baron Ruppelt repeats the mention of a prestigious lady in surprise.
Amber asks if she should explain further, but the chibi-style Baron quickly insists there is no need.
Baron Ruppelt sincerely thanks the Duchess, but she insists that since his curiosity is satisfied, he must do his part. Amber insists the Baron must make a formal apology, leaving him confused as to whom she means.
Looking stern, Amber declares that the Baron should make a sincere and formal apology to Count Zymo's daughter.
Baron Ruppelt protests the demand, claiming that he has already apologized to the family enough times. Amber notes that he only begged outside the Count's mansion, which does not count as a sincere apology.
Amber points out that the Baron only apologized to the Count and not the girl himself. Looking serious, the red-haired Duchess demands the man be completely honest with her. Amber asks if he would have apologized if the victim wasn't the Count's high-ranking guyer.
Amber declares she needs to see his final decision to understand his true character.
A firm grep sounding follows as the Baron wonders if the girl will even listen.
Amber insists that whether the apology is accepted or not, he is obligated to give it. Baron Ruppelt stands in stunned silence, his face pale as he processes the Duchess's demand. A soft bruck sounding accompanies the Baron's reluctant agreement as he finally accepts the condition.
The golden sunset casts long, dramatic shadows over the grand and ornate castle towers.
A steady Jalan sounding follows the stout man as he walks down the stone hallway.
A nervous Ressa sounding follows the Baron as he paces anxiously outside the tall doors.
Inside, the mustache Count Zymo expresses his surprise that the Duchess brought the Baron along.
Count Zymo explains his reasons for bringing the man and insists there is no other intent.
A rhythmic clop sounding follows as the black-haired Cecilia enters to greet her father.
Another quick clop sounding accompanies Cecilia as her father tells her to offer a greeting.
Bowing with her hand over her heart, Cecilia offers a formal greeting to the Duchess.
Amber returns the greeting and mentions she heard Cecilia had been working in the East.
Cecilia regrets not arriving sooner, but the red-haired Duchess tells her not to worry. A respectful Hormat sounding follows as Cecilia explains her inspection duties and thanks the Duchess.
Watching the black-haired girl, Amber thinks to herself that she is a very polite child. Cecilia remains composed and elegant, standing with a dignified posture amidst the shimmering light. Turning toward his guest, the mustached Count Zymo asks the Duchess what she thinks.
The Count boasts his daughter is worth displaying, but Amber finds the comment quite offensive.
Count Zymo notes his daughter decorated the room, which takes the red-haired Duchess by surprise.
The Count asks if his daughter's taste matches Western standards while showing off his sculptures. Looking at the decorations, the black-haired girl quietly states that the work is truly excellent.
A happy ooh sounding follows as Count Zymo expresses his relief at hearing the compliment. The Count tells Cecil she must listen to the Duchess to become a high-ranking madam.
Looking down with a somber expression, the black-haired girl obediently acknowledges her father's firm instructions.
Observing the young girl's reaction, Amber notes to herself that Cecilia does not look happy. Amber addresses the Chamberlain matter and mentions she heard Cecil wanted a proper, sincere apology. Cecil asks if the man is already there, and Amber offers to call him in.
Amber reflects that if the girl wants an apology, it must be delivered in person.
The red-haired Duchess looks at the girl with concern and asks if she is okay.
Looking determined, Cecilia confirms she is fine and is ready to face him for an apology.
Amber tells the maid she will call him in while the black-haired girl waits.
A loud clang sounding and a light tap sounding follow as the Baron peeks inside.
A rhythmic clop sounding follows as the Baron groans while finally entering the quiet room.
A sharp tuck sounding marks the moment Cecilia stops and stands her ground in silence.
Looking stern, Cecilia tells Baron Ruppelt to go ahead if he has something to say.